Chapter 41. New features of the system. Why did it fail? Blake gritted his teeth and asked. The system did not respond. Blake could only sigh. He focused his attention on the system panel. Although the system panel appeared, the UI interface was extremely simple. It was as if it was casually put together by a beginner programmer. Host: Blake Grindelwald. Awakened talent. Photogenic memory talent. Top-grade academic genius talent. Proficient subject. Beginner transformation proficiency. Beginner magic spell proficiency. Proficient skill. Top-grade cooking proficiency. Beginner brain seal proficiency. Proficient incantation. Top-grade weather spell proficiency. Applied template. Gandalf template. Great Druid template. Then there was nothing. Blake looked left and right on the system panel. He still could not find the so-called experience bar. This shouldn't be. If there's no experience bar, why are you rewarding me with experience? Blake looked at the extremely cheap interface again. Then he stretched out his finger in disbelief. I can't just click on that skill and then. His finger gently tapped on the beginner transformation talent. Then, there was a change in the system interface. An experience bar suddenly appeared below the beginner transformation proficiency. TSK. It actually needs to be selected to be displayed. The experience bar showed. He already had 1050 experience points. The distance to the next level. Intermediate transformation proficiency. And Blake gritted his teeth and counted the zeros behind it. 100,000 experience points? 100,000 experience points to advance from beginner to intermediate. Damn. However, when he thought about how a silver treasure chest had given him 1,000 experience points, thinking about it, 100,000 did not seem so unattainable. Furthermore, perhaps if he was lucky, it could also be like the top-grade weather spell proficiency. What if he opened the highest level directly? If that was the case, this kind of experience point that was exclusive to a certain skill was not cost-effective. How good would it be if it could become a free experience point that could be added to any skill? Blake sighed. He looked at the other rewards. Tisk, there's even one that automatically converts into experience. He already had a top-grade prophecy talent. Therefore, the advanced prophecy talent reward was replaced with exclusive EXP. Did that mean that there might be repeated rewards in the future? Proficiency in other basic subjects was already an old reward. Currently, the rewards for mastering a few basic subjects were the most cost-effective. The 5,000 gold coins. For the current Blake. It was also very useful. Although Dumbledore was rich. However, the pocket money given to him was also limited. As for the money he earned in the past, these days, he had also gone to Gringotts Bank to exchange for gold coins. But in the case of no income, it was easy to spend it all. It couldn't be helped. Blake wanted to raise many powerful magical animals. Many times, they had no choice but to burn money. Magical animals also needed to eat. Just buying meat to feed these guys would cost a lot of money. Fortunately, he didn't have any magical animals that could eat a lot. Therefore, the money he had saved up was enough for him to spend for a long time. However, the bronze treasure chest last time seemed to have yielded 50 gold coins. Now, a silver treasure chest could yield 5,000 gold coins? Perhaps it was still the same mechanism. Treasure chests of the same quality. The items that were opened might not necessarily be of the same quality. It should be this silver treasure chest that triggered a critical hit. Out of all the monetary rewards, the best one was given. Overall, these few silver treasure chests, Blake still felt that he had gained a lot. Especially the seed of the mutated devil's web. This was a good thing. He couldn't buy it even if he wanted to. This seed. The system actually gave it a description, which was rare. It gave a simple explanation. The devil's web planted by this seed. It was not afraid of light. And its fire resistance was very high. Although it still couldn't completely avoid the damage of fire. It wouldn't be scared away by the light. Well, I'll keep it first and plant it later. Blake thought and finally looked at the gold treasure chest. He was about to ask the system to open the chest. Suddenly, he remembered that his finger could click on the system's virtual screen. So, Blake stretched out a finger again. He clicked on the gold treasure chest. Ding! Blake was shocked to discover that he could actually choose that treasure chest. Afterward, what shocked Blake even more was, in the lower right corner of the system space, after the gold treasure chest was selected, a new word appeared in the lower right corner. Merge. Merge? Does it mean what I think it means? Blake asked with a trembling voice. But the system didn't answer. However, there was a small line of words next to the word, merge. 10 gold treasure chests can be combined into a diamond treasure chest. Didn't that mean that the silver treasure chest just now could also be combined into a gold treasure chest? Blake gasped a breath of cold air. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt that the world had become greedy. Furthermore, after he obtained the treasure chest in the future, should he save it and combine it into a higher level? Or should he open all of them? This was also a problem. Blake thought for a while. Although the beginner skills from the low-level treasure chests were not high-level, but it was enough for students. If he held back and combined it into a higher-level skill, although the reward would be better, but the items would also be lesser. Hence, Blake decided. He opened the bronze treasure chest directly. Then he changed it into a silver treasure chest. He opened the silver treasure chest directly. He waited until the beginner skills were almost all opened. He saved the silver treasure chests to combine them into a gold treasure chest, and so on and so forth. I'm so greedy. Blake let out an anguished wail. However, there were no treasure chests of other levels in the system space at the moment. Therefore, Blake was not sure how many treasure chests of the previous level were needed to combine the other treasure chests. After understanding the new function of the system, Blake, who was overjoyed, began to open the treasure chests. Gold treasure chest. Open. Ding. The system is opening the gold treasure chest. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a Supreme Grade Plant Collection Bag. A Supreme Grade Plant Collection Bag? Blake quickly skimmed through the description of the collection bag. He immediately became excited again. This bag could actually contain all kinds of plants, including all kinds of herbs, all kinds of magical plants. And in this bag, it wouldn't affect the normal growth of the plants. In other words, starting from today, I can carry a lot of plants with me? If I fight with others in the future, can I casually throw out a lot of biting Brussels sprouts? Wonderful! Furthermore, he could plant those dangerous plants in this bag. He didn't have to worry about Dumbledore discovering it. However, it was a pity. There were only 20 individual boxes in this bag. In other words, he could only carry 20 plants at most. Each plant occupied a box. They wouldn't interfere with each other. It seems that I can directly use the mutated devil net now. And the seeds that Cassandra sent me have to be planted. Chapter 42. Overwhelmed by letters. Blake thought of the seeds that Cassandra sent over. He took out the small cloth bag. He took out a piece of parchment. Then, he poured out all the seeds in the bag. These seeds were all mixed together. It was a big bag full of seeds. It seemed that Cassandra had casually put them in. She didn't have any idea of sorting them out. Blake looked at these messy seeds. He scratched his head. Although it was a little troublesome. But sorting the seeds was such a small matter. It was no longer difficult for the current Blake. But he still spent more than an hour. Only then did he sort these seeds out. After sorting them out, Blake counted them again. Mandrake seeds 50. Poisonous tentacle seeds 50. Devil's web seeds 50. China biter kale seeds 50. Bapalm tuber seeds 50. Poison tooth geraniums 50. Knot vine seeds 50. Ah! Blake originally thought that such a messy bag of seeds was casually stuffed in by Cassandra, but now it seemed that, if it was casually grabbed in, how could it be possible that there were 50 seeds of each kind? Then, Blake came up with such a scene in his mind. Cassandra rearranged the seeds that had been divided. Then, she stuffed them into the small cloth bag. At the same time she said fiercely, "Don't you know very well? Then you divide them yourself. You'll be exhausted." Cough cough. This was very Cassandra-like. It was clearly a gift that she had prepared, but she said that it was a casual gift. However, so many seeds that could be considered suspicious. Were there really a lot of them in her house? Worley Manor. Have you noticed? What? The seeds we bought back. What's wrong with the seeds? They seem to be a lot less. Really? Didn't you count them when you bought them? There were so many seeds, and you wanted me to count them one by one? That's not what I meant. Outside the window, a small figure quietly slipped away. Early the next morning, Max, cat. Blake threw a gold coin. Squeak. The sniffer dog, who had just been named Max by Blake, leaped up and agilely caught the gold coin. Then, it hurriedly stuffed the gold coin into its mouth. The little thing with shining eyes had no idea. It was put into its mouth. It was just a transfiguration gold coin. At the window, the eagle owl glanced at Max proudly, then turned his head in disdain. Last night, Blake had already picked out a few magical plants overnight. He planted them into the plant collection bag. The rest of the seeds were stored in the system storage. The planting method for the collection bag was also very simple. Just plant the seeds in the flower pot. Then, he just put the flower pot into the collection bag. The collection bag was only the size of an ordinary satchel, but it could hold a total of 20 plants. And it was the kind that didn't matter how big or small each plant was. Even if Blake wanted to plant a whacking willow in it, it wouldn't be a problem. The products of the system were worthy of being called the best. Blake thought. He would enter Hogwarts in the future. He had to see the whacking willow. Then, he would see if the whacking willow had any seeds or something. Just as Blake was having fun teasing Max, there was a knock on the door. Blake opened the door. Dumbledore was standing outside the door. "I have something to do now." Are you going to work again?" Dumbledore's heart softened. "But this is very important. I still have to go and see it personally to be at ease." Blake actually didn't care if Dumbledore went to work. So he asked casually, "What is it?" However, Dumbledore misunderstood his nonchalant look as disappointment. "Sigh, I said I would take good care of this child. But I don't have time to accompany him. I even took care of his food, clothing, and shelter. It was all the help of the house elves sent by that old guy Grindelwald." Thinking about it this way, Dumbledore couldn't help but feel guilty. "I'm going to see someone." "Who?" "A boy named Harry Potter. He might accompany you to school in the coming days." 4 Privet Drive. Dumbledore and Blake were sitting on a bench outside the house. Blake raised his right hand. He felt the illusory body spell that Dumbledore personally cast. This illusory body spell made him invisible too thoroughly. Even he couldn't see where his body was. Not to mention the passing muggles. Moreover, because Dumbledore secretly cast a small area of effect muggles banishing spell, no one else came to sit on this empty chair. Clung, clung, clung. The sound of nails hammering could be heard from 4 Privet Drive. Blake knew. This was Harry Potter's Uncle Vernon nailing the letter-receiving hole on the door with a hammer and nail. Sigh. What a poor child. Dumbledore sighed softly. We knew that the muggle couple might treat him badly. But we had to put him here in their care. That's because his aunt is the last blood relative he has left. He can only stay by his blood relative's side. Only the protective magic on him can work. On the way here, Dumbledore had already told Blake everything about Harry, even though Blake already knew about this. At this moment, an owl flew over. It had a letter in its mouth. This was Harry's admission letter. Hogwarts admission letter. Unless he received it in person. Or he wrote a letter refusing to go to Hogwarts. Otherwise, the letters would continue to be sent. The owl habitually threw the letter into the letter-receiving hole on the door. But Uncle Vernon had already nailed up the letter-receiving hole just now. Thud. The letter hit the door and fell out of the door. The owl looked at the letter in confusion. It didn't understand why it couldn't fit in. There too much. Blake stood up. What are you going to do? Dumbledore asked curiously. Didn't they not allow letters to be sent in? I'm going to send the letter in. Blake pulled out the wand made by Ollivander. He chanted a spell at the letter on the ground from afar. Dumbledore didn't stop Blake. After all, it wasn't an offensive spell. It was just a simple replication spell. Swish, swish, swish. The letter on the ground suddenly turned from 1 to 2, and then to 3. In an instant, the letter at the door turned into hundreds of letters. Blake waved his wand gently. The envelopes on the ground flew up automatically like a flock of pigeons. Then, he launched a general attack on 4 Privet Drive. Countless letters came through the window crack. From the door crack. From the chimney. They kept rushing inside. Ah! A woman's scream and a man's roar came from the room. Chapter 43. Dumbledore, did you see through my plan before it even started? Your spell skills have improved again. Dumbledore looked at Blake with admiration. But maybe he was a bit numb. He didn't have enough emotional fluctuations. Therefore, the system didn't prompt him about the treasure chest. I didn't buy the spellbook in Diagon Alley for nothing. Blake said proudly. He looked at number 4 Privet Drive, which was wailing like a ghost. So many letters have flown in. They can't stop Harry from reading the letters. Blake put away his wand and said. Dumbledore shook his head. I don't think Harry can read the letters. Actually, this family is worse than we thought. If I'm not wrong, Harry must have a lot of things he doesn't know. You can't expect muggles who won't even show Harry the letter to tell him the truth. Blake said. Then let's go tell Harry now. If we go together, even if Harry's aunt and uncle object, they can't stop us from telling Harry the truth, right? Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. Someone will tell him everything, Blake. I've sent someone I trust to do this. He's a good friend of Harry's parents. He was the one who brought Harry here. I think it's more appropriate for him to tell him the truth. A name flashed through Blake's mind. Dumbledore was probably talking about Rubeus Hagrid, although Hagrid was sometimes careless. He was indeed a trustworthy person. But, Professor, if you trust that person, then why are we here today? Ahem. Dumbledore smiled awkwardly. It's not that I don't trust him. It's just that I have something I want him to do. I need him to get something very important. So, I have to take a look secretly. Hearing this sentence, Blake's mind started to work again. Dumbledore said, that was something very important. It should be the Philosopher's Stone. Logically speaking, Dumbledore couldn't not know about Hagrid's careless personality, although he didn't make any mistakes in the original work. But there was a high chance that Hagrid would make a mistake. Why didn't Dumbledore go get the item himself? Even if he didn't go, he could have asked Professor McGonagall, or Professor Flitwick. He could have waited for a more reliable professor to get it. Why did he have to ask Hagrid to go? At the very least, Dumbledore was like he said. He definitely trusted Hagrid. Then why was he secretly following them and spying on them? Who was he monitoring? Did Dumbledore deliberately ask Hagrid to get the Philosopher's Stone? That was the only way to make someone feel at ease? Then, He secretly observed from the side to see who had bad intentions. Dumbledore smiled and asked, "You seem to have thought of a lot?" "I do have a lot of questions." Blake shrugged. "You just need to know that it's not that I don't trust Hagrid." I followed Hagrid quietly to observe him. Watch Hagrid. Observe who will be particularly interested in Hagrid and the others tomorrow. I've always had a feeling that that person isn't dead. Sure enough, Blake's eyes flashed with a hint of realization. If that was the case, everything made sense. The Philosopher's Stone was a bait, or a trap. At this time, there was only the half-dead Voldemort. He wanted the Philosopher's Stone the most. He needed the magic stone to revive himself. And at this time, Dumbledore should not know about the soul tool. He did not know that the current Voldemort could not be killed. So, his goal should be very clear. It was to use the magic stone, to lure out Voldemort who was not completely dead, and then kill him completely. Even if Voldemort was patient this time, he did not make a move. He would definitely plot against Dumbledore for the magic stone that he deliberately placed in Hogwarts. But, why did Dumbledore make such a plan? To let the savior, Harry Potter, come and clear the level? Blake suddenly thought of the prophecy that led to the beginning of the tragedy. Between the boy born at the end of July and the Black Devil, only one could live. In other words, one of them must be killed by the other. So, Blake thought of the original work. In the end, Harry relied on his own bloodline protection magic. He burned Professor Quirrell, who was possessed by Voldemort, alive. If Voldemort did not have a soul tool, if he had simply possessed Quirrell, then he would definitely be burned to death with Quirrell. In that case, this result would perfectly conform to the prophecy. The boy born at the end of July killed the Black Devil. Unfortunately, Voldemort had a soul tool. The soul tool was indestructible. He was indestructible. So Quirrell was dead. He was not dead either. Dumbledore's plan fell through. Blake looked at Dumbledore in shock. If he wasn't dizzy and overthinking, then Dumbledore's plan was really terrifying. He thought of this because he had a god's perspective. Dumbledore completely relied on himself. Even if he failed in the end, it was also not a fault of war. Dumbledore saw Blake's slightly shocked gaze. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Did you guess something again? You want to lure out the guy who is not completely dead and then eliminate future troubles?" Blake asked directly. "You really guessed it?" Dumbledore looked at Blake in shock. "My plan hasn't even started yet. You are really..." Dumbledore's eyes were filled with relief. Ding. Shock emotion detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a golden treasure chest. Hiss. Blake finally knew what was going on. His conjectures weren't because he thought too much. This was what Dumbledore thought. This time, he might have come out to confirm whether the enemy was still alive. If they were still alive, how did they survive? Where is he hiding? Only Dumbledore was hiding in the dark. Only then would he be able to observe everyone who was in contact with Hagrid. Blake remembered that Hagrid had just taken the Philosopher's Stone. Gringotts was invaded. It should have been around then. Dumbledore already knew that there was something wrong with Quirrell. Perhaps, when Quirrell broke into Gringotts, Dumbledore watched from the side. The reason why he didn't deal with him was because... This was because Dumbledore also believed in the prophecy. He wanted the savior, Harry Potter, to kill Voldemort. Chapter 44. Hagrid, Professor Dumbledore's grandson? I was just worried that you would be too bored at home alone. That's why I brought you out to relax. But I didn't expect. You completely understood my plan from just a few words. Dumbledore's tone was full of praise. He didn't know that Blake had a good perspective of the story. He only knew that Blake could actually do it with such limited information. He guessed most of his plan. This ability. Fortunately, he didn't become Grindelwald's sword. He had to find a way to keep him away from Grindelwald. I was just guessing. Blake said modestly. Don't be modest. Since you guessed it. Why don't? Dumbledore's eyes flashed with a hint of light. You can also go with Hagrid to pick up Harry. Yes, Hagrid is the person I'm talking about, the person I trust very much. I'm going too? Blake pointed at himself. What should I do when I go? Dumbledore smiled. Observe. Blake suddenly understood. Dumbledore wanted him to observe in the light, while Dumbledore continued to hide in the dark. With one in the light and one in the dark, he would naturally see more things. You can also take this opportunity to walk around Diagon Alley again. But you're not allowed to go to Nocturne Alley again. Ahem, okay. Blake remembered that there were still some things he hadn't bought before. Therefore, he gladly agreed to Dumbledore's suggestion. Of course, buying things was just in passing. In fact, he also wanted to meet the legendary character Harry Potter. This was a savior. How many treasure chests was he worth? Let's go, I'll take you to see Hagrid. Dumbledore glanced at the messy 4-privet drive. Then he stood up. He took Blake and left Privet Drive with phantom teleportation. Hagrid hadn't actually left yet. After all, it was only morning. He planned to use this little time. Prepare a birthday cake for little Harry. Yes, and make some other preparations. After all, he still had to help Dumbledore do something very important. Knock knock. Someone knocked on the wooden door. Hagrid quickly put down the cup in his hand. He quickly walked to the door. He opened the door. "Oh, Professor Dumbledore," Hagrid said somewhat guiltily. "I'll be leaving soon. I just wanted to make a birthday cake for little Harry." "I'm not here to rush you, Hagrid," Dumbledore said with a smile. "Oh, then please come in." Hagrid stood aside. The door, which was originally tightly blocked, was opened. Dumbledore walked into Hagrid's cabin. Then Hagrid was surprised. Behind Dumbledore was a little guy. Blake looked up at Hagrid. He had read a book before and knew that Hagrid was a hybrid giant. However, this was the first time he had seen such a tall person in real life. "Wow!" Blake exclaimed in surprise. Of course, exclaiming at this moment was also in line with the character that he was playing. As a Muggle-born child, of course, he had never seen such a giant. Professor Dumbledore, this is..." Hagrid looked at the little guy in surprise. Could it be that Dumbledore brought Harry over himself? But it didn't look like it. It didn't mean that little Harry's eyes were like Lily's. Were they green? This little guy's eyes were blue. He didn't look like Lily at all, but more like Professor Dumbledore. I recently found him. He's a child of the Dumbledore family," Dumbledore said. Blake looked at Dumbledore in surprise. He didn't expect Dumbledore to say it so bluntly. It seemed that Dumbledore trusted Hagrid a lot. Because of some special reasons, he can't change his surname back to Dumbledore. "So," Blake reached out his hand. "My name is Blake Green. You can call me Blake." "Blake. Oh, sorry, I thought it was another guy. Your name sound familiar. But that person is a bad guy. My name is Rubius Hagrid, but you can call me Hagrid." Hagrid reached out and shook Blake's hand. Blake felt that his entire arm was in Hagrid's hand. No wonder he was a hybrid giant. His hand was big. The guy that Hagrid just mentioned should be Sirius Black. No wonder Hagrid had such a big reaction to Blake. However, because after hearing that Blake was a member of the Dumbledore family, Hagrid was obviously much more enthusiastic about Blake. Hagrid invited everyone to sit down and brought a plate of rock cakes. It was said that this thing could be used as a hammer. Only the teeth of the hybrid giants could handle it. "Professor Dumbledore, do you have anything else to say this time?" "Oh no, I just want to ask you one more thing." "What is it? Just say it." "Well, I have some things to do these 2 days. Can you help me take care of this child?" Actually, he was just brought back to the wizard world from the Muggle orphanage. There are a lot of things that he doesn't understand, Dumbledore said and glanced at Blake. Blake immediately understood. "Yes, I just came from the Muggle world to the magic world. There are a lot of things that I don't understand. I wanted to ask Grandpa, but he's too busy." Dumbledore heard Blake, who kept calling him Professor. Blake suddenly called him Grandpa. He almost spat out the tea he drank. Fortunately, he held it in. But Blake was indeed a direct descendant of Dumbledore. Strictly speaking, it didn't matter if he called Dumbledore Grandpa or Father. There were no problems. Hagrid looked at Dumbledore in shock. He originally thought that Blake was just a branch member of the Dumbledore family. But now, what a guy! Professor Dumbledore had a descendant outside. And he only found it recently? His clever little brain immediately understood why he couldn't let little Blake change his surname back to Dumbledore. If word got out, it would definitely damage Dumbledore's reputation. Even the reputation of Hogwarts would be damaged. This was something that absolutely could not be spread out. But it was that serious. It was something that should be kept a secret. Professor Dumbledore actually told me. His trust in Dumbledore deepened. Hagrid burst into tears. "Don't worry, Professor Dumbledore. I'm going to pick up Harry anyway. I'll take good care of them. Furthermore, I will definitely not reveal his identity. You can trust me." Taking care of children. Taking care of one was the same as taking care of two. Hagrid looked at Blake with a gentle gaze. Crunch. Blake was holding a piece of rock cake and putting it in his mouth to test it. After seeing Hagrid's gaze, he actually bit off a piece of cake. After Dumbledore heard Hagrid's words, he knew that he was thinking the wrong way. But, forget it. So be it. Chapter 45. Can you talk to animals? Can it calm down the thunderstorm? Running Gorgon. Gotcha. Gotcha. Blake bit into the hard rock crust. It was like eating a biscuit. Blake knew that his physical fitness was a little ridiculously strong, but he didn't expect that even his teeth that had been strengthened. This rock cake. Not only could he bite it, he also felt that it was very enjoyable. At this moment, Dumbledore had already left. Hagrid asked Blake to wait in the house first. Then, they would set off together to pick up Harry. He looked at Hagrid's busy figure. Blake felt a little regretful. Hagrid looked so grateful just now, because the object of his gratitude was Dumbledore. So he didn't drop the treasure chest. After Blake finished the rock cake in his hand, he stood up. He watched Hagrid make another cake. Then, Blake couldn't stand it anymore. What was this? This was clearly the scene of a dark cuisine. I think you should put honey first. Ah, you should put more water in it. If you put less water, it will be very dry later. Listen to me, you can't go wrong. Yes, that's right. After working for a few hours, Hagrid looked at the exquisite big cake in front of him in shock. I made this. Of course, this is what you made. As Blake spoke, he was working on the big cake. He squeezed out the cream and wrote it in exquisite cursive. Happy birthday, Harry. Oh, this is the first time I've made such a beautiful cake. Ding. Detected the emotion of surprise. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Blake smiled and wiped his hands clean. He had just realized. It was very easy to earn treasure chests from Hagrid. Then, the two of them sat together and chatted. From delicacies to magical animals. From magical animals to magical plants. And then from magical plants to the Forbidden Forest. A day passed in the blink of an eye. Hagrid found that he really hit it off with this little guy. For example, he liked to cook delicacies. And also liked big, cute, ferocious animals. If Hagrid hadn't suddenly remembered that he still had a lot of things to do today, he would have almost taken Blake to the Forbidden Forest to play. At night, it was finally time for them to set off. Blake helped Hagrid put the cake into an exquisite box. And he also cast magic to strengthen the box. To avoid being squashed by Hagrid, I'm allowed to use magic today. But, I still have to go like this. I'm not very good at phantom translocation. Hagrid brought Blake to a fireplace. Blake didn't know that there was a fireplace in Hagrid's house that could use flue powder. This is a temporarily connected fireplace. It will be closed after today. Oh. You will know how to use it. 4 Privet. Hagrid looked at number 4 Privet Drive, which was completely dark. He scratched his head in confusion. I don't think I'm in the wrong place. Blake had to pretend that he hadn't been to this place, so he didn't tell Hagrid that the Dursleys had left. It seems that we have to wait. I'll write a letter to Professor McGonagall and ask her where Harry is now. Hogwarts always had a magical way to determine the location of the little wizards. For example, when Harry received his first admission letter, it was precisely in the cupboard of 4 Privet Drive. Maybe it won't be that troublesome. Blake saw Hagrid pull a lively owl out of his coat. He was going to write a letter. What do you have in mind? Well, just let the owl lead the way. It'll definitely know where Harry Potter is. Blake said. Hagrid shook his head. It can find Harry. But we can't catch up with the owl flying in the sky. And I can't just use that motorcycle. Hagrid mumbled the last sentence. It was a little vague. Then, let the owl fly a little slower? Blake said. Let the owl fly a little slower? But when the owl was delivering the letter, I let go of it and it flew away immediately. Even though we are wizards, they can't fully understand our words. Blake. And, even if they understand and lead the way for us, it's still too fast for us to walk. Hagrid shook his head, indicating that this method would not work. Owls could actually understand some of their wizards' words, but they could only understand the whole gist of it. However, something like flying slower and leading the way, they definitely had not tried this kind of business. And just as Hagrid said, even though they were all wizards, they did not like taking Muggles' transportation. They did not take flying brooms or anything like that. If they simply walked, they were no different from Muggles. Even if owls could lead the way, then they would still be walking too slowly. Taking a Muggle's car? You can't let a Muggle's taxi driver follow an owl, right? Then he must think you're crazy. Okay, then I'll just ask for the address directly. Blake spread out his hands. Huh. Hagrid was a little confused. Then, he took over the owl with its drooping feathers. A trace of almost undetectable green light appeared in his hand. It seeped into the owl's body. In the next second, the somewhat dispirited owl immediately became lively and energetic. Listen. Blake pressed down on the excited owl. Then he leaned close to its ear and said a few words. Then the owl flew up. After flying for a long time, the owl flew back again. It landed on Blake's arm. Caw caw caw. Blake nodded. Okay, I got it. Then Blake handed the owl back to Hagrid. Hagrid took the owl in a daze. Then he stuffed it back into his pocket. It told me where Harry is. You can really talk to it? Ding. Detected shock emotion. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Blake patted his chest and said, Don't worry. How could I ruin Grandpa's business? That's true. Then, let's take the Muggles bus now. Hagrid said as he began to prepare to rummage through his pockets. He planned to find some Muggle coins. But, since we're taking the bus, why do you still need to take the Muggles bus? Blake said as he pulled out his wand. He raised it up. Welcome to the night bus next time. Bang! Creak! Hoo! The conductor said. Then he disappeared from sight. Cough, cough, cough. Hagrid struggled to straighten his back. I don't want to take the night bus anymore. Very dizzy. At this time, Blake and Hagrid were standing on the shore. In their line of sight, a lonely island was hidden in the waves. At this moment, a clap of thunder came from the sky. Then came the pouring rain. Today was supposed to be a thunderstorm. However, he didn't expect that it had only stopped for a while. It started to rain again. Oh, what terrible weather. Hagrid opened his coat and pulled Blake inside to shield him from the rain. Is Harry on that island? That's right. This rain is a bit annoying. Yes, what terrible weather. But what can we do? Come on, let's think about how to get there. Blake said. There is still a way. As he spoke, he raised his wand again. What are you doing? Hagrid asked in surprise. Crack. A bolt of lightning shot out from Blake's wand. It shot directly into the rain clouds in the sky. The next second, the thunder subsided and the rain clouds dissipated. It wasn't that Blake was very capable. This was just some of the basic functions of his superb weather spell. If his weather mastery wasn't superb, he should be able to do this. But in Hagrid's eyes, ding, extremely shocked emotion was detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Chapter 46. Transform anywhere? Hagrid took a long time to recover from the shock, as expected of the Dumbledore family's child. Hagrid muttered, it's not that strange. I just have some skills. Blake said modestly, if you really have such skills, why don't you teach me? When the rain is about to flood my cabbages. I'll do it too. Forget it. After today, I can't use magic again. Why can't you use magic? Ahem. I think we should find a way to get there. Obviously, Hagrid didn't want to talk about how he was expelled. How are you going to get there? Blake asked. He remembered the original story. Hagrid flew there directly. So Blake was curious. He had such a big body. How could he fly there? I'm going to fly there, Hagrid said as expected. Wait for me here first. After I get Harry, we'll leave together. Blake asked curiously. Then why don't we go together? In fact, I can barely fly there by myself. If I bring another person, it's very dangerous. Hagrid said as he reached into his pocket for something. Blake felt that his pocket must be secretly enchanted. Otherwise, how could it be Hagrid stuffed it with so many things? Hagrid searched for a while before he pulled out a flying broom from his pocket. Blake thought of many possibilities. He didn't expect him to fly there with a broom. But, could this broom really carry his weight? This is a modified broom. It should be able to support me for a short glide. It can't grow any longer. That's why. I can't bring you with me. Squeak. Hagrid straddled the broom. The broom immediately groaned miserably. Ahem. It's okay. You go first. I can get there by myself. Blake said with a smile. Really? Don't try to be brave. It's safer for you to stay here and wait for me. Hagrid muttered. Then he gently stepped on the ground with his feet. Squeak, squeak. The broom made a sound that made one's teeth ache. Carrying Hagrid, the broom wobbled slightly and left the ground. Then he slowly flew toward the island. That speed was simply too horrible to watch. But, fortunately, overall, he was flying toward the island. Fortunately, the thunderstorm had been quelled by Blake. Or else, when Hagrid finally landed on the island, then he grabbed the broom. The tail of the broom was trembling. Hagrid glanced at it and stuffed it back into his pocket. Hagrid's eyes landed on the dilapidated house in the middle of the island. Flap, flap. A large bird landed beside Hagrid. Hagrid was so shocked that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. From a bird, it turned back into Blake. Blake shook his shoulders. Then he saw Hagrid's shocked expression. Ding. Detected the shock emotion. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Are you an animagus? Hagrid asked, looking at Blake in shock. If Blake was an animagus, then he would be the youngest animagus ever. What is an animagus? Your transformation. I don't know. This skill. I suddenly learned it when I woke up. Blake said. He wasn't afraid of his big druid skill at all. He would be exposed to Dumbledore and the others. Because Blake didn't need to explain too much. He was a life form born in a laboratory. He knew a special skill. Wasn't that normal? Do you know how many variables there are in an ordinary experiment? Not to mention biological experiments. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the broken wooden house was about to fall off from Hagrid's knocking. Who is it? Who's outside? I'm warning you. I have a gun. Hagrid glanced at Blake. Then he stretched out his palm. With a gentle push. Gotcha. Bang. The door fell down. Hagrid took the lead and squeezed in with difficulty. Can you give us a cup of hot tea? It's not easy to make such a long trip. Blake followed behind Hagrid. He walked into the broken house. The scene inside the house was similar to what he had imagined. A short and fat middle-aged man with a beard was holding a rifle in his hand. He was aiming at Hagrid. and a chubby boy and a woman with a sharp chin and a long neck were hiding behind him. Hagrid walked straight to the sofa and sat down. He saw the person sitting up on the chair next to him. The green-eyed boy was looking at him in surprise. "This is Harry," Hagrid said to Blake with a smile. "The last time I saw you, you were still a little kid." "Oh, you look so much like your father, but your eyes are like your mother's." Then Hagrid glanced at Blake again. Blake's eyes were like Dumbledore's. Aunt Petunia shouted in a sharp voice, "I want you to leave this place immediately, sir. This is trespassing on private property." "Oh, shut up, you big idiot," Hagrid said angrily. He was about to snatch the rifle, when he found that the rifle had flown up by itself. Then it fell into Blake's hands. Then, creak, Blake twisted it casually. The barrel of the gun turned into the shape of a twist. It was as if the gun was made of rubber. Ding. Detected 5 emotions of shock. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 bronze treasure chests, 1 silver treasure chest, 1 gold treasure chest. Everyone looked at the boy in shock. What kind of monster was this? Holding a gun? Blake scratched his head and threw the gun aside. In fact, he was just trying it out. He didn't expect his strength to be that great. "Oh, Blake, your strength is almost on par with mine," Hagrid said. After that, it went according to the original plot. Hagrid told Harry about his background. Then Hagrid expressed his shock at Harry's complete ignorance. Finally, he expressed his extreme dissatisfaction with Uncle Vernon's family. Blake didn't interrupt the whole time. He just silently made a fire and boiled the tea. Then, he took out some food from Hagrid's pocket that he had prepared during the day. He began to roast them. Blake's cooking. Even the simplest grilled sausage. It was also ridiculously fragrant. Harry's mouth was full of oil as he ate. He listened to the story of his past. In fact, he had never eaten such delicious sausages before. Other than his own background and the sorcerer world, he was also curious about this boy who didn't talk much. Are all wizards so strong? Then why am I always being bullied by Dudley? Not long after, just when Blake was about to fall asleep. "I will never spend money to let a crazy old man, a big fool, teach him magic," Uncle Vernon roared angrily. Hagrid wanted to grab him angrily, but his movements weren't as fast as Blake's. A magic wand, shining with silver light, was pulled out with a whoosh. "No one will insult Professor Dumbledore in front of me." Slash. Chapter 47. Harry. What? You say you are the worst one? A glaring electric light shot out from Blake's magic wand. It hit Dudley's body. Amidst the screams of Harry's Uncle Vernon and Aunt Penny, Dudley was successfully turned into a pig. Harry, who was sitting on the sofa and eating grilled sausages. When he saw this scene, his emerald green eyes were wide open. At this moment, there was only one emotion in his heart. It was 2F** king satisfying. 2F** king satisfying. Ding. 3 emotions of fear have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 bronze treasure chests. Ding. 2 emotions of relief and refreshment have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 silver treasure chests. Blake heard the system prompt. He retracted his magic wand in satisfaction. Then, Uncle Vernon and his family no longer dared to speak against Blake and Hagrid. Subsequently, Hagrid continued to talk to Harry about the wizarding world. Blake continued to paddle on the side. Of course, Uncle Vernon and his family were too scared. Every few minutes, they would give him a bronze treasure chest. Blake found it strange. He actually enjoyed the feeling of someone being afraid of him. This must be the work of Grindelwald's bloodline. I'm clearly a good child. Early the next morning, Blake removed the transformation spell for Dudley. From today onwards, Harry Potter is under my protection. Do you all understand? Uncle Vernon and his family nodded in horror. This little devil was simply too terrifying. Hagrid pulled the boat over. After receiving Harry, he couldn't use magic anymore, so he had to row back. Blake was the last to board the boat. Then he saw Harry's admiring eyes. Cough cough, don't look at me like that. Harry, you're not a girl. If you get bullied again in the future, just say my name. I'm your big brother, I'll definitely protect you. Blake patted Harry's shoulder like a big brother. Are all their little wizards in the world of wizarding as powerful as you? No, I'm the worst one. Hiss. Haha, don't listen to his nonsense, Harry. Other than him, who else in the world of wizards could be so powerful at a young age? Blake glanced unhappily at Hagrid, who had interrupted his looting of the treasure chest on Savior. After that, Blake and Harry became familiar with each other. Of course, Blake didn't come here just to meet Harry. He was going to be with Dumbledore. One was in the light while the other was in the dark. Observe those who approach Harry. Even though Blake knew who it was. But he still had to put on a good show. Blake spent another day with Harry and the others in Diagon Alley. At the same time, Blake also saw the person who spoke with a lisp. Professor Quirrell, who often trembled and smelled of garlic, came back. Unfortunately, He did not meet Cassandra and the others. This made Blake, who wanted to get a few more chests, slightly disappointed. In the evening, Blake received a letter. It was from Dumbledore. He told him that he could go back. Thus, Blake said goodbye to Hagrid and Harry. Then, he quietly went to a guest room in the Leaky Cauldron bar. In the room, Professor Dumbledore was already sitting on a chair. He saw Blake come in. Then, he poured Blake a cup of black tea with sugar in it. "You're a bit impulsive, Blake." Dumbledore sighed and said. Blake knew. This was referring to the incident where he impulsively turned Dudley into a pig. "Yes. But he insulted you. I'm very touched by your support, but we can't attack Muggles." "You're my father because he attacked Muggles. He was captured by the Ministry of Magic and sent to Azkaban, where he died of depression." "Why? If we're bullied by Muggles, we can only stand there and take a beating?" Blake was a bit unconvinced. This is also to protect the other innocent Muggles. Dumbledore sighed. At first, he was quite dissatisfied with this. That was why he was so aggressive. And with Grindelwald. "Let's not talk about this for now." Dumbledore took the initiative to change the topic. "You've been observing for a long time today. Who do you think is the most suspicious?" Blake said without hesitation. "Professor Quirrell. He's the most suspicious." "Why?" "I heard from Hagrid that he used to be smart and had excellent grades. But now, I don't believe that a person's personality would suddenly change just because he was scared by a vampire and an old witch. Unless he didn't meet a vampire at all, but something 100 times scarier than a vampire." Dumbledore's eyes were filled with admiration. "You're right, Blake. Quirrell does have a problem. Just during the day when you were shopping, he broke into Gringotts." After returning to Godric Valley, Dumbledore left in a hurry again. Blake returned to his room. He sorted out all the treasure chests today. Because of the bronze treasure chests. So Blake knew. 10 bronze treasure chests could be combined into 1 silver treasure chest. 10 silver treasure chests could be combined into 1 gold treasure chest. At the same time, 10 gold treasure chests could be combined into 1 diamond treasure chest. So, he combined the pile of bronze treasure chests that Uncle Phaeton's family dropped. He got 2 silver treasure chests. Therefore, he had 8 silver treasure chests. 3 gold treasure chests. Blake remembered the several exclusive experience points that day. He saw that there were already 8 silver treasure chests. Therefore, Blake decided to hoard the silver treasure chests first. He would farm 2 more and then combine the gold ones to open them. As for the 3 gold treasure chests that he already had, Blake opened them on the spot. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a random magical animal egg. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a mutated beating willow seed. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a supreme grade proficiency in the guardian spell. Chapter 48. Hermione, Cassandra. Who is she? Good stuff. Needless to say, the Wailing Willow and the mutated Devil's Web from the silver treasure chest were very strong. As for this magical animal egg, the system's description said, the hatching was random. It could just be a dandelion. It could also be a phoenix. It could even be a legendary mythical beast. What he could get depended on luck. Blake hesitated and decided not to hatch it for the time being. He decided to look for Snape to farm it later. See if he could get some blessing potions or something. Then he would make plans. As for the guardian spell, naturally, it was the treasure chest dropped by the savior. Summon the guardian spell. The tip of Blake's wand struck. An incomparably solid white phoenix soared into the sky. I have to see this thing. Whose child I am? It's obvious at a glance. Although Dumbledore was often very busy, Blake's life in Godric Valley was still very fulfilling. Time was quietly slipping away. On this day, Blake finally received the admission letter that belonged to him. At the same time, he also received many letters from others. The enclosed letters were all birthday gifts for him. Dumbledore secretly told them his birthday. That was why there was such a grand occasion of a large number of birthday gifts. This is also the reason why I haven't told you when your birthday is. I hope you'll like the surprise, Blake. Dumbledore walked in with a birthday cake. It had to be said that although Blake thought that his heart was stable, he still couldn't help but be moved by this scene. While Beck was busy cutting the cake, Blake opened everyone's gifts. Hermione gave him a pen. Because he had once told Hermione that he wasn't used to using a quill. Cassandra gave him a seed. Blake actually couldn't recognize it. Cassandra's letter was also very simple. Do you want to ask me what kind of seed this is? My answer is... guess. Blake sucked in a breath of cold air. As expected of you, Cassandra. Lady Marian used the owl provided by Dumbledore. She sent him a handmade scarf. She had learned about the existence of the wizarding world from Dumbledore. That was how she found out about Blake. He was in fact, a wizard. Penelope gave him a magic spellbook. Very Ravenclaw. Mr. Ollivander sent him a new manuscript. Hannah, on the other hand, sent him a recipe that she had researched. The most ridiculous one was Hagrid. He actually sent Blake a huge bundle of unicorn tail hair. This was simply inhumane. But he still wrote a letter. Because they were in a hurry, they didn't prepare any gifts. So, he casually went to the Forbidden Forest to borrow some from his friends. When Blake accepted the gift, he was speechless. It took a lot of effort. Only then did he manage to control his expression. Harry could only send Blake a box of candy. He had bought it in Diagon Alley. He promised in the letter that he would make up for it with a gift. That day, until late at night, Dumbledore rested. When Blake returned to his room, Beck then mysteriously handed Blake a notebook. This is what the old master asked Beck to give you in private. Blake looked at the notebook in his hand. He couldn't help but scratch his head. After all, the blood of Grindelwald flowed in his body. Therefore, in the end, Blake accepted the gift. However, when he opened the notebook, a line of words suddenly appeared on the blank page. Hello, Blake. This is the first time I'm talking to you. My name is Gellert Grindelwald. In the future, if you have any questions about things that are inconvenient for you to ask Dumbledore about, you can leave a message in this notebook. I'll be able to see it and reply to you right away. Also, keep this notebook well. Don't let Dumbledore see it. Blake's pupils suddenly shrank. Pa! The taxi door was closed. Blake was alone with a small suitcase. He appeared at the entrance of King's Cross Station. September 1st. This day had finally come. Platform 9 3/4. Blake remembered that it was behind a wall. He just needed to muster up the courage to rush forward. He could pass through that wall. Blake quickly found platform 9 3/4. Then the corner of his mouth rose slightly. Hermione was alone between the two platforms at this time. She was anxiously walking back and forth. Good day, Hermione. Long time no see. Blake readily greeted her. Oh, Blake, good day. Are you looking for a way to get to platform 9 3/4? It's very simple, as long as... Wait, tell me later. I can definitely find platform 9 3/4 by myself. Trust me, I'm about to find it. Hermione interrupted Blake's words. Then, she once again chanted various spells in the space between the two platforms. Blake was about to continue teasing her. Suddenly, a slightly arrogant voice came from behind. There's actually someone who doesn't even know how to find platform 9 3/4? Hermione's face suddenly sank. Such a sharp tongue? That must be. Blake turned around. Sure enough, Cassandra in a green dress was standing behind Blake. Hello, Cassandra. But please don't say that about my friend. We're not from a wizard family, so we don't know where the platform is. It's very normal. Blake had just finished speaking. He heard the two girls question him in unison. You know her. You know her. The air suddenly became quiet. The next second, they spoke in unison again. Who is she? Who is she? Chapter 49. It is just a seed. This is Cassandra Worley. This is Hermione Granger. You're all my friends. Blake calmly introduced the two girls. It was as if he didn't notice the tension at all. Humph. Cassandra glared at Blake. Then she walked through the wall of platform 9 3/4. Cassandra didn't know why she was so angry. Anyway, she saw Blake talking to that muggle girl. And he was smiling. She was very unhappy. Then she couldn't help but use her poisonous tongue. Bastard. He actually defended that girl in front of me. Ding. An angry emotion has been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Hermione saw Cassandra walk into platform 9 3/4. Her face was also gloomy. She had originally wanted to rely on herself to find the location of platform 9 3/4. But now, how can you be friends with such a person? She hurts people as soon as she opens her mouth. Hermione said indignantly. There's always diversity in people, Hermione. And you can't just take things at face value. Blake said calmly. Hermione gritted her teeth and looked at him. Humph. Stupid idiot. Ding. An angry emotion has been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. It was as if he had passed through a layer of water film. Blake only felt that his eyes were dazzled. They appeared in a bustling place. A crimson steam train. It stopped quietly beside the platform crowded with passengers. The crowd was bustling. Cats of various colors walked under people's feet. The buzz of people talking and the shrill hooting of owls mixed together. It was very lively. Blake glanced around. Let's go. Blake carried his suitcase and walked in the direction of the train. On the way, he saw a little boy with a round face. Grandma, I lost Toad again. A stern-looking old lady sighed. Sigh. Neville, you've got such a bad memory. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by people. He was holding a box in his hand. In the box, there was a ferocious spider leg. The children around him were so scared that they screamed. When he came to the door, Blake turned around. He saw Hermione struggling to carry her suitcase. She wanted to carry it onto the train, but the box seemed to be filled with books. It was very heavy. It was hard to push. It was difficult to lift it. Hermione used all her strength. She couldn't lift it even a little. She regretted letting her parents go back so early. Blake turned around and grabbed Hermione's suitcase. Then, he boarded the train. Hermione looked at Blake in shock. Such a heavy box. He was so relaxed that it was as if he was carrying an empty box. With one hand. Ding. Shock emotion detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. After Hermione came back to her senses, she quickly followed him. She just saw Blake lifting the suitcase with one hand. He stuffed it into the luggage rack. How are you so strong? Hermione asked in surprise. I was born with great strength, Blake said vaguely. The luggage was put away. The next thing was to find a carriage to sit in. But they were too late. Most of the carriages were already full. When he walked to a carriage at the back of the train, Blake saw a green silhouette inside. In the big carriage, only Cassandra was there. Blake opened the door. He asked with a smile, "Is there anyone else here?" Cassandra looked up. She saw Blake and Hermione behind him. "Yes, it's full. They'll be back soon," Cassandra said resolutely. Blake shrugged and was about to close the door. He and Hermione would find another carriage. However, just as Blake closed the door, "Wait." Cassandra glanced at Hermione behind Blake again. Then she said, "Come in. There's no one else in my carriage." Blake asked in confusion. "Didn't you just say there was someone?" "You heard wrong," Cassandra said fiercely. She didn't want to see Hermione, but she didn't know why. She thought that after she rejected them, Blake and Hermione would find a new empty carriage. Then the two of them stayed in the same carriage. She was even angrier. They might as well stay in this carriage. Blake didn't care about Cassandra's change in mood. He picked up his suitcase and entered the carriage. Hermione didn't want to come in. Stay in the same carriage as Cassandra? She would rather stand all the way to Hogwarts. But Blake actually went in. Just like Cassandra. Hermione didn't want to see Blake alone with Cassandra. So she walked in directly. Cassandra tilted her head as if she didn't see her. Blake sat down. Then he put the suitcase on the table. "Do you want a Coke?" Blake smiled and took out a large can of Coke from the suitcase. "No, that's not good for my teeth." Hermione shook her head. Cassandra glanced at her two front teeth. She let out a chuckle. Hermione immediately glared at her. "It's okay, I have other things here." As he spoke, Blake took out various drinks and snacks from the suitcase. There were drinks from the Muggle world and also from the Wizard world. There were all kinds of flavors. "How can you fit so many things in your suitcase?" Hermione looked at Blake's suitcase. She asked in surprise. "So many things. How could such a small suitcase fit all of them? Haven't you heard of the traceless stretch spell? TSK. Cassandra continued to use her poisonous tongue to accurately hit her enemy. Hermione looked at Cassandra angrily again. If she hadn't just come into contact with the wizard world, she wouldn't lose to this bad woman in knowledge. Tot. At this moment, the train's whistle sounded urgently. This meant that the train was about to leave. The parents on the train quickly got off. The little wizards who hadn't gotten on the train yet were herded onto the train by their parents. Many little wizards stuck half of their bodies out of the window. They waved goodbye to their families. Blake watched this scene quietly. Hermione saw the look in Blake's eyes. She thought he was sad because he didn't have any family to send him off. She didn't know that Blake had been adopted by Dumbledore. "I want to ask you a question about transformation," Hermione asked Blake thoughtfully. She wanted him to stop thinking about his family. Cassandra saw this. He also said, "I also want to ask you a question. The seed I gave you before, do you know what kind of seed it is?" "I haven't found out what kind of seed it is." Blake shook his head. "But I've already planted it, and it's starting to sprout now. Trust me, I'll know what kind of seed it is very soon." Blake smiled. There was a top-grade plant collection bag. No matter how difficult it was to plant the seeds, it could even germinate quickly in the collection bag. This was also the most amazing thing about this collection bag. But Cassandra didn't know that. She looked at Blake in shock. You can actually grow it? It even sprouted." Ding. Shock detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Hermione glanced at Cassandra with a strange look in her eyes. Wasn't it just a seed? What's so strange about growing it? Chapter 50. Malfoy. What? My goddess is only cold towards me? In fact, Hermione didn't know. Cassandra was actually teasing Blake on purpose. In fact, even her parents didn't know what kind of seed it was. They only knew that it was a rare seed given by a friend. They wanted to plant it, but they couldn't. It was like a small stone. Then her parents gave up. Then Cassandra knew that Blake liked strange seeds. So she picked it up. She washed it clean and sent it to Blake. But now, Blake actually told her? He managed to grow that thing. Blake also reacted. "Don't tell me you sent me a bad seed that can't be grown at all?" "No. At least now it proves that it's not a bad seed," Cassandra said guiltily. Blake secretly gritted his teeth. What did she mean by now? The top-grade plant collection bag was rewarded by the system. As long as it was a seed, it could be grown. The bad ones could also be nurtured back. No wonder before. It took so long for it to germinate. So it was you who did it. Tisk, naughty. Cassandra's face turned slightly red. Then don't go over. However, Cassandra had sent him so many rare seeds. This was a little trick. Blake didn't take it to heart at all. Then, can I see the seedling of that plant? After a while, Cassandra asked again. Cassandra also liked herbology. After knowing that the seed that even her parents couldn't grow sprouted, she didn't care about being angry. She really wanted to see the seedling. Of course. Blake reached into the suitcase again and fiddled with it. Then he took out a small flower pot. He placed it on the table in the carriage. In the middle of the flower pot, a fiery red seedling was quietly stretching its branches. Ah, it's grown a lot. Blake looked at the unknown plant with satisfaction. After all, other than nurturing it in the collection bag, normally, he would use his power as a great druid to activate it. Cassandra looked at Blake in surprise. Blake, you, how can you carry plants with you? She had thought that Blake would take out a photo for her. Or rather, he would invite her to see that plant in the future. She didn't expect him to carry it with him. How could plants grow in a bag? Cassandra's mind was full of big question marks. Could it be that this plant could only sprout when it couldn't see light? But she had tried to grow it in a dark room before. Didn't it not succeed? It's beautiful. Cassandra looked at the seedling and muttered to herself. While Cassandra was admiring the plant, Blake turned to Hermione. What did you not understand about transformation just now? Did you really see where Cassandra was? Yes, Draco, I did see her, Goyle replied stupidly. Then let's go. For Draco Malfoy. As a noble pure-blood family member, in the future, he would definitely marry another girl from a pure-blood family. So, his father, Lucius Malfoy. He had been telling him all the time that he should try to get close to Cassandra Worley, compared to Pansy Parkinson, who was not good-looking. Of course, he preferred Cassandra Worley, who was more beautiful. And Cassandra was still so good. Her bloodline was still so noble. Only such a girl would be worthy of the noble surname Malfoy in the future. Soon, they arrived at the carriage that Gower had mentioned. Malfoy straightened his clothes. Then he knocked on the carriage door. Come in. A pleasant boy's voice came from the carriage. Malfoy's smiling face suddenly froze. He glanced at Goyle. Didn't you say Cassandra was alone? Why is there a boy's voice? Goyle shook his head. He expressed that he had no idea what was going on. Malfoy opened the carriage door. Then he saw Blake. Cassandra and Hermione were sitting on either side of him. He seemed to be looking at something intently. Then Malfoy's jealousy flared up. Everything was afraid of comparison. Although Cassandra had been arrogant before, she still had her pride. She was cold and aloof. But Malfoy felt that this was the elegance of a pure-blood family. But now, there was no longer any coldness and arrogance on Cassandra's face. And what's with that look of surprise and admiration? Malfoy suddenly felt that she was an unattainable ice goddess. It collapsed with a loud crash. You. Ding. Extreme jealousy detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Blake was demonstrating the use of advanced shape-shifting to Hermione and Cassandra. He had only said it for Hermione. But Cassandra heard it. It was as if she was afraid that Hermione would learn it first. She immediately put the plant aside. She also came over to listen to Blake. Then Malfoy, who came in, saw it. Blake raised his head. He wanted to see who was so generous to give him a treasure chest. Then, he saw the classic trio in front of him. He immediately recognized who these three were. His face was pale, and he had a head of shiny blonde hair. It was Draco Malfoy. As for the people standing next to him, of course it was his two big stupid followers. Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle were here. At this moment, he looked at Cassandra with eyes full of disbelief. Malfoy. Cassandra raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly. Why are you here? Malfoy wanted to flip out. But he thought of his father's repeated orders. So, he barely suppressed the jealousy in his heart. Miss Worley, I wanted to invite you to our carriage. I think you should make friends with wizards from pure-blood families like us. Instead of. Malfoy looked at Blake, who was dressed plainly, and Hermione, who was obviously of Muggle origin. A trace of disdain flashed under his eyes. Cassandra had always found Draco Malfoy annoying. So annoying because no matter where she went, she always had a chance to meet him. Before school started, this guy often came to the Worley family's manor to annoy her. She wouldn't have thought of running to Diagon Alley every day. Then she met Blake, this freak, and was beaten black and blue. And she was also a proud person. Naturally, she couldn't stand Malfoy's arrogant tone. Her anger rose in an instant. Then, Malfoy was attacked. I don't think I need you to help me judge who I should make friends with. I have enough judgment on my own. So, you'd better go back to your own carriage. Also, don't bother me anymore. Chapter 51. Get cured after a beating, and beating after the cure. 1. In Cassandra's eyes, Draco was a person who bragged all day long. He would only talk about how great he was. But in fact, he was a good-for-nothing guy. What right did he have to criticize her for making friends? Even if Blake, whose talent ability suppressed her in all aspects, was a muggle, she wouldn't care so much. It was still the same sentence. Everything was afraid of comparison. As powerful as her talent ability, but compared to the humble Blake. Blake was more like the noble pure-blooded family member she had imagined him to be. Powerful and elegant. Never boastful. Hearing Cassandra's words, Malfoy only felt that his ego had been insulted. If Cassandra was still as arrogant and cold as before, then he could still tolerate it. But she was obviously only arrogant and cold to him. Why could that guy be looked at by Cassandra like that? How could he, who had always been arrogant, endure this? You, stand up. Malfoy pointed at Blake. Ding. Extreme jealousy and hatred have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Heh. You want me to get up? Blake leaned back. His hands were on the back of the chair. Of course, this action was usually fine. At most, he would be a little arrogant. But now, there were two girls sitting on his left and right. This scene was as if he was going to hug them on his left and right. Forget about Hermione. Cassandra was sitting on his right. What broke Malfoy's heart the most was, Cassandra just frowned. She didn't resist. She actually, no, crack. Malfoy felt his heart break. Ding. Extreme anger and jealousy have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Blake heard the system beep. His eyes were about to disappear from his smile. Young Master Malfoy was so generous. How many gold chests were there? However, Blake's smile. In Malfoy's eyes. What was the difference between this and extreme provocation? Get up. I want Cassandra to know what kind of friend she has. Blake still maintained this posture. His tone was full of indifference. Hee, if I get up just because you tell me to, wouldn't I lose face? Crab. Goyle. The angry young Master Malfoy directly chose to close the door and let the dog out. Malfoy, what are you doing? Cassandra said angrily. This guy actually wanted to make a move in her carriage. Was there any elegance in a pure-blood family? Strictly speaking, this was the most advanced carriage. This was her territory for the time being. So Blake belonged there. Was Malfoy going to hit her friend and guest on her turf? How could Cassandra hold back? Whoosh! Although she pulled out her wand very quickly, but Blake's movements were even faster. By the time Cassandra pulled out her wand, Blake already had one in each hand. He pressed Crabbe's and Gower's heads on the table. Just how strong was Blake? Hermione wondered. She could see the indentations on the table, and Goyle and Crabbe, who were rolling their eyes. She knew that the two of them would be seriously injured even if they didn't die. Blake was in big trouble. You. Malfoy was also shocked by Blake. This guy didn't use any magic. Just like that, he pinned down his two tall and strong lackeys. How could he be so strong? He looked at the two underlings' eyes rolling up, and the blood that slowly flowed out. Malfoy was scared out of his wits. You killed them? You'll be thrown into Azkaban. Cassandra also looked at Blake in shock. She didn't expect Blake to be so heavy-handed. After Blake heard the prompt of 3 gold treasure chests in his mind. Then, he grabbed the two fellows. Don't accuse me, look carefully. They're not hurt at all. How could I be thrown into Azkaban? Malfoy looked at Gower and Crabbe in shock. He saw their foreheads that were covered in blood just now. Now they were clean and bright. They were not hurt at all. Even the blood was gone. Goyle even scratched his butt in confusion. The dent on the table also disappeared. It was as if everything that happened just now was just an illusion. But why did he still remember that it hurt so much? What's going on? Malfoy rubbed his eyes in horror. What magic did you cast on me? Cast magic on you? No. Then Goyle and Crabbe were pressed there by Blake again. Their faces were covered in blood again. But when Malfoy wanted to curse again, Blake pulled the two of them up again. The wounds on Crabbe's and Gower's foreheads. And the wounds on the table magically disappeared again. What's going on? Ding. Detected an emotion of panic and confusion. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Malfoy once again gave Blake a treasure chest. As for Goyle and Crabbe, these two guys didn't even stay awake for more than 30 seconds. This was because Blake had repeatedly pressed their heads against the table just like that. Then they recovered again. They were stunned. How could they still have any emotions to explode? Ding. The target's treasure chest drop today has reached the upper limit. Ding. The target will not drop a treasure chest today. Blake heard that Malfoy's treasure chest had reached the upper limit. Only then did he leave poor Crabbe and Goyle on the ground. At this time, the injuries on their foreheads and concussions disappeared again. But, although the injuries disappeared, however, The pain they had just experienced was still etched in their hearts. When Blake didn't hit them again, after their minds gradually returned, they looked at Blake as if they had seen a demon. Ding. 2 extremely frightened emotions have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 bronze treasure chests. Chapter 52. Get cured after a beating and beating after the cure? 2. Hiss. Why are these 2 so weak? 2 bronze treasure chests dropped from extreme panic? Blake finally stood up. He approached Malfoy step by step. Because the scene just now was too horrifying. It made Malfoy's liver and guts break. How could he remember the little bit of jealousy in his heart just now? It was too demonic. If it weren't for the trace of blood on Blake's hand, he would have thought that what happened just now was just an illusion. So when he saw Blake approaching, Malfoy also retreated step by step until he leaned against the door. There was no way out. Do you want to know why? Blake said softly after getting close to Malfoy. I. Malfoy nodded. Then he quickly shook his head. You. Don't hurt me. My father is the school director. If you hurt me, I promise you will be expelled. Blake smiled. Oh, is that so? Then, what reason are you going to use to expel me? Because I hit you? But you don't have any injuries on your bodies. You don't have any evidence to prove that I hit you. Malfoy panicked. This. Draco stuttered. Blake gently raised his hand. The trace of blood on the back of the handle was gently wiped on his collar. So, don't mess with me. Otherwise, I'll beat you up hard, heal you after I beat you up, and beat you again after I heal you. I promise, I'll control my strength well. Under my healing spell, those external wounds of yours, you won't even find a trace after that. Malfoy was scared silly. This person was too scary. He had seen what happened to Goyle and Crabbe just now. Beat them up and then heal them? Heal them and then beat them up? It was too King demonic. And Blake seemed to be born with indifference. A murderous expression. The pressure was too great. Malfoy finally couldn't withstand the pressure. He ran out of the carriage like crazy. Crabbe and Goyle were lying on the ground. They also quickly followed Malfoy out of the carriage. Blake waved his hand behind them. Goodbye. You're welcome to come again next time. Then Blake closed the door. When he turned around, he saw 2 different gazes. Can you really heal them immediately after injuring them? Cassandra asked. Of course. I haven't been idle at home these days. You know, during the time I was at home waiting for school to start. After all, he had studied the incantations for healing wounds. In the future, he would raise large animals and all kinds of dangerous plants. Injuries were unavoidable. So healing spells were essential. And the great druid's talent seemed to be a great bonus to healing spells. Therefore, the speed at which he learned the healing spells was extremely fast. From the beginning, he had to chant the spell heal as before. Later on, he could cast spells without a spell or a staff. And the effect was getting better and better. He actually succeeded in just half a month. This spell was actually used by him. He did not rely on the system. From basic mastery to intermediate mastery. This was the first spell that he had mastered by himself. Cassandra was speechless. This guy had only practiced incantations at home for less than a month. To train the healing curse to such an extent. Blake's healing effect. None of them were as good as his incantations. Alright? And Cassandra's focus. It was different. Hermione was worried that Blake would be expelled. Did you hear that? His father is a school board member. What should we do? You will be fired. Cassandra shook her head. It was rare that she didn't have a poisonous tongue. No. Malfoy might take revenge on others and expel them. But he won't. What a joke. She heard a piece of news from her father. Dumbledore had adopted a boy. Cassandra thought of Diagon Alley. Dumbledore's concern for Blake. Was there a need to guess who Dumbledore adopted? So, if Dumbledore was here, and there was concrete evidence, that proved that Blake hit someone, it was not so easy for Lucius Malfoy to touch him. What's more, Malfoy and the others had no evidence at all. You said that mind extraction reads memories? Sorry. He was the best master of mind extraction. It was Dumbledore himself. Would he expel Blake? You must still be dreaming. Hermione did not know this. She was still worried. Cassandra suddenly laughed. Because she thought of another way to attack her enemy. Don't you know Dumbledore's relationship with him? Didn't he tell you? Hermione looked at Blake with a dangerous gaze. What do you mean? That's right. Even that girl knows about it. Only I don't know. Only you didn't tell me? I was so worried about you. Stupid fool. Ding. Anger detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Blake glanced at Cassandra. Ha, naughty. But, do you think I can't do anything? Blake looked at Cassandra with a surprised expression. You know. But how did you know? I don't remember telling you. Now that you know, then please keep it a secret. Although Professor Dumbledore has adopted me, but he intends to keep it a secret. Hermione looked at Blake in shock. You were adopted by Professor Dumbledore. When did this happen? She found that she was too loud. She hurriedly covered her mouth. Not long after the hidden monster incident, Blake replied. She saw that her attack was diffused with just a few words. Cassandra glared at Blake fiercely. Ding. One emotion of shock and one emotion of anger were detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 silver treasure chests. Blake sat down happily. The two of them stayed together to get the treasure chests. It was really efficient. A blessing was just sent to the door. In just half a day, he got so many treasure chests. How wonderful. The train was still moving forward. It was almost noon. A middle-aged witch was pushing a cart full of snacks. She knocked on Blake's carriage. Dear, do you need anything? Of course. Blake's stock immediately ran out. Although he also brought a lot of snacks. But most of them were from the Muggle world. Snacks from the Wizard world. He didn't buy much last time. This time, he couldn't give up this opportunity to taste it. Blake was fond of delicious food, especially desserts. He liked them very much. Not long after, Blake bought 15 silver cocoa and 8 copper nats. He came back with a lot of snacks. What's more, flavored beans. Super bubblegum for bragging. Chocolate frog. Eat. Blake put the things on the table. Then he happily opened a rock cake. Hermione didn't eat many snacks from the Wizard world. Therefore, she picked up a chocolate frog without hesitation. Just as Cassandra picked up a piece of pumpkin pie reservedly. Suddenly, there was a burst of crying outside. And a burst of exclamations. No, Trevor. Run, Trevor. Oh, God, what a big spider. But why did it become so big? Lee Jordan, catch your spider. Damn it. Fred, George, you two bastards. Oh, did he catch the poor toad? Trevor is dead. Chapter 53. A wand smashed it over. Sorting ceremony. 1. Trevor. Blake suddenly remembered when he just got on the train. The round-faced boy he met. Neville Longbottom. The swordmaster at this time. His talent had not been fully developed. He was still a stupid little boy. Listening to the exclamations outside, it seemed that Neville's toad was caught by a spider. And it was the one that Lee Jordan put in the box before? Blake quickly stood up. He opened the door of the carriage. Outside the carriage, many little wizards opened the door of the carriage to watch the fun. And Neville fell on the aisle. He looked at a big spider in the distance in despair. That big spider was as big as a basketball. At this time, it was frantically pulling a piece of spider silk. It was dragging it to its side. Its 2 thick chelicerae were frantically knocking each other. And on the other side of the spider silk, it was a toad that was tied up like a dumpling. A poor toad. What the hell? Blake remembered when he didn't get on the train just now. The spider leg he saw. It didn't seem that big. How did it become so big after a while? Shouldn't this be a substitute spider? Why was it so aggressive? Blake took a closer look. With his elementary mastery of magical animals, only then did he see it clearly. This thing was not a substitute spider that was not aggressive at all. It was an 8-eyed giant spider. It was the same as the one that Hagrid raised when he was in school. It was different from a substitute spider. This thing could even eat people. Because the legs of a substitute spider were similar to those of an 8-eyed giant spider. And before he got on the train, Blake just glanced at the spider leg. He didn't pay much attention to it. That was why he didn't recognize it. Now he saw its whole body. Only then did he recognize this guy as a partner of justice. Of course, Blake wouldn't just watch Trevor be eaten by the 8-eyed giant spider. Hence, Blake rushed forward. He pulled out his mithril wand. Hey, spells don't seem to work on it. Be careful. It's very fast. The young wizards reminded him one after another. The giant 8-eyed spider was immune to a portion of the spell attacks. As for the spells released by these little sorcerers, the power was too weak. The attack landed on the 8-eyed giant spider. It was like scratching an itch for him. At this moment, Blake rushed forward. Suddenly, he jumped up. He raised his wand high. Everyone saw how powerful Blake was. Therefore, almost everyone thought that he was going to cast a powerful curse. However, he only heard clang. A metallic sound rang out. The 8-eyed spider immediately stopped moving. All 8 of its eyes stared at Blake for a second. Then all of them turned white. With a plop, he fell to the ground. There was complete silence in the carriage. No one had expected this. Blake was actually using his own wand. The 8-eyed giant spider was knocked down by a blow from the stick. Blake put away his wand. Then he realized that the surroundings were silent. He shrugged and pointed at the giant 8-eyed spider. Damn! The silent carriage immediately became lively. Damn, the wand can be used like this? Yeah. I've studied magic for so many years. I didn't know that the wand could be used to smash things. Didn't you notice? His wand seems to be made of metal. It's true. No wonder it's so accurate. Did you notice? He's so handsome. Yeah, This junior is indeed very good-looking. He's my cup of tea. Wow, look at his eyes. They're as blue as Professor Dumbledore's. These words made the two girls behind Blake grit their teeth. Blake smiled and picked up the giant eight-eyed spider. He was happy, of course, not because of everyone's praise, but because, at this moment, the system's prompt sounded continuously. Ding. Detected shock. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a bronze treasure chest. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. A lot of treasure chests were crazily entering his account. This wave could be considered a real harvest, although there were more bronze treasure chests. However, after unlocking the merging function, no matter what quality the treasure chest was, Blake didn't refuse any of them. Cough, cough. Blake coughed softly twice. Then he asked loudly, "Whose spider is this?" Lee Jordan scratched his head and walked over. This is mine. It's all Fred's fault. He used a swelling spell, and this spider went out of control. Lee Jordan was also scared of such a thing happening. He was reasonable. If this spider only ate a toad, it would be fine. At most, he would compensate him with a pet. But if it hurt someone, he would most likely be expelled. "Senior, where did you get this spider?" Lee Jordan answered honestly. "Before my summer vacation. I caught it near the Forbidden Forest. Then I used it to scare people." "I didn't expect." Blake immediately understood. He must be one of Aragog's great-grandsons of God knows how many generations. The young eight-eyed giant spider didn't have much fighting power, but it also had a strong toxicity. He really didn't know if Lee Jordan was lucky or unlucky. But the target of this thing's attack wasn't Trevor. It was some little wizard. "Then, do you still want this spider?" No. Lee Jordan waved his hand. "Then leave it to me. I know Hagrid. He can deal with this kind of creature." Blake replied, patting his chest. "Really? That's great." Lee Jordan said happily. Ding. Detected gratitude. Ding. Reward. 1 silver chest. This spider was a hot potato right now. Now someone said he could help him deal with it. Of course, he completely agreed. "Hello. My name is Lee Jordan. What's your name?" "My name is Blake Green. You can call me Blake." Chapter 54. A wand smashed it over. Sorting ceremony. 2. Hello, Blake. If you need help in the future, just call me. Lee Jordan said his goodbyes and left. Looking in his direction. He should be looking for a fight with the Weasley twins. Thank you. Neville hugged Trevor, who was still rolling his eyes because of the spider web. He looked at Blake with tears of gratitude. "You're welcome. I'm Blake Green." "Hello, my name is Neville Longbottom. Let's meet again in the future," Blake said and gently tapped Trevor's body. Then Raffles' silk was immediately loosened. Only now did Raffles croak. Only then did Neville realize. If Blake hadn't unraveled the spider web in time, just now, Trevor was almost strangled to death. "Thank you, Blake." "You're welcome." After Neville contributed 2 silver treasure chests that were generated from gratitude, Blake turned around. Under the amazed gazes of the crowd, he carried the spider back to the carriage. Hermione looked at the ferocious creature with disdain. Blake actually dared to grab it like that? What if he suddenly woke up? Cassandra looked at the spider in fear. "You, take it away." Are you afraid of spiders?" Hey, do you want to have a look?" "Go away." Blake was just trying to scare Cassandra. He didn't go overboard. Subsequently, he took a cake box. Then he pulled out his wand and tapped it gently. The cake box suddenly twisted and turned into a solid metal cage. Blake threw the heavily unconscious spider into the cave. It seemed that Fred or George's swell curse had failed. The young giant eight-eyed spider that was the size of a basketball. It shrank to the size of a teapot. This was its original size. What are you going to do with it? Who's that person called Hagrid? After the spider was put in the cage, Hermione dared to take a closer look. Hagrid is a gamekeeper at Hogwarts. Believe me, he's seen a lot of this kind of animal. But, Hermione suddenly stared at Blake. "Don't tell me you want to raise it yourself?" Blake chuckled. Not to mention that he was extremely interested in these things. Let's talk about the venom of the giant eight-eyed spider. A pint of the giant eight-eyed spider's venom. It was worth 100 gold coins. The reason why the venom of the giant eight-eyed spider was so expensive. It was because the giant eight-eyed spider was extremely ferocious. Trying to get the venom from a living giant eight-eyed spider. It was almost impossible. Just think about Aragog's size and you'll know how difficult it was. But, Blake was a great druid. As long as he tamed this giant eight-eyed spider, then naturally he could get the venom alive. Such a spider could be used as a battle pet. A treasure that could lay golden eggs. Do you want him to hand it over? Blake expressed. No way. You're raising such a dangerous animal. If you're found out, you'll be fired. Hermione said nervously. Oh, it's okay. I'll hand it over to Hagrid, Blake said. On magical animals. He and I have the same aesthetic standards. He'll agree to help me take care of it. The most important thing was, give it to Hagrid to help him take care of it. He didn't have to pay for the feed. How wonderful. Rip. Hermione was so scared that she fell on the sofa. The giant 8-eyed spider in the cage had woken up. Its 8 eyes stared at Blake. Its 2 thick chelicerae were frantically tearing the cage. The cage that Blake transformed into. Was it compatible? Was easily torn apart? What should we do? Can your cage hold up? Hermione asked worriedly. Cassandra, who was sitting far away, heard Hermione's words. She was so scared that she shivered. Then she quietly glanced over here. Don't worry. Saying that, Blake stretched out a palm. He put it in the cage. The 8-eyed giant spider immediately settled down. A steady stream of druid magic was passed through the cage by him. It was poured into the body of the 8-eyed giant spider. Then, the 8-eyed giant spider's injuries were rapidly recovering. And at the same time, its 8 eyes. Fierce and violent eyes. It is becoming clear quickly. Finally, this young 8-eyed giant spider was officially tamed by Blake. At this moment, this 8-eyed giant spider was completely obedient to Blake's orders. Under the influence of the Archdruid template, Blake could even observe the surrounding environment through its vision. Originally, Blake wanted to let this 8-eyed giant spider out for a stroll. But in the end, he gave up this tempting idea. In case Hermione and Cassandra were scared, that would be bad. Blake took the 8-eyed giant spider that had quieted down. He stuffed it into his suitcase. After that, there weren't many things that happened. However, because of what Blake did just now, Blake's other friends knew his location. Senior Penelope came over to talk to Blake, and curiously looked at the spider that Blake put away. Hannah was pacing back and forth outside the carriage. She was caught by Blake. Obviously, she didn't dare to come in before. After they all said goodbye and left, Hermione said slowly, "So they are friends you met in Diagon Alley." "They are all girls?" Yes. Blake exclaimed. And there were exactly 4 hours. 1 for each house. What right? Get out. We have to change our clothes. Cassandra kicked Blake out with a dark face. 5 more minutes. The train is about to arrive at Hogwarts. Please leave your luggage on the train. We will send it to school for you. The loud voice echoed in the train. The train finally slowed down. Finally it stopped. Blake leaned on his suitcase. He tapped it lightly with his wand. Then, the patterns on the suitcase suddenly seemed to come to life. It firmly locked the suitcase. Apart from him, no one else could open his suitcase. Blake left his suitcase on the train. Then, he followed the crowd to the door. He could feel Cassandra and Hermione behind him. After he got out of the train, Blake felt a chill. As expected of England. It was only in September. He could already feel the cold. Freshman, come over here. Harry, come over here. Are you okay? Hagrid shouted in a loud voice. Look, that's Hagrid. My friend. Blake said to Hermione. It was the first time Hermione had seen such a huge person. She looked up at Hagrid. She was shocked. Hey, Blake, how have you been? Very good. When are we going to have a barbecue? Okay, I'll wait for you after class tomorrow. Blake made an appointment with Hagrid. Harry actually wanted to say hello to Blake. Unfortunately, there were too many people. He was not as tall as Hagrid. He could shout across so many people. Okay, come on, freshman, come over here. Be careful of your feet. Blake sat in the boat in high spirits. Everyone was on the same boat as him. Except for Hermione and Cassandra. It was the shy Hannah. Which house do you want to be assigned to? Blake suddenly asked. Of course, it's Slytherin. Cassandra said. Slytherin is elegant, witty, and ambitious. I'm not going to Slytherin. Hermione directly interrupted Cassandra. I've checked. Slytherin has a lot of bad magi are from Slytherin. If it were me, I'd go to Gryffindor. Professor Dumbledore is from Gryffindor. Blake, don't you want to go? Cassandra said angrily. Blake is so talented, he must go to Slytherin. Go to Gryffindor. Go to Slytherin. Blake ignored the two and turned to look at Hannah. What about you? Hannah? Which house do you want to go to? My father is from Hufflepuff, so. Oh. What about you? Which house do you want to go to? Cassandra asked. Chapter 55. What? Newt is also Blake's daddy? 1. Following Cassandra's question, the 3 of them all quieted down. They seemed to want to know Blake's answer. I don't care. I'll go wherever I will have to go. Blake raised his arm and rested it on the back of his head. It won't affect my ability to become stronger anyway. Blake decided. His brain seal technique only sealed part of his memory. It was about the system, as well as the memories and thoughts of the transmigrator. The rest, he would let the sorting hat analyze it for himself. During the holidays, He had specially trained in the brain seal technique. He had mastered the beginner brain seal technique. He had pulled it close to the level of the intermediate brain seal technique. He was only one step away from breaking through to the intermediate brain seal technique. He had done so much. It was a countermeasure to deal with the sorting hat. Logically speaking, there should be no problem. However, what if the sorting hat broke his brain seal technique? It saw through his identity as a transmigrator. It didn't matter. He didn't have the ideal of ruling the world anyway. Dumbledore probably wouldn't do anything to him. You can definitely enter Slytherin, Cassandra said with certainty. I think Blake will enter Gryffindor. Hermione remembered before, when Blake was fighting the hidden monster alone. The courage he showed. Wasn't that what Gryffindor advocated? Hannah glanced at Blake. She didn't dare to speak. Hufflepuff had always been said to be a school for good-for-nothings. Blake definitely wouldn't come to Hufflepuff. It's not a big problem. Anywhere is fine, Blake said softly. The small boat didn't need to be rowed. Instead, it automatically drove forward. Looking at the castle hidden in the thick fog that was gradually approaching, Hannah's body began to tremble. What's wrong? Blake asked. I heard from the red-haired boy over there that the way to enter the school is to fight with monsters. But I don't know any attack magic, Hannah said with a depressed face. At the same time, Cassandra and Hermione's bodies also froze. It was a Hogwarts tradition. Didn't they tell the freshmen how to be sorted? Even Cassandra. Her parents hadn't told her what the sorting test was like when she was young. Blake smiled and said, It's not that serious. You saw so many seniors on the train. Right. If the sorting test is so dangerous, why didn't you see one or two missing arms or legs? Don't worry, there is absolutely no danger in the sorting ceremony. Seeing Blake was so sure, the three girls secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The boat swayed through a dark tunnel. It seemed to have come to the castle's underground. They soon arrived at a place that looked like an underground pier. Behind the pier, it was a long way. The path was paved with gravel and cobblestones. After everyone got off the boat, they followed Hagrid and began to climb up. Under the silver shadow of the castle, on a flat and damp grassland, there was a flight of stone steps. Everyone walked up the stone steps. They gathered in front of a large oak door. Hagrid saw that everyone had arrived, so he came to the door. He raised his fist as big as a casserole. He knocked 3 times on the castle's door. The door opened. A tall black-haired witch in an emerald-green robe stood in front of the door. Her expression was solemn. She glanced around at this year's freshmen. Blake felt her gaze pause on his body. Then she began the handover from Hagrid. After the handover, she led everyone into a wide foyer. Welcome to Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall began the routine introduction of the school, as well as the rules in the school. After a long speech, Professor McGonagall asked everyone to pay attention to their neatness. Then she left the little wizards in the foyer, except for Blake. They all looked anxious and uneasy. No one knew what was going to happen next. Hannah's face was pale. Hermione was reciting an incantation. Cassandra held her little hand tightly, as the ghosts suddenly rushed out. After greeting the young wizards with a slightly shocked expression, Greem said, Greem, you're right. Everyone began to line up to enter the hall. The sorting ceremony had finally begun. Blake's gaze fell on Dumbledore, who was sitting in the main seat. After Dumbledore saw him, he smiled slightly. At the same time, he was guessing in his heart. Which house would Blake be assigned to? According to that part of his bloodline, Blake had a high chance. He would be assigned to Gryffindor. B. He also had a part of Grindelwald's bloodline, according to Grindelwald's personality, even though he had never studied at Hogwarts. But if Grindelwald came, he would definitely be assigned to Slytherin. Then, which house will Blake be assigned to in the end? In fact, in theory, Blake's house was the weakest. It would definitely be either Slytherin or Gryffindor. And to a certain extent, in Gryffindor, the child might be a little more like Dumbledore. And if he went to Slytherin, the child would be a little more like Grindelwald. Although Dumbledore looked calm on the surface, his heart was full of expectations. Compared to Grindelwald's ambitious appearance, he still hoped that the child would be more like him. On the velvet ceiling, specks of starlight dotted the ceiling. Countless lit candles floated in the air. There's magic here. It looks the same as the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a school history. Hermione whispered to Blake. Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool and a broken hat in front of the little wizards. Then after reading the rules, thus, the sorting ceremony began. There was no duel with the trolls. There was no spell test. Just sitting on the stool. Then put on the hat. The sorting hat would assign each little wizard to the house that was suitable for them. While the sorting hat was singing with its big mouth open, Blake looked at the professors sitting in the faculty seats. Standing next to the 4-legged stool was Professor McGonagall with a serious face, Professor Flitwick with the fairy bloodline, and long greasy hair, Professor Snape in a black robe. Blake noticed that his gaze was fixated on Harry Potter in the team. Of course, There was Professor Sprout from Hufflepuff. She had the natural scent of plants on her. It made Blake, who was an archdruid, feel close to her. Now, let's begin the sorting. Professor McGonagall's words interrupted Blake's thoughts. Read the names. Put on your hat and sit down. Hannah Abbott. Hannah suddenly heard her name being called. He appeared to be very flustered. She stumbled out of the line, sitting on a bench in the corner. Then she put on the hat. After a short pause, the sorting hat spoke. Hufflepuff. The table on the right clapped and cheered for Hannah. They had the most people at the 4 long tables. Chapter 56. What? Newt is also Blake's daddy? 2. The number of people in the group was rapidly decreasing. Hermione Granger. Hermione looked back at Blake. Then, he hurriedly ran up. Before long, Gryffindor. After Hermione went down, Dumbledore's gaze locked onto Blake. That was because the list was arranged alphabetically by surname. Blake also had the letter G in his surname. The next one. Blake Green. Professor McGonagall read the name out loud. She discreetly sized up Blake. Then she had to admit, this child was indeed very similar to the young Dumbledore. Especially those eyes. When he heard the name Blake, Snape's eyes slightly glanced at Blake. Everyone named Blake was not a good person. This little thing was also one. One look and one could tell that he was not honest. Everyone with pink faces was not a good person. Whether it was Potter or that Blake. When Blake heard his name, he immediately walked up to the high stool. But at this moment, all of a sudden, the hall became noisy. Oh, he was the one who killed that big spider on the train with his wand. He really knocked it down with his wand. I didn't know wands could be used like that. I've decided. Next time, I'll look for Ollivander and see if he can cover my wand with a layer of metal. Wow, this boy is so handsome. I wonder if he'll mind that I'm a few years older than him. You're dreaming. He's mine. Ahem. Quiet. Professor McGonagall hurriedly quieted the noisy hall down. Blake stood in front of the quad. Professor McGonagall lifted the sorting hat. He gestured for Blake to sit down. Blake took a deep breath. Would his brain seal technique work? It all depended on today. Below him, Cassandra looked at Blake expectantly. You must come to Slytherin. The Malfoy trio didn't even dare to look at the little devil. They prayed to Merlin in their hearts. Please don't let him come to Slytherin. Please don't. Blake sat down on the quad. Professor McGonagall placed the sorting hat on Blake's head. The huge hat drooped down. It just covered Blake's eyes. On the principal's seat, Dumbledore's body leaned forward slightly. His eyes were full of anticipation. Compared to Grindelwald, he should be more like me. Blake had just put on the hat. When he put it on, he felt a subtle magic power invading his brain from the hat. To Blake's relief, the magic was very faint. It only scanned Blake's exposed brain memories. Then it retracted. After that, Blake heard a voice in his head. Ambitious and smart. You're very suitable for Slytherin. But you're also very courageous. That fearless spirit seems very suitable for Gryffindor. At the same time, I can feel your desire for knowledge from the bottom of your heart. Maybe it should be Ravenclaw? Oh, it's amazing. I can actually feel loyalty and trustworthiness from you. This was a rare sight. You're also suitable for Hufflepuff. This is so troublesome. So troublesome. I haven't seen such a troublesome student in a long time. When was the last time? Oh, the girl last time was called Minerva McGonagall. I also hesitated for a long time that time. But that was a choice between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. But you're suitable for all 4 houses. It's amazing. It's so contradictory. Where should I send you? Although it seems like it doesn't matter where I send you. But I feel like I have to find the most suitable one. I need to think about it. And so, Blake sat in front of the entire school. He listened to the 933 voice in his head for more than 10 minutes. At this moment, the students in the hall began to discuss again. Because during the sorting ceremony, that was why the sorting hat was in such a difficult position. Ever since they entered Hogwarts, he had never seen one before. In the end, Blake couldn't take it anymore. Originally, he did not intend to interfere with the selection of the sorting hat. It asked Blake where to go. Wherever he went. He didn't expect that he would be stumped by the sorting hat. Could it be that I'm too contradictory? Too complicated? Helpless? Blake began to try to talk to the sorting hat in his mind. After all, he couldn't just let it continue like this, right? Have you decided which house I should go to? Blake asked in his head. Then, the chatterbox sorting hat started again. Not yet. I feel like every house is suitable. But, every time I decide which house you should go to, I feel that maybe another one is not bad. Oh, right. This kind of special situation made me forget to ask for your opinion. That's my negligence. So, which house do you want to go to? Blake thought for a while. Then he asked, which house has all the above qualities? Oh, Of course it's the all-inclusive Hufflepuff. Ah, that's right. Why didn't I think of that before? Every big shot has its own standards for choosing disciples. Only Helga Hufflepuff doesn't reject anyone and treats everyone equally. Sure enough, the most suitable academy for you should be Hufflepuff. Then, are you willing to go to Hufflepuff? Blake said, I'm willing after all. You said that this is the most suitable academy for me right now, right? Ah, then it's decided. The most suitable academy for you is Hufflepuff. This sentence was shouted in the hall. Just as he finished speaking, Cassandra's green eyes widened. How was that possible? The Sorting Hat hesitated. This was not unprecedented in history. But none of them. They hesitated until the end. Those who were sent to Hufflepuff. Many people had the same idea as Cassandra. Professor McGonagall looked at Dumbledore in shock. At this moment, Dumbledore. He was even more shocked. Even his beard fell into the glass of his drink. He did not even realize it. I thought this kid would join Gryffindor like me. Or join Slytherin like Grindelwald. But now, Dumbledore suddenly had an even more ridiculous idea. Grindelwald suffered a lot under Newt's hands. So he really took Newt's blood. Doesn't that mean that Newt is also this kid's father? Hiss. It seems like he really likes to play with magical animals. Chapter 57. Grindelwald. What? You got into Hufflepuff. 1. No matter how unexpected this result was to Dumbledore and the others. For the people at the first table on the right. Warm applause and cheers sounded again. Every time the Sorting Hat began to hesitate. It all proved that the person who made the Sorting Hat embarrassed. He was a person of two extremes. Either he was an idiot, or he was a genius. The little wizards had seen Blake's performance on the train. He was brave and decisive. Although he didn't use any spells to defeat the eight-eyed giant spider. Instead, he used a metal wand like a hammer. But it all proved that he wasn't an idiot. On the faculty table, Professor Sprout also clapped happily. Professor McGonagall looked at her helplessly. Well, she had been looking forward to it for more than a month. The shape-shifting genius that she had been looking forward to. But now he had entered someone else's house. Dumbledore had to accept this result at this time. Well, although he had entered Hufflepuff, he didn't take a similar path to his. But it also meant that he didn't take one similar to Grindelwald, right? It didn't matter if his character wasn't like him. As long as he didn't look like Grindelwald. If he was like that guy, if he was full of ambition, then it would be a real headache. Hufflepuff was also a very good school. Back then, Newt Scamander from Hufflepuff. Didn't he contribute a lot to defeating Grindelwald? Blake stood up from his chair. Then he thanked the Sorting Hat in his mind. Then he returned the hat to Professor McGonagall. He walked quickly to Hufflepuff's long table. The fat monk ghost of Hufflepuff waved happily at Blake. Among the many seniors who were welcoming him, Blake was stunned. He saw the very eye-catching Cedric Diggory at a glance. Blake admitted. This guy was really handsome. But he was only 70 to 80% less handsome than Blake. Blake was in the midst of everyone's cheers. Very naturally, he sat beside Hannah. Hannah blushed. She didn't dare to look at Blake next to her. She could only look straight at the silver cutlery in front of her. At this time, Blake also had an unconcealable smile on his face. Then, he shook hands with Wizard Hufflepuff, who was standing beside him. These little Hufflepuff badgers were too enthusiastic. He had only entered Hufflepuff. After that, the system notification never stopped. The system had detected it. They were all filled with joy. Then, a large wave of treasure chests appeared. Back at the unsorted wizards, Cassandra saw the smile on Blake's face. A wisp of mist appeared in his emerald green pupils. Bastard. He must have done it on purpose. At Gryffindor's long table, Hermione also had a surprised look on his face. However, she wasn't as angry as Cassandra. The sorting ceremony continued. Harry Potter was just like in the original novel. He told the Sorting Hat that he didn't want to go to Slytherin. Then, he was sent to Gryffindor as he wished. After that, Cassandra also entered Slytherin as she wished. However, there was no joy on her face. However, the seniors of Slytherin warmly welcomed her. A smile finally appeared on her face. After that, the little wizards were sorted out one by the Sorting Hat. The sorting ceremony ended just like that. Dumbledore tried to calm himself down. Then he stood up. He smiled and opened his arms to his students. Welcome. Welcome to Hogwarts to start the new school year. Before the banquet begins, I want to say a few words. After that, Dumbledore gave them a long spell about courage and togetherness. After Dumbledore sat down, everyone gave him the warmest applause. The next second, the banquet began. At the long table, on the originally empty silver cutlery, suddenly, it was full of food. Roast beef, rely on yourself, roast pork chops. Then there were British specialties. Boiled potatoes, baked potatoes, potato chips. The potatoes were all cooked. However, Blake found a large plate of honey strawberry pudding in front of him. Blake looked at the rostrum. Then, He saw Dumbledore raise the cup in front of him. Then he blinked. Blake also raised the pumpkin juice in front of him. The food at the banquet. Although it was not as good as Blake's, but it was really rich. He was not picky and ate to his heart's content. It was also a good thing. However, Hannah, who was next to him, after seeing so much delicious food, the seal on his voice was immediately removed. She was not shy anymore. As she ate, she discussed with Blake about the shortcomings or advantages of each dish. She did not know how many girls were looking at her with envy. Such a handsome and powerful boy. Many girls wanted to change seats with her, and she seemed to be chatting happily with that boy. Among them, Hermione and Cassandra had the most complicated expressions. Damn, I was too careless. They were at each other's throats for a long time. I didn't expect Hannah to sneak in. After everyone had filled their stomachs to the fullest, the rest of the food disappeared from the plates. In an instant, the plate was once again as clean as before. Then, there were all kinds of desserts. This made Blake hungry again. After everyone was full, Dumbledore stood up and said, "Oh, now everyone is full. I have a few words to say to everyone. Everyone needs to pay attention to a few things. Freshmen, pay attention. The forest area on the school grounds. No students are allowed to enter." Blake nodded. Then, he immediately decided to sneak in tomorrow. Especially some of our classmates. We have to remember this. Dumbledore looked at the Weasley twins. Then there were a lot of precautions. Finally, Dumbledore paused. Then he continued. I have to tell everyone. Anyone who doesn't want to encounter accidents or die a painful death, please don't enter the corridor on the right of the 4th floor. Blake heard this. He glanced at Quirrell, who was sitting in the teacher's seat. At this moment, he was also smiling timidly. It seemed that he had no reaction to the news. However, Blake knew. This was all an illusion. Dumbledore put the magic stone there to fish. How could Quirrell not be interested? But Blake felt that all this had nothing to do with him for the time being. The game on the 4th floor. Dumbledore put it there for Harry and the others to play. Blake already knew what was going on. Naturally, he was not interested in that place. Compared to the stone at the finish line, he did not know if it was real or fake. Blake still felt that the mysterious Forbidden Forest was more interesting to him. But he would not play around tonight. He had been on the train all day. He was still quite sleepy. Blake looked at Dumbledore. He quietly waited for Dumbledore to announce the disbandment. Then he would go and have a good sleep. Now, before everyone goes to bed, let's sing the school song together. Dumbledore said loudly. Blake's smile suddenly froze. Chapter 58. Grindelwald. What? You got into Hufflepuff? 2. Luckily, freshmen were not required to know it. When Blake followed Hufflepuff's dorms, he entered Hufflepuff's common room. He immediately fell in love with this place. Hufflepuff. No matter if it was a common room or a dormitory, they were all round. On the ceiling, on the pillars, there were all kinds of vines clinging to them. The plants in the corner also slowed down. As soon as he entered, he felt that he was in the woods. Such an environment. As an archdruid, Blake liked it very much. The most important thing was, from the moment he entered the common room, it was all about food. As long as he wanted to eat, he could eat anywhere. He could reach out his hand. This also reflected the house elves' preference for Hufflepuff Academy. It couldn't be helped. After all, it was because of Helga Hufflepuff at the beginning, together with the ancestors who took in these house elves. It was different from other houses. In Hufflepuff's dormitory, there were only 3 beds in each dormitory. This was much more comfortable than 4 or 5 people in a dormitory in other houses. Blake was led by the enthusiastic provost. He found his dormitory. In the dormitory of his original form, his bed was on the far left, and his suitcase was lying quietly on the cabinet at the foot of the bed. At this time, his 2 roommates in the same dormitory also came in. They were 2 boys, one fat and one thin. One was as strong as crab. He had a strange buzz cut. The other was thin and small. He also had some striking freckles on his face. The fat boy excitedly reached out to Blake. Hello, I'm Wayne Hopkins. You can call me Wayne. I'm very happy to be in the same dormitory with you. Blake also shook his hand enthusiastically. Hello, my name is Blake Green. You can call me Blake. The other freckled boy said. Me too. It's an honor to be in the same dormitory with you. We all saw your performance on the train. I never knew wands could be used like this. Ahem, sorry. I'm too excited. The freckled boy, who knew that he was rude, also reached out his hand. Hello, Blake. My name is Roger Malone. You can just call me Roger. Boys' friendships are always quickly formed. Very quickly. The 3 boys became familiar with each other. The 3 of them chatted until late at night before saying goodnight, and began to climb back to their beds to sleep. Blake was also quite happy. After all, he had 2 more friends. Although these 2 people were not that much mentioned in the original novel. But this was the real world. Everyone was in a real world made of flesh and blood. After Blake lay down, only then did he realize that a notebook in his pocket was shaking gently. This was a sign that Grindelwald was looking for him. This notebook. It was half a month ago. A gift that Grindelwald secretly asked the house elf to bring him. He could communicate with Grindelwald, who was thousands of miles away, through this notebook. Blake relit his desk lamp. Then he opened the notebook. The notebook was blank. Blake pressed his finger on the lower right corner of the title page. Then a few lines of words appeared in the blank space of the notebook. Is the suitcase I asked someone to buy for you good? Did that old fool Dumbledore let you go to the station by yourself? I knew I couldn't count on him. Which house did you get assigned to? Blake saw the handwriting on the notebook. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, although Grindelwald was the Dark Lord. But now, at least for now, he was still very good to Blake. Whether it was the house elf from before, or the suitcase that was given later, it was all his doing. And, in this half a month, Blake had learned a lot of knowledge from Grindelwald that Dumbledore was not convenient to teach. However, he was the same as Dumbledore on one point. That was, he did not agree with Blake going to the present to learn black magic. Dumbledore's reason was, of course, that black magic was harmful. Grindelwald's reason was, Blake was still young, so it was harmful. He had to teach it in a few years. Ahem. If Dumbledore knew that Grindelwald had taught him so badly, he would be so angry that he would go to settle the score with him. Blake took out the pen that Hermione gave him from the system warehouse. Then he answered Grindelwald's question on the notebook. The suitcase is very useful. Thank you. Blake finished writing. The words were immediately absorbed into the paper and disappeared. Although there was a system storage, the system storage could not store living things. Although this suitcase was a bit inconvenient, but it could temporarily put an 8-eyed giant spider inside, so it was still very useful. Then Blake wrote again. Please don't say that Professor Dumbledore is old and confused. He's just very busy. Not long after the handwriting disappeared, another line of handwriting appeared. He's busy? Haha, I don't know what he's busy with. He's been a principal for so many years. Doesn't he have one or two trustworthy subordinates? Does he have to do everything himself? He doesn't even have time to send you to the station? Forget it. Tell me, which house are you in? Grindelwald and Dumbledore had the same idea. They just wanted to see if Blake was more like him, or more like Dumbledore. So Grindelwald really hoped that Blake could enter Slytherin. In that case, it proved that the child was more like him. Blake picked up the pen and wrote, I was assigned to Hufflepuff. Austria. Newmungard. In a narrow stone room. Grindelwald looked at the notebook in his hand. He did not recover for a long time. He really did not expect it. His and Dumbledore's child. It was actually like Newt. Bastard. I didn't add Newt's blood. How did this happen? After a long time, Grindelwald began to comfort himself. Haha, it's not like me, and it's not like him. Newt. Hufflepuff. Haha, okay. It's also a good idea to join if you can't beat them. Grindelwald said helplessly. Hogwarts. Blake looked at the notebook in his hand and almost fell asleep. Handwriting appeared on the notebook again. Although it's very unexpected. But, after the holidays, I suggest that you let that old fool take you to Newt. And then learn all of that guy's skills. Blake almost laughed out loud. He did not expect. After so many years, how could this old man still hate Newt Hall? After chatting for a while, Blake put away the notebook. Then he fell asleep. He was really sleepy today. He was so sleepy that he did not even bother to open the box. Chapter 59. Levitation Cloak. Early in the morning, Blake only felt something rubbing his face. He slowly opened his eyes. Then he saw a pair of small shiny eyes. Oh, DeBeo, don't mess around. I want to sleep a little longer. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The sniffer dog, named DeBeo by Blake. Seeing this, Blake turned over. He wanted to sleep again. DeBeo was so anxious that he turned around and grabbed the alarm clock on the cabinet. He threw it on Blake's body. Ouch. Okay, I'll prepare something for you to eat. Blake was hit by such a blow. His sleepiness also disappeared. After all, he was also hungry. Blake sat up. He glanced at the alarm clock that was thrown at him. It was only 8 o'clock in the morning. The first class didn't start until 9 o'clock. So there was no hurry. DeBeo jumped on the suitcase. Then it opened a crack. It got in. After a while, it dragged out a metal cage. In the cage, the 8-eyed giant spider that Blake tamed yesterday was looking at Blake pitifully. Blake forgot to feed it last night. Since the train, the 8-eyed giant spider had been hungry. Otherwise, it wouldn't have wanted to eat Trevor. So, it had been hungry until now. Blake put on a straight face. Ahem. I starved you all night to punish you for what you did yesterday. It's not because I forgot, you know? The 8-eyed giant spider's 8 legs trembled. Of course, it could also be that it was simply hungry to the point that its legs were weak. Blake glanced at the other 2 beds. He just met his roommates last night. Wayne and Roger were still asleep. So, Blake took out a small box from his suitcase. In this small box, it also had a traceless stretching spell, and it also had a fresh keeping effect. Therefore, Blake packed a lot of ingredients into it. Blake opened the iron cage. Then he took out a large piece of raw beef from the box. He put it on a plate. Then he pushed the plate in front of the 8-eyed giant spider that crawled out. It saw the meat. The giant 8-eyed spider's eyes turned green. But before Blake gave the order, it was just watching, even though it was starving to the point of fainting. "Go ahead," Blake said. Then the 8-eyed spider pounced. Blake turned around and saw DeBeo staring at him. "All right, I won't forget you." Blake took out a plate from the box and placed it in front of DeBeo. Finally, he put a big handful of food on the plate. "Go ahead." After DeBeo heard that he was allowed to do so, he reached out his little paw and ate the food. Ton, ton, ton. He looked at the two magical animals eating. Blake touched his stomach. But at Hufflepuff, he would never have to worry about going hungry. There will always be food. The house elves would quietly change the food every day. Blake finished washing up. He sat back down on his bed. Then he took a piece of fresh strawberry cake. He took a bite. While eating, he focused his attention on his system space. What a bumper harvest. In the system space, except for the top row of 6 gold treasure chests, below them were densely packed silver and bronze treasure chests. Blake first merged all the bronze treasure chests into silver treasure chests. Then he counted them slightly. There were as many as 40 silver treasure chests. Blake excitedly prepared to open the treasure chests. Suddenly, his movements paused. 40 silver treasure chests. Just enough to synthesize 4 gold treasure chests. And he had 6 gold treasure chests to begin with. In other words, he seemed to be able to synthesize a diamond treasure chest. What should he do? Should he directly open 10 gold treasure chests in a row? Or should he directly merge them into a diamond treasure chest? If there were only 9 gold treasure chests, he wouldn't even think about it. Now, there were exactly 10. Blake was thinking of the druid talent he got from the diamond treasure chests. There was also a custom wand that was comparable to the old wand in power. Then he made a decision. There would still be gold treasure chests in the future, but diamond treasure chests were not common. Forget it. Merge them first. He could also take a look. How many diamond treasure chests would it take to merge a supreme treasure chest? After making up his mind, Blake immediately merged the 40 silver treasure chests into 4 gold treasure chests. Then, he merged the 10 gold treasure chests into a diamond treasure chest. Looking at the system space, the treasure chests that originally occupied a page. Now there was only 1 treasure chest left. Blake suddenly felt a little distressed. But it was all worth it. He didn't open the diamond treasure chest immediately. Instead, he gently touched the diamond treasure chest on the virtual screen with his finger. Then he looked at the lower right corner. Merge. 7 diamond treasure chests. He could merge them to create a supreme treasure chest. Blake scratched his head. He was ready to merge 10 or 20 diamond treasure chests to create a supreme treasure chest. He didn't expect it to be less. He only needed 7 of them. Blake was overjoyed. Compared to 10 or 20, 7 diamond treasure chests. He would have them after a while. But now, he would accumulate them in the future. System. Open the diamond treasure chest for me. Ding. Opening the diamond treasure chest for the host. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a levitation cloak. Blue version, upgradable. A levitation cloak. Doctor Strange's? Blake looked at the additional blue cloak in the system storage in surprise. Unfortunately, it was blue. If it was red, that would be incredible. One had to know. The red levitation cloak was from the Marvel Universe. It was Doctor Strange's main equipment. It was an ancient artifact. It could make people float in the air at will, and it could fly at a fast speed. Other than that, it also had an extremely strong physical and magical defense. It could also be used as a weapon to attack and capture opponents. This was simply the best weapon to capture those ferocious magical animals. Another point was that it could change its appearance at will. As long as the owner was willing, the cloak could become any costume. It could also become bigger or smaller at will. In other words, it could be worn without attracting attention. Blake opened this diamond treasure chest. He looked at the cloak he had gotten. It was a weakened version of the red levitation cloak. Blue levitation cloak. However, although it was only a weakened version of the red version. But for Blake, the blue levitation cloak was already powerful enough. It was different from the red version of the levitation cloak. The blue version, except for the lack of flying and levitation abilities. The other values of various abilities were far less than the red version. Its type of ability was actually close to the red one. Blake suddenly remembered the system information. After the blue version, there was also the word that could be upgraded. In other words, the system prompt sounded. Ding. This levitation cloak can be upgraded to a red levitation cloak by collecting magical animal materials. Chapter 60. What a handsome cat. Hearing this, Blake's slightly disappointed heart became excited again. Magical animal materials? Then it was still very easy for him to get it. Blake took out the blue magic cloak from the system space. The cloak had just been taken out from the system storage. It automatically flew behind Blake. Then it wrapped around his body. Following Blake's thoughts, the cloak immediately began to transform automatically. The next second, a brand new school uniform robe. It appeared on Blake's body. Blake nodded in satisfaction. Although it was not as powerful as the red version. But this blue one was also very strong. Blake pulled out his mithril wand. Then he slapped his own arm. Clang! Blake felt that his arm that was whipped did not feel like it was hit at all. This was the blue version of the cloak. Although its defensive power was not as good as the red version. But it was very good now. Wearing such a cloak. In the future, he would not have to worry about being plotted against. However, Blake did not have time to test its magical defense ability. Because he whipped himself just now. It made a metal knocking sound. It seemed to be waking up his two roommates. Wayne and Roger's bodies began to move. It seemed that they would wake up soon. Blake quickly put away his wand. At this time, the 8-eyed giant spider had already finished the large piece of meat Blake had given him. So, after hearing the sound, it immediately ran back to the cage. It did not want to scare people again. It was fined and had no food to eat. After it went in, it did not forget to close the door of the cage. It could be said that it had a very strong sense of self-management. DeBeo licked the plate. It turned around and picked up the cage of the 8-eyed giant spider. Then it stuffed it into the suitcase. At this time, Roger and Wayne finally broke free from their sleep. The two of them stretched and sat up one after another. Roger saw that Blake was already sitting on the bed and eating. So he asked, "Blake, did you hear that just now? The sound of metal like..." Wayne continued, "Like the sound you made when you knocked on the spider's head." Cough cough. "Actually, I have 3 pieces of bad news for you." Blake stuffed the cake in his hand. "What bad news?" "The first bad news. It's already 8:30. The second bad news. The first class starts at 9:00. The third piece of bad news is, the first lesson is Professor McGonagall's transformation class." F***CK. "Why didn't you wake us up?" "Actually, I just got up." "You just got up and you're already dressed? You're not loyal." Blake. He lifted the cloak that had turned it into a school uniform. "I told you I just got up. Look, I'm still in my pajamas." Wayne and Roger both ran to wash up. Blake remembered that the first class today was transformation. So he took out a whole plant from his bag. He crushed it and rubbed it on his hand and a quill. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. Blake was busy. He muttered to himself. Boys were always able to wash up very quickly. They each held a piece of cake. They did not even go to the auditorium. They went straight to the classroom of transformation. Although they were already running very fast, the stairs of Hogwarts were always moving. There were even many twists and turns. When Blake and the other two arrived at the transformation classroom, it was already 9 o'clock. At this time, Blake also saw Harry and Ron running from the other side of the corridor. Oh no. I'm late. I don't want to lose points on the first day." Roger rambled on. "This changing corridor and staircase is ridiculous. God knows how long we've been delayed by that staircase." Wayne still felt indignant. "Stop talking. It seems that the professor isn't here yet," Blake said. After hearing Blake's words, Wayne and Roger immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Harry was opposite them. After seeing that even Blake was late, they felt inexplicably safe. "Good morning. Harry, you guys got up late too?" "No. This class is too hard to find. If only there were afternoon classes. We could have checked out the place beforehand." The 5 of them gathered together. They walked to the door of the classroom. In fact, there were many classes. They were all taken by Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. And Slytherin was more often taken by Ravenclaw. So under normal circumstances, Gryffindor and Hufflepuff students were closer. On the other hand, Slytherin had a better relationship with Ravenclaw. The 5 of them walked into the classroom. In the classroom, there were already many students sitting there. Harry and the others were glad. Professor McGonagall hadn't arrived yet. But Blake saw a beautiful tabby cat squatting on the podium. Blake gritted his teeth. Fortune comes from danger. If we're lucky, we'll get another diamond treasure chest. Even if we're unlucky, we'll definitely get a gold treasure chest. The bold Blake didn't go with Harry and the others. He walked to his seat. Instead, he ran straight to the podium. It was as if he was attracted by the tabby cat. Wow, what a handsome cat. Then he took out a quill. Then he transformed the quill into a stick on the spot. Professor McGonagall saw that the 5 of them were late. In fact, she was already angry. She saw Blake suddenly walk over. At first, she didn't know what he was going to do. When she saw Blake transform the quill in his hand into a cat stick. Well, it's a good transformation skill. Wait, now is not the time to talk about this. What is he doing by transforming into a cat stick? Professor McGonagall saw that Blake dared to tease her with a cat stick. Her anger rose in an instant. She wanted to transform back into her human form to teach this bold little thing a lesson. But she suddenly caught a whiff of a very strong odor. This smell made Professor McGonagall's movements pause. Then the cat stick reached out towards him. Wait, the smell seems to be coming from this cat stick. This is catmint? Blake. Ding. Emotions of shock and anger were detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Chapter 61. Blake. Bravery of Hogwarts. 1. It's over, a huge loss. Blake didn't expect his luck to be so bad. He actually only dropped a guaranteed gold treasure chest. System. Did you secretly change the drop probability? However, now is not the time to think about this. In fact, everyone saw the tabby cat when they came in. However, many of them were already warned by their seniors. During the first period of the transformation class for the newly enrolled wizards, Professor McGonagall liked to transform into a tabby cat. Then she would wait for the students. She would observe the students who came to class late for the first time. In fact, many people knew that the tabby cat was Professor McGonagall's. So basically, no one dared to provoke the cat. They all sat down properly, previewing the textbooks. What they saw was a brave warrior. The warrior who knocked over a big spider on the train yesterday. He was still brave today. He actually dashed forward with a cat stick in his hand. This was King Ridiculous. Animagus. After transforming into an animal, she actually had the habits of that animal. Catmint was indeed effective on Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall resisted the strong feeling of the catmint. She forced herself to change back to human form. The entire classroom fell into silence, except for those who knew that the tabby cat was Professor McGonagall. The rest were shocked by Blake's bravery. There were also some little wizards who didn't know that the tabby cat was Professor McGonagall's transformation. So when they saw Professor McGonagall's transformation back to his original form, only then did he realize that Blake had just done something incredible. There were also some little wizards who rejoiced in their hearts. Just now, they also wanted to go and stroke the cat a little. After Hermione saw that the tabby cat was actually Professor McGonagall, she also covered her eyes in despair. It was over. Blake is really going to be expelled this time. Blake. Professor McGonagall stared at Blake angrily. Hiss. The few people who came in with Blake all gasped in shock. Their eyes widened. They lamented in their hearts. It's over. It's over. Blake is finished. You. McGonagall's angry words were not out of his mouth. Plop. Blake was the first to fall. The tall and strong Wayne immediately squatted down to help him up. Then in the next second, he raised his head in horror. It's over. Blake was scared to death. He's not breathing. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall's anger turned into cold sweat. She hurriedly ran over. She looked at Blake on the ground. Hermione jumped up in fright when she heard that. She ran to Blake's side. Blake was obviously faking it. As long as I fake it, you won't have time to get angry. Besides, I didn't know that the cat was the professor. He saw the cute cat. Wasn't it normal to want to tease it? Blake was lying on the ground. Initially, he was still proud of his wit. Then he heard Wayne say that he was scared to death. F***CK. Useless roommate. I'm not breathing. Why don't you test it first? How can I continue pretending like this? If the atmosphere is there, does that mean I'll have to die? Then Blake felt Professor McGonagall's hand on his heart in a panic. She seemed to want to test it. Blake knew that he couldn't lie down anymore. So, he made a quack sound from his throat. Then he slowly opened his eyes. He let out a long breath. It looked like he had finally woken up from a coma. Everyone saw that Blake had woken up. Everyone around him breathed a sigh of relief. Professor McGonagall also breathed a long sigh of relief. At the same time, she also blamed herself in her heart. In fact, she also knew a lot about Blake from Dumbledore. She knew that Blake was a life form born from an experiment. He had outstanding talent and was kind by nature. He also liked all kinds of magical animals and small animals. So when he saw a cat, he wanted to tease it. It was normal. But she suddenly changed back to her human form. It was indeed very scary. Professor McGonagall herself was a person who liked cats very much. So she put herself in Blake's position and thought for a while. If she saw a handsome cat as soon as she entered the classroom, she couldn't help but tease it. If at that time, the cat that she was happily playing with suddenly turned into her own professor, then Professor McGonagall felt that she would faint from fright. Then Professor McGonagall's anger completely dissipated. She asked with concern, Blake, how do you feel? I'll take you to the school hospital now. Blake waved his hand. Then he took out a small bottle from his pocket with trembling hands. He poured a small pill from the bottle. Then he threw it into his mouth and swallowed it. After a while, his originally pale face finally regained its color. Sorry, Professor, I didn't know that was you. If only I knew. Professor McGonagall interrupted him. Okay, you don't need to apologize to me. It's my fault. How do you feel now? Blake continued to speak with a trembling voice. Well, I'm fine. It's an old problem from a long time ago. It's just that it hasn't happened for a long time. But fortunately, I'm used to carrying the medicine with me all year round. Professor McGonagall blamed herself even more. Just because she suddenly changed back to human form. This child's old problem had affected him. If she had known, she wouldn't have changed into a cat to observe the students. She could have used a phantom spell to hide and observe from the side. Blake stood up. The little wizards all breathed a sigh of relief. No one wanted to curse a classmate on the first day of school. Okay, I'm fine. Blake saw that it was almost time to act. He wanted to go back to his seat. You don't have to attend the class today. We'll take you to Madame Pomfrey for a checkup. Professor McGonagall said. No. No need. I'd better not go for a checkup. There was no need for a checkup. Madame Pomfrey's medical skills were very good. What if she saw through his disguise? So, Blake pretended to have something that he couldn't say. He didn't want to go for a checkup. Professor McGonagall suddenly understood. Blake was a life form produced by the experiment. Maybe he was a little different from normal humans. If he went for a checkup, he might be noticed. Blake didn't want to be found out that he was different. Okay, then you go down and sit down. If you don't feel well, you have to tell me. Then Blake, with the help of his stupid roommates, slowly found a seat in the last row and sat down. Hermione looked at Blake with some doubts. She always felt that this guy wouldn't faint so easily. Blake sat down. Professor McGonagall returned to the podium. The class was about to begin. Chapter 62. Blake. Bravery of Hogwarts. 2. Does Blake like to put catmint on his cat when he plays with it? Blake lowered his head. Otherwise, someone might have seen the smile on his face. Although he did not obtain any diamond treasure chests in the previous wave, they were still able to obtain some treasure chests. So it was definitely not a loss. Because after Professor McGonagall changed back, the system notification in his mind never stopped. A large pile of treasure chests appeared once again. They were all from the little wizards and witches in the classroom. Especially when it came to his useless roommate Wayne. It was even more exaggerated. There was even another gold treasure chest. Blake guessed that this golden chest must have come from Hermione. When Professor McGonagall began her lecture, Blake began to organize the extra treasure chests in the system space. At this moment, there were 2 more gold treasure chests in the system space. Then, there were over 30 bronze treasure chests. And 2 silver treasure chests. There were so few silver treasure chests. This was because these little wizards had just entered the academy. Their ability was not high. Hence, the drop rate of treasure chests was quite low. Now, there were so many bronze treasure chests. It was all because they were too shocked just now. It barely increased the drop rate of treasure chests. As for the quality, it was already good enough. After all, not every little wizard was a straight-A student like Hermione. So, Blake combined the more than 30 bronze treasure chests. Then, in his system space, it became 2 gold treasure chests, 5 silver treasure chests, and 3 bronze treasure chests. Blake looked at these treasure chests with joy. Such a drop rate. Then in order to combine another supreme treasure chest, it didn't seem to take long. Transformation is in the first-year course you will learn at Hogwarts. It's the most complicated and dangerous magic. Professor McGonagall stood on the podium and said, if anyone is mischievous in my class, I'll ask them to leave. I'll never be allowed to come in again. I've warned you. Her tone was very serious. Then she raised her magic wand. She turned the entire podium into a grunting pig. Then, she changed it back. The students were immediately attracted by her spells. They couldn't wait to learn it immediately. Professor McGonagall saw that everyone was in high spirits. So, she nodded in satisfaction. They were motivated to learn. Only then would they have a better learning efficiency. Then, Professor McGonagall began to paste several huge parchments on the blackboard. The words on the parchments were very big, but they were still densely packed. They were all notes about transformation. These are the transformation notes that I've compiled. It's more than what's on the textbook. It's more detailed. You guys should copy these notes first. This way, after class, you can go back and watch the practice. The little wizards hurriedly took out parchments and quills. Clatter, 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 they began to note them down. Blake sat in the last row, so no one saw his movements. Even Wayne and Roger, who were beside him, were copying with sweat all over their foreheads. They didn't pay attention to his situation at all. So, Blake patted his clothes. The next second, the hovering cloak that had turned into a school uniform robe. Suddenly, a blue little hand stretched out from it. The little hand grabbed Blake's fountain pen. It dragged a piece of parchment over. Then it began to copy wildly. As for the content of the notes, Blake just glanced at it. He completely understood it. And he memorized it. This knowledge was very complicated and obscure in the eyes of other little wizards. But for Blake, it was all relatively simple knowledge. It was as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. After everyone had finished copying the complex and difficult notes, Professor McGonagall explained the principle to them again. After that, she gave everyone a match. She began to ask everyone to try to turn the match into a needle. Although everyone was full of enthusiasm before, they were all very motivated. They also copied the notes and listened to the class. But to really use transfiguration successfully, it was still very difficult. Even a top student like Hermione. She began to consult Professor McGonagall with the owl before entering the school. She couldn't immediately change her match. Transform it into a perfect steel needle. There were always such and such problems. It wasn't that the steel needle was too thick. It was that the head of the steel needle was still in the shape of a match. But this was much better than the others. The matches in the hands of many little wizards didn't even change at all. Of course, Blake wasn't one of them. Just as everyone was scratching their heads, Blake had already gone too far. He began to try to carve flowers on the silver needle. After Professor McGonagall found out, she was both angry and amused. She picked up the steel needle that had been decorated with beautiful patterns. Very good, Mr. Green, you have succeeded. I have to add, you should have checked with me immediately after you finished, instead of choosing to carve flowers on it. But this is indeed a very beautiful steel needle. So, Hufflepuff dash. As soon as Professor McGonagall finished her words, the classroom was in an uproar. That's too much. Yeah, we can't even change the shape of the match. Merlin, did I hear that right? He actually carved flowers on the needle that he had? Why don't you go to heaven? Wow, how terrifying. A large wave of treasure chests appeared once again. Quiet. Turn your attention to your matches. Mr. Green has succeeded. You can definitely do it too. As long as you complete it, you can also get bonus points for your respective houses. Professor McGonagall finished speaking. Her heart was bleeding. If Blake entered Gryffindor, then these points would belong to her own academy, Gryffindor. After that, the young wizards became more motivated. Obviously, they were stimulated by Blake. As for Blake, he had already continued to hide in the back row. He went to count the treasure chests happily. Even though everyone was motivated, still no one succeeded. Until the class was about to end, Hermione finally succeeded in creating a perfect steel needle. It's very perfect. Professor McGonagall looked at the steel needle in his hand with satisfaction. Very good. Miss Granger has done it. She's the second person to succeed. Gryffindor adds 5 points. The morning's transformation class was finally over. When Blake went to the auditorium to eat, 2 figures appeared in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. Looking at them, they looked exactly the same. Blake knew who he had met. It was the Weasley twins. After Fred and George rushed up, they began to shake hands with Blake. Then each of them said something. Warrior. What a warrior. How dare you use a cat stick to tease Professor McGonagall's cat form? We actually wanted to do this for a long time. But we were afraid of being expelled. But not only did you succeed, there was no punishment. You even got 5 bonus points. Chapter 63. Cassandra Terrified. 1. Blake obviously underestimated the speed of the little wizard's gossip. He had just finished his transformation class. He had just arrived at the auditorium. He was about to tell the glorious story of Professor McGonagall's tabby cat. But it had already spread all over Hogwarts. If it was just because he was ignorant and fearless, then there wouldn't be such a big reaction. The reason why the little wizards had such a big reaction was entirely because he had not only done such an outrageous thing, but he came out of it unscathed. According to reliable sources, Professor McGonagall didn't even scold him. It was said that she wasn't angry at all. She even apologized to Blake. Not only that, Professor McGonagall also gave Blake's Hufflepuff a bonus point in class. When all these things were put together, it seemed very King ridiculous. The Weasley twins, who had always been mischievous, heard about this. They didn't believe it at first. But after they directly asked Harry and his brother Ronald, who were present at the time, they found out. This thing turned out to be true. It was simply amazing. What kind of a mortal could do this? Even if he was Professor McGonagall's son. After doing this, he had to be beaten, right? Thus, the above scene took place. After both of Blake's hands were grabbed by Fred and George, he hurriedly broke free. He said, "It's fake. It's all fake." What's fake? It's obviously real. You're simply the hero of Hogwarts. The pride of Hufflepuff. We're going to record your deeds. And then pass it down. Blake was shocked. This thing shouldn't be passed down. You too. This is a misunderstanding. After I found out that it was Professor McGonagall, I was so scared that I fainted. It's not as great as you say. Blake waved his hand. Hiss. Hiss. Fred and George looked at each other. Then they sucked in a cold breath. Amazing. It's really amazing. Blake looked at the two of them in amazement. What's so amazing about it? Fred and George looked at each other again. We know. We won't tell anyone. But it's still amazing. I don't know how you came up with it. As long as you fell down first. Then Professor McGonagall can't hold you responsible. Hiss. Hiss. Amazing. Amazing. At this moment, Blake was in the eyes of the twins. They were already kindred spirits. Compared to Blake's feet, their exploding toilets, their little mischievous evildoings. There was simply no comparison. They had no idea that Blake was already thinking of silencing her. Ahem. I'm a good person. I won't be. Blake thought. Fred and George suddenly felt a chill run down their backs. It was as if he was being targeted by something. It took a while for the feeling to disappear. If you have such a great idea in the future, don't forget us. Then the two of them ran off on their own. Blake listened to the system's prompt of the treasure chest. He watched their backs faintly. I'd better kill them. At this moment, Wayne and Roger, who had been listening next to him, they looked at each other. Then they asked in awe, Blake, you didn't do it on purpose, did you? Although there were many people gossiping, Blake might give himself away. But Fred and George talked about it like that. Blake was surprised to find that a bronze treasure chest would appear in his system space from time to time. Well, it seems not bad. Then Blake came to the long table in Hufflepuff. He started to eat quickly. There was a short break at noon, so he planned to use this time to find a place. Time was limited. He had to hurry. Just as he was having a good time eating, suddenly, someone came to him. I heard. You teased the tabby cat that Professor McGonagall turned into? Blake raised his head. Then he saw a handsome guy who was only 7 or 8 points less handsome than him. Senior Diggory, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't know it was Professor McGonagall. Blake continued to explain for himself. Ahem, actually. Cedric looked around. Then he whispered. We've wanted to do that for a long time. So, did you succeed? How does it feel? Blake looked at Cedric in shock. Cedric, you bastard. I didn't expect it. Although it took some time to deal with Cedric and these people, but Blake still had enough time to find that place. So, after finishing the meal, he told Wayne and Roger that he was going to leave. Then he left first. After he left the auditorium, he went straight to the stairs of the teaching building. He remembered that place was. Hey, stop. Someone stopped him again. Blake turned around and said helplessly, I really didn't mean to. I didn't know that was. Ah. Then Blake stopped talking. Cassandra stood behind him. She stared at him coldly. She looked around and saw that no one was around. Then she asked, are you avoiding me on purpose? Why did you go to Hufflepuff? Cassandra was angry. It was because of Blake, whom she had always thought highly of. A genius who crushed her in all aspects. He was actually assigned to Hufflepuff, which she had always thought of as a useless house. This made her feel that her young self-esteem was insulted. In fact, even if Blake was assigned to Gryffindor or Ravenclaw, she could accept it. It was also the result of the Sorting Hat. It couldn't be changed. But, such a genius. After the Sorting Hat hesitated for a long time, he was assigned to Hufflepuff. Then there was only one possibility. It was Blake's own request. He took the initiative to go to Hufflepuff. After the Sorting Hat was forced to make a difficult choice, it would have asked his wishes. And generally, it would listen to his opinions. Then why did Blake ask to go to Hufflepuff? Hufflepuff and Slytherin didn't take most of the classes together. So, Blake's move. It was like deliberately avoiding Cassandra. So she had to ask him today. Facing Cassandra's question, Blake's face was calm. Chapter 64. Cassandra terrified, 2. Blake didn't explain to Cassandra. He snorted coldly. You actually snorted at me. Cassandra's eyes widened. This stupid boy actually snorted at me. If it was just a guess before, there would be no issue. But now, it was confirmed. He just hates me. He just avoids me. Cassandra was so angry that she wanted to turn around and leave. Blake suddenly spoke. It's obvious that you're avoiding me. Now you're saying that I'm avoiding you? Cassandra's anger rose again. But you obviously went to Hufflepuff. Blake replied indifferently. This was assigned by the Sorting Hat. I can't do anything about it. Cassandra said angrily. It's obvious that you can make requests to the Sorting Hat. As long as you want, the Sorting Hat will consider it. Blake showed a sad expression. I didn't know that I could make requests to the Sorting Hat. So the Hat did assign me to Hufflepuff. And I remember that I was assigned before you, right? Since you know that you can make requests to the same house. Then, after seeing that I was assigned to Hufflepuff, why didn't you make requests to the house later? What if you joined Hufflepuff like me? Even if Hufflepuff doesn't suit your identity, you can still go to Gryffindor. In that case, although we're in different houses, we can still take most of the classes together, right? Haha. In the end, you still dislike me for being assigned to Hufflepuff. You think I'm an idiot. So you still chose Slytherin. Then you don't need to meet an idiot like me every day in class. So tell me, Who's the one who's avoiding whom? Now you're saying that I'm avoiding you. You're still teasing me. You want to play with my feelings. Cassandra, you're such a bad girl. I won't be fooled by you again. As Blake finished his words, the entire corridor was silent. Cassandra was speechless. She suddenly felt that what Blake said seemed to make sense. It was indeed Blake first. She was assigned to the house later. Then she went to Slytherin. According to her previous logic, it seemed that she was indeed avoiding Blake. For some reason, she felt that something was not quite right. But Blake didn't give her time to think. Finally, he succeeded in achieving his objective. He wouldn't let her wake up. I thought we would become best friends, but... Forget it. It's better if we don't meet again. Cassandra still couldn't wrap her head around it. He wanted to leave. She hurriedly shouted, Wait. I misunderstood you. Blake sighed. But I didn't misunderstand you. You're really a bad woman who played with my feelings. You deliberately avoided me and came over to blame me. I don't know what I am in your heart. Blake continued to increase of his gaslighting. Then Cassandra panicked. I was wrong. I didn't think that my joining Slytherin would have such a big impact on you. Blake said, Forget it. The Sorting Hat didn't assign wrongly. You know me. I like plants, animals, and food. Hufflepuff is indeed the most suitable place for me. And you're really suitable for Slytherin. Slytherin's thoughts are also very good. I like Hufflepuff. But you want me to join Slytherin by force. 10,000 points of critical damage. Yes. I completely ignored his original intentions. I only wanted him to join Slytherin. I can't believe I was so selfish. Cassandra's heart was in a mess. I'm sorry. I didn't consider your feelings. Can you give me another chance? Let's be friends again. Cassandra's voice sounded pitiful. Blake turned around. His face was filled with sorrow. Cassandra, can I really trust you? Cassandra hurriedly said, Of course you can trust me. I'll definitely think more about you in the future. Indeed, I was too selfish in the past. Cassandra's expression at this moment. She looked very sincere. There was no longer a trace of arrogance. Obviously, she had been tricked by Blake's acting skills. Click. The door to the corridor opened. Then the Malfoy trio walked in. They immediately saw Blake and Cassandra in the corridor. Malfoy looked at the pitiful look on Cassandra's face. And that sincere expression, as if she was pleading with Blake. Was this still the cold and aloof Cassandra he had always admired before? He saw the scene of his goddess confessing her love to his enemy. Malfoy was so agitated that he almost vomited blood. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Malfoy turned around and ran. Crabbe and Goyle froze for a moment. With their stupid brains. Naturally, they didn't know why their master Malfoy was so abnormal. Ding. Extremely heartbroken emotions detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. On the 8th floor, Blake searched for a while before he found the huge tapestry. In the tapestry, it depicted the scene of the giant monster beating the fool Barnabas. It's here. Blake turned around excitedly. He looked at the blank wall behind him. I finally found you. Blake was looking for. It was the room that granted all requests. What exactly are you looking for? Cassandra, who was successfully tricked, followed behind him and asked. I'm looking for a suitable place to grow some dangerous plants. Blake replied, although his collection bag could also grow plants. But only 20 plants could be grown. Blake wanted to research more powerful plants. He needed to do experiments. And to do experiments, he needed to compare multiple sets of experimental data. The best collection bag space. Still not enough. Therefore, the room that granted all requests. This was the first choice. And, in addition to growing plants, this place should also be able to raise some magical animals. Plants can be grown here? Cassandra looked at the corridor in confusion. There was no soil here. How would he grow it? This is a place I found by chance. Chance? But you haven't been at Hogwarts for 24 hours. Chapter 65, Room of Requirement. 1. Ahem. Here's the thing. I was at Professor Dumbledore's house. I found some notes that he had written before. There were records. He had, when he passed by the tapestry of Barnabas being beaten silly by a monster. He suddenly wanted to go to the toilet. He couldn't find a toilet. Then when he passed by here for the 3rd time, suddenly, on the opposite side of this tapestry, suddenly there was a door. When he walked in, there was a lavishly decorated toilet inside. Blake looked at the blank wall in front of him that didn't even have a portrait. He made up a story. And then, what does this have to do with the place where plants are grown? Cassandra asked curiously. That's the problem. When Dumbledore was thinking about the toilet. Then when he passed by here for the 3rd time, this toilet appeared. thinking of Ravenclaw's wonderful idea when she remodeled this castle. Do you think she would be bored enough to spend so much effort to yield a hidden toilet? Cassandra suddenly realized. Yeah. It makes sense to hide a secret room in this way. Hiding a toilet. That's really weird. Blake smiled and nodded. That's why. I have a bold guess. If I passed by here for the third time, and I was thinking about something else, would I still find a toilet? Cassandra exclaimed. Yes. If we walk on the side. While thinking, I want to find a place suitable for growing magical plants. Then isn't it very likely that there will be a room where plants can be grown? Blake snapped his fingers. Smart. Do you want to test this magical idea together? Cassandra nodded happily. At the same time, a sense of satisfaction rose in her heart. It was a very good feeling. Someone who was as smart as her. Let's solve all the mysteries in this world together. Find the answer. Before that, none of her peers were on par with her. But now, finally there was one. Blake nodded at her. Then, he softly chanted. I need a room where I can grow magical plants and animals. I need. Blake walked back and forth in front of the wall 3 times in a row. Look, it has appeared. Cassandra pointed excitedly at the wall. Blake turned to look. The originally white wall began to cave in. Then, the outline of a door appeared. Then, the outline of the door became clearer. A smooth door. It appeared on the originally blank wall. Let's go. Blake smiled at Cassandra. Then he grabbed the door handle. Crack. The door opened. The two of them entered the room of all requests one after another. As they entered, the door on the wall disappeared instantly. Once again, it turned into a snow-white wall. Inside the room of all requests, Cassandra and Blake both looked at the world in front of them in shock. Behind the door, it was a vast plain that seemed to have no end. There was no ceiling above their heads. There was only a blue sky. A warm sun hung in the sky. The warm sunlight shining on their bodies. All of this explained the realism of all of this. Come to think of it, Ravenclaw's design. It must have projected the sunlight from outside in. So what they saw might be an illusion. But the sunlight must be real. So, it was really possible to grow mystical plants in here. And magical animals could also be raised. Furthermore, this was the room of all requests. Blake tried to chant in his heart. As Blake thought in his heart. Then, a small wooden house suddenly rose from the ground. What's going on? Cassandra exclaimed. I just tried it. But, as expected. Blake said excitedly. Because this room appeared according to our needs in the first place. So, as long as I think about it, it's possible to change the environment here at any time. For example, I want a wooden house to rest in. It really appeared. If I'm not wrong, I can even change the weather. Cassandra looked at Blake in shock. She had always been proud. But now, she just wanted to say to Blake from the bottom of her heart. Ooh, Blake, you're really a genius. Just based on the words left by Professor Dumbledore, he found such a magical place. He could even think of all kinds of magical uses for this place in an instant. If this was not a genius, then, what was it? Ding. Strong feelings of worship and admiration have been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Blake had tears in his eyes. Finally, another golden treasure chest dropped from Cassandra's body. Perhaps the novice period had passed. The gold treasure chests that would often drop before. Now they rarely dropped. Even if there were emotional fluctuations. Only the silver treasure chests were more often. Or perhaps, there was no novice protection period. It was just that Blake might have gotten too many treasure chests. So everyone became a little numb to it. A person was too powerful. Even if he often created miracles, you would still be numb from it. But Blake didn't feel worried. Because people's memories were always short. It would be fine after a while. There was a cool-down period. It was normal. I'm not a genius. Blake began to be humble. If you're not a genius, then what am I? Cassandra looked at Blake helplessly. If it was her, even if she saw some of Dumbledore's records, it was absolutely impossible to think of. There would be such a magical place. Okay, don't be humble. Where's the seed I gave you before? Take it out. Let's plant it. Blake shook his head. I can't. Why, you didn't bring it? Have you forgotten? There's still class in the afternoon. Oh no, I'm going to be late. The door of the room of requests room opened. 2 silhouettes rushed out. They rushed to their respective classrooms. Blake's second class of the semester. He was late again. The first class in the afternoon was a magic spell class. When Blake arrived at the classroom, Professor Flitwick was standing on a stack of books and taking attendance. Chapter 66, Room of Requirement. 2. When Blake just appeared at the door, Professor Flitwick just happened to read Harry Potter's name. Then, he screamed in excitement. Then he fell. Blake ran over. After digging through the pile of books for a while, Only then did he pull Professor Flitwick out of the pile of books. "Professor, are you okay?" "Oh, thank you." Professor Flitwick rubbed his aching waist. He stood up with difficulty. On his forehead, there was a big bump. Obviously, it was when he fell just now. He was hit on the head by a thick book that fell at the same time. Blake took out his shining silver wand. But this time, it was not to smash things. He pointed at the big bump on Flitwick's forehead with his wand. "Heal as before." The next second, Professor Flitwick could no longer feel the pain on his head. In fact, this injury, Blake did not even need to use his wand and chant spells. It could be completely healed. But, in order to get more treasure chests later, he did not want to expose more of his strength. That was why he used his wand and chanted spells. But even so, he still got a gold treasure chest from Professor Flitwick. Oh, what a professional spellcasting gesture. What an excellent healing spell. Child, who did you learn this spellcasting gesture from? Professor Flitwick grabbed Blake's hand. This child was only 11 years old. He already had such a level of spellcasting and talent. What would happen in the future? Genius. He was definitely a genius. Seeing Professor Flitwick grab Blake's hand, and he kept praising him, the little wizards in the classroom began to send bronze treasure chests to Blake again. However, just as he thought before, a person's awesomeness might be numb after seeing it too much. Blake had shocked them too many times in one day, so the drop rate of treasure chests dropped. It might take 2 days. Only then would the drop rate increase. I actually learned from Professor Dumbledore for a while. Blake replied respectfully. "Oh, so it's you?" Professor Flitwick also heard that Professor Dumbledore had adopted a child. This child had such skilled and excellent spellcasting gestures, and such a shocking talent. No wonder even someone like Dumbledore would have the idea of adopting him. Professor Flitwick sighed. If he had met Blake one step earlier, then he would have definitely been tempted. What a pity. Why didn't this child enter Ravenclaw? He was perfectly in line with the image of Ravenclaw. As the Dean of Ravenclaw, Professor Flitwick looked at Blake regretfully. After a while, Professor Flitwick said, all right, go find a seat and sit down. Remember to come earlier next time." Blake's face blushed. Damn it, he thought he could get away with it. He did not expect that Professor Flitwick knew he was late. Blake looked down. He wanted to find a seat. He saw where Wayne and Roger were sitting. Blake was about to go over, but from the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw several empty seats around Hermione. Blake's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? The girls of Gryffindor. They started to isolate Hermione? It was very possible. Hermione was as proud as Cassandra. Only Blake had the talent. Only then could she admit defeat. As for the others, according to Hermione's character, she liked to preach. It would be strange if someone liked to make friends with her. Blake rolled his eyes. Then he sat down next to Hermione. Hermione's body stiffened. Blake did not sit back in Hufflepuff's seat. Instead, he sat directly next to her, looking at the strange gazes of others. Even Hermione felt ashamed. Why are you sitting next to me?" Hermione whispered. Blake happily listened to the system prompt. He got the information of a silver treasure chest. Then he answered, "Because you have an empty seat here." Blake laughed. This is Gryffindor's seat. Under the gaze of the young wizards next to him, Hermione was going crazy. But the professor just said, "He told me to sit anywhere." Blake spread his hands. "I'm just close to you. I don't want to go to Hufflepuff's seat. What's wrong with it?" And the professor said it clearly. "He told me to find a seat anywhere." Haha, I did tell everyone to sit anywhere. You don't have to sit in your respective schools. Sit next to your friends. It's more conducive to the improvement of learning efficiency. Professor Flitwick finished speaking. He quietly winked at Blake. The professor helped him. This made Blake feel embarrassed. He saw Hermione looking down at her spellbook. Blake said, "I didn't see anyone sitting with you. I just want to sit with you." Hermione responded in a low voice. She did not speak again. Indeed, after being isolated, although she was very stubborn, but, in fact, it was very uncomfortable. Who would want to be isolated? During class, she was all alone by his side. Blake did not care about others' opinions. He directly sat over. Although it was very embarrassing, her heart felt a lot better. At least, it proved that she did have some friends. So, even if Hermione actually said that she did not want to, she was still very touched. But, just when Hermione raised her head and wanted to say thank Blake quietly, her expression suddenly changed. Because she smelled a familiar perfume from Blake's body. It was the smell of that girl. Bastard. He was late just now. He must be with that bad woman. Hermione's mood was originally better, but it immediately fell to the bottom again. Ding. Anger detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Blake looked at Hermione. She was fine just now. Why was she suddenly angry? Professor Flitwick's first class. Actually, it was just a theory class. He introduced some methods of holding a magic wand to everyone. There were also some interesting things when he participated in the duel competition, coupled with Professor Flitwick's humorous personality. This theory class. It actually became much more interesting. However, compared to everyone who often smiled, Hermione seemed even more depressed. Until the class was about to end, she did not smile at all. Blake pondered for a moment. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly again. Suddenly, he poked Hermione. "What are you doing?" Hermione whispered. "Hermione, actually, the reason why I was late just now. It's because I've been with Cassandra." Hermione looked at Blake in shock. "Good lord. You guys are not avoiding people anymore, are you?" Chapter 67, Experienced PUA, Pickup Artist Master. 1. If it weren't for the fact that they were still in class, Hermione would have pushed the book on the table directly into Blake's face. "It's fine if you guys were just sneaking around. But now, you're telling me that you guys were alone? What's the meaning of this? Are you provoking me? Or are you demonstrating it to me? Should I congratulate you now? Hermione, do you hate Cassandra? Humph. Can you tell me why? Humph. No one would hate someone for no reason, Li Tianlong said. I don't like her, Hermione said angrily. She's just too arrogant. She's always looking down on others. Yes, she's indeed very talented. But so what? This shouldn't be the reason why she always thinks that she's the best in the world. And she never cares about other people's feelings when she speaks. After hearing Hermione's words, Blake laughed. What are you laughing at? Hermione was about to go crazy because of Blake's laughter. She was so angry. Why is he laughing? What's so funny? So, you're angry because of these reasons? That's why you think she's annoying, right? Blake was still laughing as he spoke. Isn't that enough? Don't you think it's abominable? Hermione looked at Blake fiercely. She was already considering whether to take out the textbook for magic spells right now, and directly smashing this bastard's hateful smiling face. Blake said unhurriedly. So, do you think she looks familiar to you? What do you mean? Hermione glared at Blake fiercely. She's very talented. She's very knowledgeable. Proud. She's arrogant. She always looks down on others. She doesn't care about other people's poisonous tongues when she speaks. As Blake spoke, one word at a time, Hermione's face was getting paler and paler, because she suddenly understood what Blake said. Do you think she looks familiar to you? The meaning of this question. Familiar. It was indeed familiar, because she was almost the same as herself. She was also very talented. She knew a lot of things. She even memorized the textbook. But she was also arrogant. She thought she knew a lot. She liked to preach to others. So she didn't care about other people's feelings when she spoke. So, do you understand? Blake said softly. Hermione's face was pale. Because until now, she just realized. She's the person she hated. So, no wonder she didn't make any friends. Even she hated people like herself. Not to mention the others. Blake added. Actually, you and Cassandra are very similar. Both are equally talented. The same arrogance and conceit. Friends like that are rare. There should have been a lot of common topics between the two of you. Because one of you grew up in a sorcerer's family. Another in a muggle family. But your experiences growing up are different. Since childhood. So, if you can all make a change. If you can realize the multifaceted nature of people in this world. Then you'll find. It's the people you didn't want to associate with before. That are lovely in their own way. You should work to make friends. Not to find an opponent. There is no point of having such a strong opponent. But to make friends. 'Tis good to feel each other's kindness. At this time, after going through Blake's convincing, Hermione was stunned. Hermione's anger had completely disappeared. Instead, it was a sense of guilt. In fact, she had just returned to the dormitory from the dinner party last night. There were witches of the same age who tried to talk to her. But she recalled her answer last night. She was ashamed and embarrassed. It turns out. Am I so annoying? No wonder since the first class today. Everyone has stayed away from me. Even the empty seat next to me. No one wanted to sit there. Hermione suddenly thought of her only friend, Blake, who was still sitting next to her. A huge sense of shame rose in her heart again. He doesn't mind my bad habits. He's willing to admit that he's my friend. What right do I have to be angry at him? Blake, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to continue being my friend. And thank you for reminding me. Now I know what to do in the future. Hermione said softly. Ding. A huge sense of guilt has been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a golden treasure chest. Blake was overjoyed. This time, in addition to wanting to get a treasure chest, he also wanted to enlighten Hermione, so that she would not be isolated. After all, because of his existence, Some interesting butterfly effects had occurred. Hermione, Harry Potter, and Ron Weasley were not familiar enough with each other. In other words, the opportunity for Hermione's personality to change later might also disappear. If he did not remedy it, Hermione might really end up being ostracized. Of course, the most important thing was that he still had to explain it to Hermione, who smelled Cassandra's perfume on him. But now it seemed she probably wouldn't ask about this matter anymore. But of course, things did not go as planned. Just when Blake was secretly rejoicing, Hermione suddenly asked, "But what you told me, what does it have to do with you being with Cassandra and almost being late?" Blake turned his head. He saw Hermione's shining eyes. Why did they talk about it to this extent? She still remembered. However, Blake was an experienced PUA and / pickup artist master. He glanced at Hermione with a little surprise. "Have you forgotten? Like you, she only has one friend, which is me. So, of course, she can only spend time with me. She also wants to find other friends. She has to have friends too. Think about yourself. Other than me, do you have friends? You just have a little habit of preaching. You're hated and isolated just like her. Not to mention your mouth. That can't be said to be annoying. That can be said to be detested even by gods and ghosts." Hermione thought about it carefully. It seemed to be the case. She had personally experienced Cassandra's poisonous tongue. It was much more serious than hers. Hermione pursed her lips. "You two can stay together." Chapter 68. Experienced PUA, Pickup Artist Master. 2. Blake looked at Hermione in shock. "What are you thinking? Can't there be pure friendship between men and women?" "Wait, what do you mean? Are you all lusting after my body?" "TSK. I'm still a child. You female hooligans." Hermione finally couldn't hold back. The book of spells was thrown at him. "Ahem. That's too much. Too much." Professor Flitwick knocked on the table. The first lesson was supposed to be a story. There was nothing much important about it. But these two little children kept whispering. "I'll just pretend that I didn't see anything," Professor Flitwick thought. This was blatant flirting. Professor Flitwick thought. But now, that was a bit too much. "Sorry, Professor. I saw a bug on his face just now. So I actually just wanted to kill that bug." Hermione sincerely apologized to Professor Flitwick. "Hit a bug in his face? You used a book instead? Forget it. Forget it." After the class ended, they moved to the next one. The third class of the afternoon. It was Blake's favorite. The herbal class. However, because they were only in first grade, and it was the first herbal class, so Professor Sprout didn't teach them the actual practice. Instead, she took them to the greenhouse. Then she carefully introduced them to the mushrooms with various magical functions. There were also some strange magical plants. They needed to learn how to cultivate these plants and mushrooms, and to understand their uses. "Who can tell me? What kind of plant is this? What's its effect?" Sprout pointed to a small tree. "Asked the herbal medicine with round leaves." As usual, Hermione swished. Then she raised her hand up high. But Professor Sprout didn't have time to ask Hermione to answer the question, because Blake had also raised his hand. However, he raised his hand while answering the question. "This is white fresh, Professor. It has very strong healing skills." Although Blake answered the question without waiting for Professor Sprout's permission, she felt a little satisfied. This was a student of her own house, and it was the little genius who had embarrassed the Sorting Hat for more than 10 minutes last night. And it was the important reason why Professor McGonagall complained for most of the night. To sum it up in one sentence, this child was active and very eager to learn. Bonus points. Correct answer. 5 points for Hufflepuff. Professor Sprout smiled so much that her eyes narrowed. Hermione glared at Blake indignantly. "This guy actually cheated. Just raise your hand. How could you raise your hand and answer a question?" Blake turned a blind eye to her gaze. He just accepted the silver treasure chest that she contributed. After that, Hermione also learned to be shrewd. After Professor Sprout asked another question, Hermione also raised her hand and answered the question. She had memorized the textbook. Those simple questions couldn't stump her at all. So her answer was naturally correct. Blake was no longer competing with her, but he would always answer after she finished. He raised his hand again to add some knowledge that she missed. Of course, this knowledge was not in the book. Hermione was furious about this. But there was no other way. It wasn't in the textbook. She didn't know where Blake learned this knowledge from. From Professor Sprout's increasingly happy expression. What that guy said was actually all right. Although what Miss Granger said is quite right. But Mr. Green said the extracurricular knowledge that I wanted to tell everyone later. So, Miss Granger won 2 points for Gryffindor. And Mr. Green won 3 points for Hufflepuff. Professor Sprout now found Blake more and more pleasing to the eye. Because the little wizards in Hufflepuff had a kind of laziness that stood aloof from worldly affairs. So they were competing for school points. competing for the school championship. In fact, they weren't very enthusiastic. It couldn't be helped. Most of the talented little wizards wouldn't be assigned to Hufflepuff. Even if the little badgers wanted to compete for the school championship, the chances of winning were also very small. Just answering the questions in class gave them extra points. But now, Professor Sprout swore. This class was the best class that she had ever given extra points. It was also the most justifiable class that she had ever given extra points to her house. It was all because of Blake. And this child's understanding of herbology. Even Professor Sprout was surprised. He waited until the herbal medicine class ended. As expected, Blake was with Professor Sprout. Because of her joyful mood, he had obtained a gold treasure chest. When they left the greenhouse, Hermione was still indignant about Blake's way of earning points. You can't blame me for that. Blake shrugged. I'm Hufflepuff. How can we give the points to Gryffindor? Back at the auditorium, on the 4 long tables, the table was already filled with food. The young wizards began to eat their dinner. After a whole day of classes, everyone was hungry. It was just that Blake was cooking. His roommate, Wayne Hopkins, suddenly leaned over and asked him a question that left him speechless. Do you have a grudge against that girl from Gryffindor? How can you tell that I have a grudge against her? Blake said angrily. They were obviously good friends. Roger Malone also came over. That's not right, brother. I saw you arguing with her the whole afternoon. In the magic class, you kept shooting your mouth off at her. Although I don't know what you said to her, but she was very angry the whole time. She seemed to want to hit you with a book for a long time. Wayne and I were worried about you. And then what happened? We all saw it. Wayne continued. Yeah, then she couldn't take it anymore. She actually threw the magic textbook at your face. And you say you don't have a grudge? Roger continued to shoot his mouth off. And, in the herbal medicine class just now, every time she raised her hand to answer a question, you raised your hand to pick on her. Pick on her, brother. I think. If that's not a grudge, then what's a grudge? Blake was speechless for a while. This was the herbal medicine class. Hermione was the only one who raised her hand to answer the question. Blake raised his hand from the back. Indeed, it seemed like he had been picking on Hermione. But there were other people in Gryffindor who raised their hand to answer the question. Blake sighed. He just wanted to leave a good impression in front of Professor Sprout. And then he just wanted to get a treasure chest. He didn't want to pick on her at all. So this was how he and Hermione looked at each other from the side. Actually, we don't have a grudge. Blake explained to his 2 funny roommates for a long time. Only then did they reluctantly believe him. When Blake finally breathed a sigh of relief, just as he was about to continue eating, the handsome guy who was only 7 to 8 points less handsome than him came again. Cedric sat directly next to him. I heard that you have a grudge against a girl in Gryffindor? So you're so nosy? Chapter 69. Blake. Discussion. How to turn Hufflepuff into Ravenclaw in 1 sentence. 1. Blake had to explain it again in front of Cedric. He wanted to prove that he was just a good boy who comforted a very problematic student. He didn't mean to bully or take revenge of Hermione. He didn't want to cause any trouble either. Cedric was dubious. But she hit you with a book? Blake sighed. You have to believe me, Cedric, even though I don't claim to be a righteous person. When I see something bad, I have to stop it. But many times, it's not that others will understand you just because you have good intentions. More often than not, others will misunderstand you. They will think that you are up to no good. It's also because sometimes good advice is unpleasant to the ear, and it's very likely that I will be opposed. But I am a righteous partner. I can't back down because of setbacks. Look, Miss Granger was isolated on the first day of school. This was very bad. As a righteous partner, I had to persuade her. Persuade her and make her change so that she can make new friends. Help a good student avoid being isolated. Wasn't that good? Cedric sucked in a sharp breath. So, has Miss Granger decided to change because of your persuasion? Blake nodded his head firmly. Yes, that's what she said, but I still have to observe. If she can't do it, I will have to find a way to help her. Even though she might feel uncomfortable. Even if she will beat me up. Cedric was in awe. A good person. This was a pure good person. Even if Blake was misunderstood. Even if he was beaten up. He had to be a righteous partner. To help others selflessly. Too kind. This was the real Hufflepuff spirit. Ding. A touched emotion was detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. However, Cedric found a blind spot in that reason again. Then why did you make things difficult for her in the herbal medicine class? Blake said seriously. This should not be difficult, Cedric. The reason why it's hard for her to make friends. There is a reason. She always thought that she was very smart. No one else can compare to her, so if I can't dampen her spirit in time, then all the persuasion I had to do in my magic spell class will be in vain. Besides, I'm a member of Hufflepuff. How can I bear to look at our dean, Professor Sprout, when she is always giving extra points to students from other houses with a helpless look. Although our chances of winning the school championship competition are very slim, but we, Hufflepuff, have to fight for our dean. When Cedric heard this, his eyes widened. You're right. We've been too lax all these years. I had just felt that there was no need to compete in the school championship competition. I don't really care about the result. But we've all neglected the dean's feelings. It's our fault. Ding. Shame emotion detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Blake's expression didn't change. He just patted Cedric on the shoulder. He said in a sincere and heartfelt manner, without our dean silently carrying the burden for us, we'll move forward. How can it be as peaceful as us little badgers? Cedric was stunned. His nose was running. Then, he nodded his head heavily. I understand. The reason why we can study at Hogwarts leisurely and lazily. It's all because our dean is silently bearing the pressure for us. In a place that we don't know. I don't know how much mockery our dean has endured for us. I'll work hard for Hufflepuff's honor in the future. Not only that, I'll also call on all the little students in the house. We can't be so lazy anymore. I have always heard them all. They all say that we're idiots who joined the school. I didn't care what they said before. But I have just realized it now. The house dean has always been called the director of the stupid school. How uncomfortable is that? We were too selfish in the past. We only thought of ourselves. We want to learn from you, Blake. We want to get rid of this stupid useless title. Don't worry, Blake. You will not fight alone. Me. And all of us. We'll fight for this goal with you. Cedric finished speaking. Then he turned around to spread the idea of struggle to the other Hufflepuff students, listening to the extremely touching emotions in his head. So the reward was a golden treasure chest. Blake was stunned. Cedric, so you actually know how to self-PUA, pick-up artist? Hiss. Wait a minute. What did I want to say? Blake thought for a long time and stood up. Good lord. I just wanted to explain the fact that I had no grudge against Hermione. The last few words were just beautiful words that I only said casually. How come now? It has become encouraging for the whole Hufflepuff house to fight. Not far away. Under Cedric's speech, the little wizards and witches began to shout slogans with their blood boiling. Blake couldn't help but scratch his head for a long time. How did things become like this? After dinner, before 9 o'clock in the evening, it was now free time for the little wizards. They could use this time to finish the homework assigned by the professors during the day. However, because it was the first day of class, except for the homework assigned by Professor McGonagall to practice turning matches into needles, Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout didn't give any homework. However, when Blake passed by the stairs where the library was, he saw a lot of Hufflepuff students pouring into the library in groups. Then he also saw Cedric in the crowd. After Cedric found him, he clenched his fist at him, then bent his arm and paused. It seemed to be saying, "Come on." Blake was completely numb. It seemed that because of his nonsense, it caused the little wizards and witches in the entire Hufflepuff to roll up. Hey, stop rolling up. You're Hufflepuff. Later, Blake received a note from Hagrid. He asked Blake to go to his place for a barbecue in the evening. This was also an appointment yesterday. Blake touched his stomach. It just so happened that he didn't eat much dinner just now. There was still a lot of space in his stomach. However, when he was strolling toward Hagrid's hut, he found Cassandra at the entrance of the auditorium looking for someone. Hello, Cassandra. When Blake passed by, he casually said hello. Then he was caught. Where are you going? Let's go to the room, let's continue. Before she finished her words, then a shocked voice came from the side. The room at noon? You. Continue? Chapter 70. Blake. Discussion, how to turn Hufflepuff into Ravenclaw in one sentence. Hermione looked at the two in disbelief. Huh. Blake sighed in his heart. Could it not be so coincidental? Hermione, what if I said we were just growing herbs in the room? Would you believe it? Hermione sneered. Growing herbs? In a room? Are you sure you think you're speaking human language? Do you even believe it yourself? Blake's body was numb. Don't say it. It was so sudden. Don't say it, Hermione. Even the dogs on the roadside didn't believe it. Who would grow herbs in a room? It was more like a greenhouse. Follow me. At this time, it was useless to explain further. In order to clear himself of suspicion, he had to take one girl in each hand. He pulled the two girls out of the auditorium as fast as he could. He ran quickly toward the 8th floor. Let go of me. However, Blake was so strong. In the end, Cassandra was on the left and Hermione on the right. He ran up the stairs with the two girls in both of his arms. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any professors or classmates on the way. After all, everyone had finished their classes. They rarely appeared in the main building of the teaching building. Or else, Blake would be arrested as a pervert who kidnapped the little witches. They soon arrived at the 8th floor. Both Cassandra and Hermione looked around blankly. The speed was too fast. They had just been led by Blake. What they saw were all afterimages. Until the scene around them settled down. Only then did they realize that they were on the 8th floor. Later, you'll understand that I'm not lying, Blake said. Cassandra just snorted softly. In her opinion, there was no need to scare her at all. But, at noon, she had just been successfully PUA by Blake. She didn't want to lose her temper in front of Blake for the time being. Otherwise, he would say that she was selfish or something later. You're all my friends. It's okay for me to tell you. When I'm not free, you can help me take care of the plants and animals, Blake said as he spoke. He paced back and forth in front of the wall. After a while, a door appeared on the wall. As Hermione stepped into the room of all requirement, she finally understood. When Blake said that, growing herbs in the room, it was actually true. In fact, Blake decided to bring them to the room of all requirements. He wanted them to do it when he was not free. Help him take care of the plants and animals in the room of all requirements. After all, doing experiments or something, he needed an assistant. Or else, it would be so tiring to do it alone. As the saying goes, with a combination of men and women, it was not tiring to work. And these two girls were both geniuses and straight-A students. He used them as assistants. Just right. If he asked Neville, well, although he was very talented in herbology, but using him as an assistant, Blake felt that he might be more worried about it. Hermione looked at the endless plain in the room in shock. How did you guys find this place? It's amazing. I found it by chance. Blake took out a small cloth bag as he spoke. There were a lot of seeds in the bag. They were the ones that Cassandra gave him. Then he and Cassandra, taking out some of these seeds. Then, he changed the environment of the room to accommodate all the requests. And planting these seeds. Blake was working on the side. He explained the situation to Hermione. He briefly explained the reason why he found this place. You're a genius, Blake, Hermione said involuntarily. When Cassandra heard this, she couldn't help curling her lips. At noon, that was what she said. Then, in Blake's system space, there was another golden treasure chest. Appeared. For this, he was still very satisfied. It was getting harder and harder to fool them now. Hermione was shocked. She began to take the initiative to help. After she finally finished her work, she asked, by the way, what are these seeds? Well, they're just some very ordinary poisonous tentacles, mandrake grass, China's biting kale. Wait. Hermione looked at Blake in shock. These things. You'll be expelled if you're found out. In fact, if they were found out, given how dangerous these plants were, it would be more than just an expulsion. If they were dealt with harshly, Blake would most likely be thrown into Azkaban for a few years. After all, most of these plants were prohibited for sale, except for some herbal merchants or institutions who had special cooperation with the Ministry of Magic. Others planted and sold them privately. They were all illegal. If no one knows, I won't be expelled, Blake said softly. But if you're found out, unless you're reported, it's impossible to be found here. Blake and Cassandra stared at Hermione at the same time. Why are you looking at me like that? Do I look like someone who'll report? Blake and Cassandra nodded at the same time. Well, you do. Hermione glared at the two. Blake slowly approached Hermione. After all, you don't want your good friends to be expelled, do you? Hermione. No, I don't want to. Then you'll have to listen to me. Ha. Cassandra laughed. It didn't take much time to plant the herbs. When Blake arrived at Hagrid's hut, it was only about 7 o'clock in the evening. At this time, outside Hagrid's hut, Harry and Ron were already sitting there barbecuing. Oh, you're a little late, Blake. Hagrid quickly discovered Blake's figure. Sorry, something happened, Hagrid. By the way, I brought 2 friends. Sorry, I didn't tell you in advance. Behind him, Hermione and Cassandra were looking at Hagrid's hut curiously. It's okay, Blake. Hagrid waved his hand generously. The more people, the merrier it is, right? Also, I'm happy that you've met new friends. Hagrid wanted Blake to come. A big part of the reason. He wanted to eat the meat Blake barbecued himself. After all, Blake's cooking. It was so delicious that he doubted his life. So, Blake didn't just bring 2 more girls with him. Even if he brought 1 more 8-eyed giant spider, he wouldn't mind. Oh right, Hagrid. There's something I'd like to ask of you. Blake took out an iron cage from the pocket of his hovering cloak. And in the iron cage, a spider that Hagrid was very familiar with was locked inside. You actually brought an 8-eyed giant spider? I think I should go and buy a lottery ticket today. Hagrid immediately thought. Ding. An unexpected emotion was detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Ding. Extreme fear has been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a gold treasure chest. Blake glanced at Ron, whose face had become distorted. Then he remembered. Spiders seemed to be the thing that Ron was most afraid of. It was also the shadow of his childhood. Then the corners of Blake's mouth began to curl up slightly again. Chapter 71. Mrs. Norris, you don't want Filch to know about this, do you? 1. Oh. Where did you get this 8-eyed giant spider? For you, this is a dangerous creature. Hagrid finally said something that was normal for others. Of course. In his eyes, this furry creature that could only grow into a huge monster. It was still a cute little thing. Well, on the train yesterday, Blake told him about the 8-eyed spider's explosion on the Hogwarts Express train yesterday. Then, he told Hagrid about how he was knocked out by a wand. Many people saw it at the time. So Harry and Ron also knew about it. Hagrid asked in surprise, casting a swelling spell on a baby 8-eyed spider? Oh. Isn't that the same as amplifying the destructive power of a naughty brat more than 10 times? No wonder he was so hungry on the train. To be honest, the long time made it expand. But it still consumes food its own physical strength. So it gets hungry very quickly. If it wasn't so hungry at the time, it only wanted to find something suitable quickly and eat it right away. Not attack someone. Blake thought for a moment. He understood immediately. At that time, only the toad Trevor was the right size. It was just enough for the 8-eyed spider to swallow. If the 8-eyed spider was bigger at that time, it would likely choose the little wizards and witches on the train as its primary target. Then, the student named Lee Jordan. Where did he get this 8-eyed spider? This kind of creature is rare. Hagrid put the iron cage aside. He asked casually. Well, he said he caught it on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Before the summer vacation ended this year. The spider was still very small at that time. He just wanted to catch one to scare people. Blake replied. Well. Hagrid pondered for a long time. Then he muttered something vaguely from his mouth. But Blake heard the words in his muffled sentences. Words like, Aragog, appeared. He must have recognized it. This was a descendant of the Aragog. Hey, you don't know. I spent a lot of effort last semester. That's why the Weasley twins. Their friends were also chased out of the Forbidden Forest. But it's okay, Blake. Leave this little guy to me. Hagrid didn't take it to heart. Since he was a descendant of Aragog, all he had to do was to release it back into the Forbidden Forest. Then, it would naturally return to its family. Blake didn't have any objections to this. In fact, he could totally raise this little fellow in the Room of Requirements. But Cassandra was afraid of spiders. She had a serious case of arachnophobia, making her feed and tend to the 8-eyed spider. That was a bit too much. Might as well hand it over to Hagrid. Let it return to the Forbidden Forest. As long as it returned to the Forbidden Forest, then, he wouldn't have to feed it all day. It hunts by itself. They would rejoin the group of giant 8-eyed spiders. This 8-eyed giant spider was still completely tamed by Blake's druid skill, even if it lived in the Forbidden Forest. However, as long as Blake called for it, it would still run to Blake immediately. In that case, Blake had to wait until it got bigger. Blake could still slowly collect its venom. Of course, Blake had another idea. That was to use his druid ability. Strengthen this 8-eyed giant spider. If it could become more powerful, it could conquer more giant 8-eyed spiders. Waiting until it had accumulated enough strength, it was possible to lead the tribe. Attack into the depths of the Forbidden Forest. Take Aragog's position. Become the new king of the giant 8-eyed spider tribe. Ha ha ha. Hey, Blake, why are you laughing so loudly? Hermione hit him on the arm. Oh, I'm sorry. I just remembered something happy. Hermione breathed a sigh of relief at this time. She was worried that Blake wouldn't want to hand over the giant 8-eyed spider. If he kept spiders in the Room of Requirements, then she would be on tenterhooks every time she entered the room. Although she wasn't as afraid of spiders as Cassandra. But this kind of thing was still too ferocious. No girl would like this kind of thing. Then, Blake began to help Hagrid with his work. Barbecue or something. He hadn't eaten enough just now. As Blake put the barbecue on the grill, he sprinkled the seasoning he had just made. Slash. An exaggerated aroma spread out directly. Cassandra and Hermione, who didn't have much appetite. After all, they had eaten dinner. They just wanted to stroll around here. But now, maybe it was like, they could still eat a little? Right. When they smelled the aroma. Even Ron, who was still afraid of the iron cage over there. But now he put his mind on the grill for the time being. After a long while. Come, try my cooking, Blake said. He put the barbecue on a plate. Then he put the plate on the table that Hagrid had specially placed outside the house. Everyone gathered around. Even Cassandra, who had a reserved personality. After smelling the aroma, they couldn't restrain their little hands. They picked up a set of cutlery. It's so delicious. Harry's eyes were wet. What if we can't eat such delicious barbecue in the future? Of course, basically, no one had time to talk. It was really because the barbecue Blake made was too fragrant. Hermione and Cassandra were girls. They didn't have a big appetite. And they had already eaten dinner before they came. Therefore, they stopped after eating a little. Harry didn't eat much either. This guy's eating speed was not any slower than Hagrid's. Blake silently accepted the few silver treasure chests that everyone dropped because his food was too delicious. Then he put his hands behind his back. His fingers twitched. Crack. There was a slight metallic sound. No one cared. Bang. Then, a big hole suddenly appeared in the iron cage. The giant eight-eyed spider rushed out with a whoosh. Wow! No one panicked as much as Ron, because that's where the spider was heading. Ron rolled his eyes. He lay on the ground. Of course, the eight-eyed giant spider didn't do anything to him. It just jumped up. Then it flashed across his face. It ran in the direction of the Forbidden Forest. Ding. Extreme fear has been detected. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. Chapter 72. Mrs. Norris, you don't want Filch to know about this, do you? 2. Blake looked at Ron on the ground in disappointment. When he first saw the eight-eyed giant spider just now, there was a gold treasure chest. Why was he so scared now? It was only a silver treasure. And he fainted when he saw something scary. It was simply too bad. Blake sometimes felt that his luck was too bad. Just like when he was playing a card game. He was supposed to get something. But he always had to get a super big guarantee. Oh, it seems that your transformation spell time is up. Hagrid observed the iron cage that had turned back into a cake box. But don't worry about it. It has returned to the Forbidden Forest. Blake came in front of Ron. Let me have a look. Blake squatted down. He put his hand on Ron's forehead. Traces of green druid power seeped into Ron's forehead. The next second, Ron jumped up with a swoosh. He screamed, "Spider!" Then he jumped into Harry's arms. Harry tried hard to push Ron away from his neck. But this guy was too strong. Like an octopus, he wrapped himself around his body. Harry suspected that this guy was a cunning zero. He was here to take advantage of Harry. Hermione curled her lips. This guy was really timid. Cassandra was also afraid of spiders. But she wouldn't lose her composure to this extent. It's okay. The spider has left. Blake said. The druid's special magic had a strong healing effect. Not only could it heal physical injuries, it could also heal mental injuries. How did Blake know about it? He had just tested it on Ron. After a long time, Ron finally recovered from the panic. I'm sorry, Harry. That spider was really big. Well, I know, Harry said. He couldn't help but take a step back. He was afraid of being hugged by this guy again. Ron stared at Harry with wide eyes. Are you serious when you take half a step back? Are we still good buddies? Are we still good buddies? When they left Hagrid's place, it was already 8:30 in the evening. There were only 30 minutes left before the curfew. After Blake said goodbye to the others, he started to walk to the common room in Hufflepuff. He suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not because he was lost, but because it was a good time to go on a night trip. Going back to the dormitory to sleep? No way. As for the reason for going on a night trip, did he need a reason for going on a night trip? Blake was busy running around today. A lot of things happened. He didn't stop. He carefully toured the castle that he had always wanted to see in his last life. Nah. He was in the mood. Naturally, he would go on a night trip. Tisk. TSK. If only I could turn invisible. Blake muttered to himself. He forgot to practice the illusion spell before. If he had a powerful illusion spell like Dumbledore, then he could do whatever he wanted at Hogwarts. Just as Blake felt a little regretful, he was ready to go back and practice the illusion spell. Suddenly, the cloak, who had transformed into a school uniform, reached out a small blue hand and patted his shoulder. What's the matter? Whoosh! The blue cloak suddenly returned to its original form, and then wrapped it around Blake. Whoosh! Blake found that he was invisible. Damn it! You even have the ability to turn invisible? And this degree of invisibility. An ordinary illusory body curse. Usually if he moved, there would still be some blurry shadows. But now, the cloak's invisibility function was similar to Harry's invisibility cloak. And it was much more convenient than Harry's invisibility cloak. Harry's invisibility cloak. He needed to completely cover his body. Only then could he not reveal any flaws. But Blake's cloak. He just needed to wear it. He could be completely invisible. He didn't need to worry about accidentally revealing his arm, revealing his calf or something. Blake was overjoyed. With such a good help, where else couldn't he go? Then where should I go? Blake pondered for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He already had a goal in his heart. That was Filch's office. Don't underestimate Filch's office. There were a lot of good things there. He didn't know how many little wizards' treasures were stored there. Fred and George, when they were in their first year. The things from more than 10 years ago were all there. What about even longer ago? TSK. The more he thought about it, the more he looked forward to it. Blake did not stop for a moment. He headed straight for Filch's office. Filch's office wasn't hard to find. Soon, it appeared in Blake's line of sight. There was still light inside the window. Blake lightened his footsteps. He slowly walked over. There was no one in the office. Filch was not there. However, The bony Mrs. Norris was squatting on the desk. The cat looked suspiciously in Blake's direction. Over there. There seemed to be an unfamiliar smell. But there was no one in sight. Mrs. Norris slowly jumped off the desk. It walked towards the place where the strange aura came from. Suddenly, Mrs. Norris suddenly felt her body being lifted up by someone. The shocked Mrs. Norris opened her mouth wide. She was about to call Filch over. Blake was an archdruid. How could he give her this chance? He picked up the old cat. Then it was the familiar combo. Catmint plus max level cat petting technique plus druid magic. Before Mrs. Norris could say anything, she almost fainted in Blake's hands. Blake let out a treacherous laugh. After a while, Mrs. Norris was as docile as a kitten. Oh, it was originally a kitten. Then it was okay, Blake said in a low voice. Go and lead Mr. Filch away. Don't come back in an hour. Listen, you must do as I say. After all, you don't want to lose the feeling just now, do you? Meow. After a while, Blake heard Mr. Filch's surprised voice. You found a student on a night trip? On the 8th floor? Great. Take me there. Filch hurried back to his office. He took out a lantern. After locking the door. Then she ran up the stairs, panting heavily. When Filch's voice gradually disappeared, Filch locked office door. It opened with a creak. The lock had already slipped to the other side. Just in case, Blake did not cancel his invisibility. He went straight into Filch's office. Then he saw the box at a glance. There was a sentence written on the box. Confiscated items. High danger. Chapter 73. High-risk items. 1. Blake turned around and closed the door first. He wanted people to think that Filch had left the door locked temporarily. After making sure that no one would disturb him, Blake came to the eye-catching box. He scratched his head. He didn't open the box immediately, because he felt that, after Filch experienced a painful experience of having his home stolen, he would definitely set up some protective measures in this box. After all, Filch was a dud. But he wasn't a fool. Blake took out his custom wand that had been decorated in the shape of a mithril wand. Then he knocked on the box. Then he used some small magic spells that he had learned from Grindelwald. After detecting the mechanism inside, Blake's eyes lit up. Blake softly chanted an incantation. Relax when you've exhausted your strength. Click. Blake suddenly felt a little movement in the box. Then he smiled. This meant that the mechanism inside had been removed by him. For Grindelwald, this was a simple spell, but it was an extremely useful detection magic spell. He just learned it when he was a child for fun. However, now it was just the right time to deal with Filch's little trick. Blake waved his wand again. Then the lid of the box opened automatically. Blake immediately found a small round mirror on the lid of the box. This was a spyglass that could be bought everywhere in Diagon Alley. As long as someone opened this box, the spyglass would frantically call the police. But now, the spyglass seemed to have lost all its magic. There was no reaction. Blake looked at the box. It was an ordinary-looking box. It actually cast the traceless stretch spell. The space inside was much larger than it looked from the outside. 7:30. The things in the box were also miscellaneous. There was a large pile of paper in the middle. Something like a document. It occupied the middle of the box. As for the gaps around the stack of paper items in the middle, there were a lot of strange things. There was a wand that emitted an ominous aura. There was an antique teapot that looked terrible. A big machete. 5 or 6 strange spinning tops. 7 or 8 jars with strange liquids. There were also a lot of things that looked like bombs. There were also a lot of items buried under these things. He couldn't see clearly. He had to flip it. Only then could he see clearly. But Blake wasn't that stupid. How could he touch these things directly with his hands? At least half of the sentence on the outside of the box made sense. That was, highly dangerous. These were confiscated. Items from the previous Hogwarts wizards. If it was only a prank attribute, it would be fine. But if there were any strange curses, he would not be able to escape. Then it would be bad. Blake waved his wand. The stack of paper items that was in the middle floated slowly. On how to eliminate the reproductive isolation between humans and centaurs. That's weird. And an unknown potion formula. A strange spell book. Oh, I can't open it. If I open it, I'll be cursed. You're really something. Blake slowly began to flip through it. In fact, he didn't have high expectations for tonight. After all, there was a reward like the map of the resurrection point. That was something that could only be encountered and not sought. The rest were these. They weren't prank props with curses. They were just strange research papers. Basically, there was no value. Then, Blake began to flip through the surrounding things. However, there were more cursed magic props. He really wanted to be in such a big box. Find something useful. It was basically like looking for a needle in a haystack. Unless he could spend a few days slowly sorting it out. But Mrs. Norris could only buy him an hour. He didn't have that much time to waste on this. Blake searched for a long time. He couldn't find anything valuable in it. Suddenly, The floating cloak that turned into an invisibility cloak suddenly patted him again. Then it stretched out a small hand and pointed at the things in the box. What? You want these things? Blake waved his hand. A wand with an ominous aura flew up. A corner of the floating cloak stretched out from behind Blake. Then, a big mouth suddenly appeared on the corner of the cloak. Then, crack! The wand with a cursed aura was eaten by the floating cloak just like that. Ding! Devoured magical animal materials in an appropriate amount. Ding! The floating cloak's level has increased slightly. Blake's eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. Although these things were all prank items with a cursed aura, other than harming people, they were useless. But these things were on top. In order to maintain the magic effect, when they were made, they more or less carried materials from some magical animals. These things weren't completely useless. At the very least, Blake's floating cloak could devour these things to level up. What? How can there be useless trash? There are only misplaced treasures, Blake said with a smile. Then, Blake's search speed became much faster. Everything that was useless. He threw them all into the big mouth that the floating cloak had transformed into. The floating cloak didn't reject anything. Some things didn't seem to have magical animal materials. It didn't mind either. It just didn't have the information to level up. Soon, Blake found something that should be useful. A time converter that was about to rot. But the outer structure had already rotted. Only the small hourglass in the middle was left. It was completely useless. Blake took out the small hourglass. Then, he threw the things outside into the mouth of the floating cloak. Then, he continued to search. He continued to feed the floating cloak, listening to the system prompt continuously. Blake was very happy, although he didn't find anything particularly useful. But these things were used as cloak food. But it helped the floating cloak to earn a lot of experience points. He was one step closer to the red godly artifact level floating cloak. And these things were all harmful things. There was no use in staying here. And they had to occupy such a big place. He cleared them away himself. He was doing a good deed. So, these things were all destroyed. Blake didn't feel the slightest bit guilty, as the things in the box were all emptied. Burp. The hovering cloak let out a long burp. Ding. The floating cloak has been upgraded to the primary level. Ding. The floating cloak's attributes have increased by 20%. Chapter 74. High-risk items. 2. Blake looked at the floating cloak in surprise. Sure enough, he found something different. There was a red edge on the edge of the cloak, and he could feel it very clearly. The current floating cloak. Its attributes had been greatly improved, because he could clearly feel the significant increase in the magic power in the cloak. Although only a short period of time had passed. But the things in this box were basically fed to the cloak by Blake. Even those paper things were the same. Magic books, miscellaneous papers, and the like. Of course, he only kept one of the pieces of parchment that looked like a map. This was what he found in this large stack of materials. It was the only thing that he found that might be useful. At this time, Filch's breathing could be heard from afar on the stairs. Damn it! You guys ran fast this time. Next time, I must catch you troublemakers. Oh, I really miss the past. I could lock you troublemakers up and hang you on the wall. Blake calmly put the lid back on the empty box. Then he tapped the lid of the box with his wand. He restored the mechanism inside. Then he walked out of Filch's office slowly. He locked the door again. Filch happened to appear at the corner of the stairs. Blake leaned against the wall. Filch continued to walk back, cursing. He walked past Blake, although Blake was only half a meter away from him. But he couldn't see Blake, who was completely invisible. Mrs. Norris meowed in Blake's direction. Then she followed Filch into the office. Filch didn't doubt his cat at all. He just thought that those little bastards ran away too fast. Blake smiled slightly. Then he turned and left. Although there was nothing valuable to him in this wave, he got the chance to upgrade the cloak. He could save a lot of magical animal materials. It was also a great gain. What's more, the hourglass and the map. It should be quite valuable. Blake didn't go anywhere else. He went straight to the common room of Hufflepuff. Until he returned to the door of the common room, the cloak on his body came out of the invisible state, and it changed back to the appearance of the school uniform. At this time, it was not very late. It was only about 11 o'clock. But, usually, there wouldn't be anyone in the lounge at this time. But now, there were also many people studying with books in their hands. Blake walked back to his dorm with a guilty conscience. Just at the door, he heard someone shouting in the dormitory. Wait, bring that over. It might like that. If we give it that, it will definitely let us go. Bang! Oh my, it doesn't like it. Wow, let go. There, not there. Blake sighed. He came back late. He wasn't around. The sniffer dog was playing to its natural instincts. When Blake opened the door, just saw DeBeo. He grabbed Roger's trousers and pulled. He seemed to be trying to pull off the shiny button on the top. Wayne, on the other hand, was busy putting away all his shiny things. The moment Blake stepped through the door, Sniff stopped in his tracks. The two roommates also stopped moving. Sniff threw away the button in his hand. He slipped into Blake's arms. The two roommates also rushed over. Brother. Big brother. DeBeo isn't human. It's bullying us. It's really bullying us. All my pocket money has been robbed. Mine too. It also wants to take the button on my underwear. Why are there buttons on your underwear? Is this the main point of attention? The two roommates were disheveled as they complained to Blake about DeBeo's atrocities. The corners of Blake's mouth rose slightly. Well, this was the destructive power of Sniff. But these should be used against outsiders. How could it be used against its own people? Blake pulled DeBeo out of his arms. Then he put it on the table. Wayne and Roger took 2 steps back as if they had seen a little devil. Is what they said true? DeBeo stood up. It squeaked for a while on its hands and feet. Wayne and Roger looked at this little thing in shock. This little devil. Was it complaining? Is he complaining? But it was clearly bullying others. Could it be that it was complaining about the bad guy? Blake's expression gradually became serious. DeBeo was being stared at closely. Its voice became softer and softer. Finally, it quietly lowered its little head. A pair of small eyes were rolling around. It looked very flustered. Big Brother is very happy that you can help me get treasure chests. But you bullied others without Big Brother's permission. Big Brother is not happy. Big Brother can tell you are very responsible. Big Brother is very angry, and the consequences are very serious. DeBeo stood up anxiously. Squeak, squeak, squeak. They're slandering me. They're slandering me. Blake directly grabbed this little thing. Then he turned it upside down. His fingers kept scratching its little belly. The next moment, ding-ling-dang-lang. A lot of shiny things appeared on the table. It should be the things that DeBeo snatched from Wayne and Roger just now. After nothing could be poured out of its little pocket. DeBeo's little eyes lost their light. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Blake put DeBeo aside. Then he said apologetically, I'm sorry. Blake pulled out his wand. The buttons that Wayne and Roger had broken off. The broken mirror. All of them were repaired. Wayne and Roger looked at the things in their hands that had been repaired as if they were new in shock. You're so powerful. When did you learn this spell? Compared to you, my wand is now a fire stick. Originally, the two of them had some complaints. After all, their unreliable roommate actually raised a sniffer dog. It had tortured them enough tonight. After seeing Blake's methods, they all wanted to learn a thing or two from Blake. Blake was apologizing to them. So he taught them the restoration spell. They would learn this spell sooner or later. So it was okay to teach them in advance. Like Hermione, a straight-A student who previewed in advance. When they entered the school, they were already able to use the restoration spell flexibly. While Wayne and Roger were busy practicing the restoration spell, Blake pulled DeBeo aside and scolded him. After the scolding, Blake said fiercely, I'll take you with me from now on. How can you just harm the 2 people in the dormitory? There's still. Squeak. There was great doubt in DeBeo's little eyes. Chapter 75. System Upgrade. Almighty Blake is born. 1. The night was dark. Wayne and Roger seemed to have fallen asleep. Blake began to count today's harvest. He counted. He found exactly 10 gold treasure chests. Then there were 21 silver treasure chests. 75 bronze treasure chests. In one word, a big harvest. A very bountiful one. The only thing he felt a little regretful about was the wave of wealth and danger that happened during the transformation class in the morning. Professor McGonagall didn't give him a diamond treasure chest as he wished. Or else, the chests dropped today plus the synthesized ones. He could have gotten 2 diamond treasure chests. However, this was just enough to synthesize a diamond treasure chest. It was still good. So it wasn't a complete loss. Blake was about to habitually combine treasure chests. Suddenly, he remembered that he didn't seem to have opened bronze treasure chests consecutively. Although the quality of the skills and items dropped from bronze treasure chests wasn't very high. But there were so many bronze treasure chests. 1 or 2 useful things should have dropped. And bronze treasure chests were the least lacking. What's more, Blake was also a little curious now. In addition to money and skill mastery that bronze treasure chests would drop, what other rewards would appear? System, open a bronze treasure chest for me first. Ding. The system is opening a bronze treasure chest. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining intermediate electrical mastery. What the hell? Electrical mastery? Blake was stunned. Then he suddenly felt that he could repair circuits. It was like he always knew how to. At this time, Blake remembered the first bronze treasure chest he opened before. It was Madame Marion who dropped it. At that time, he opened intermediate cooking mastery. But now it was covered by advanced cooking mastery. Then, Blake had another question. Why did a silver treasure chest open beginner skill mastery? But why could the bronze treasure chest open intermediate skill mastery? Wasn't this a bit unreasonable? System, please open another bronze treasure chest. Ding. Opening a bronze treasure chest for the host. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining intermediate piano mastery. Blake was lying on the bed. He pinched his chin with a serious expression. He suddenly understood. The skills from the bronze treasure chests seemed to be Muggle type. It was a skill that had nothing to do with the magic world. On the other hand, the mastery skill from the silver treasure chest was only at the basic level. However, it was on the magical side. For example, herbology, potioneering, magic wands, and so on. Thinking of this, Blake understood. However, he still wanted to know. Aside from the bronze treasure chest skills, what else could he get? System. Help me open 10 bronze treasure chests consecutively. Ding. Currently opening 10 bronze treasure chests. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining intermediate guitar mastery. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining intermediate fishing proficiency. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a pair of bear slippers. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a platinum ring. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a bottle of cola. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Burger King's secret hamburger. Hiss. What the hell? It was one thing for Blake to obtain skill mastery, even though Blake didn't really need it now. But at the very least, it was an intermediate skill. But what the hell was the ring and the slippers? And there was cola, hamburger, and so on. Blake finally understood at this time. In addition to some ordinary intermediate skills from the bronze treasure chest, there would also be all kinds of strange things. Sometimes, it might be a valuable piece of jewelry, but it might also be a piece of trash. The gap was too big, but it was also good to get a wave of ordinary skills. At that time he would know something about everything, and then there would be an intermediate mastery level. It was very good. After that, he could use these skills to find a way to get more treasure chests from the tools. Just like the cooking proficiency before. Blake didn't know if this could be considered as increasing income and reducing expenditure. Blake thought of this. Without hesitation, he directly opened all the remaining bronze treasure chests. What made him happy was that the drop rate of skill mastery was quite high. So, after opening more than 70 treasure chests, Blake really became an all-rounder who knew a little about everything. A jack of all trades. After all, the intermediate mastery level was already better than the expert level. Blake was still unwilling to give up. He took out the platinum ring and looked at it carefully. He still didn't believe it. The treasure chest would give out useless things. After careful observation, he found some clues. He put the ring back into the system storage. Then he clicked on the ring. Then, he would find a small line of words. It was a very small description. Low-level agility ring. After equipping, it will increase reaction by 0.1%. Blake's eyes widened. Equipment. This was equipment, right? This system treasure chest could also give out equipment? But Blake soon came back to his senses. The blue floating cloak he got. Wasn't it also a piece of equipment? Blake immediately looked at the pair of bear slippers. Low-level speed shoes. After equipping, it will increase movement speed by 0.1%. Even the food-type items that were opened later were different. For example, the bottle of Coke. They all had special effects. The text description was very clear. On the surface, it was a bottle of Coke. But secretly, it was still a bottle of Coke. Ahem. In fact, it was the Coke that could replenish magic power. As for Burger King's secret hamburger, it had the function of quickly replenishing physical strength. After seeing the function of these food rewards, Blake found these food rewards seemed to be more useful than those equipment rewards. After all, the food rewards could restore the status. But the equipment from the bronze treasure chest, the attribute bonus was too low. Then what should I do? It's useless to pile up so much equipment. If I can break it down. Blake paused. He was experienced. He knew deeply. A system without a manual. He had to say the keywords himself. Equipment breakdown. Ding. Opening the equipment breakdown interface. Chapter 76. System upgrade. Almighty Blake is born. 2. Blake. After a series of operations, Blake had only left behind a few pieces of equipment. Everything else was broken down. After the decomposition, Blake obtained some metal materials. And most of them were magical animal materials. If I don't use these materials to make equipment, then I'll have to use them as dog food to upgrade my cloak. Suddenly, Blake paused. I have a lot of the materials. There shouldn't be an equipment manufacturing option in the system, right? Ding. Opening the equipment synthesis option. Ding. The host does not have the blueprint and cannot create any equipment. Ding. The host has unlocked the synthesis and decomposition functions of the system. Ding. The system has begun adding materials and normal equipment as rewards. Blake was speechless as he watched the system activate the upgrade. However, there were also benefits to leveling up. Because there was no blueprint. So Blake had no choice but to turn the option off. He looked at the silver treasure chests. in view of the outstanding performance of the bronze treasure chests. Now, he also wanted to open these silver treasure chests to take a look. And so, system. Open the silver chests. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining elementary black magic proficiency. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 100 potion concoction experience points. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a strand of unicorn tail hair. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 50 milliliters of giant 8-eyed spider venom. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a pair of crocodile shoes. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a necklace. After the silver treasure chests were opened, Blake found that the quality of the rewards was much better than the rewards from the bronze chests. Apart from those expensive materials, there was nothing else. There was also some equipment. After taking a look at the attributes of this equipment, the remaining few pieces of equipment from the bronze chests were thrown in to be broken down. Because of the equipment from the silver treasure chests, their attributes were much better than the bronze ones. Take that pair of leather shoes for example. It was not just a pair of leather shoes. It increased movement speed by 20%, magic defense by 10%, and weight by 30%. Compared to a piece of bronze-ranked equipment, that 0.1% increase in attributes was much stronger than before. Blake happily equipped the few pieces of equipment he had obtained from the silver treasure chest. A watch, a necklace, a ring, a pair of gloves, a pair of glasses. Blake suddenly felt that all of his attributes had increased by a lot. He glanced at his sleeping roommates. Then he sat up quietly. He took out the pair of leather shoes. After putting on the leather shoes that fit just right, he stood up and walked around twice. Then he was surprised to find it. His entire body seemed to have become much lighter. Not bad, not bad. These pieces of equipment were indeed a huge boost to one's combat power. Those with good attributes could be brought by themselves and kept. Those with bad attributes could be directly decomposed. The decomposed materials could be used to upgrade the hovering cloak. It could also be used when a good equipment blueprint was opened. It could be used to create better equipment for himself. It was quite good. He had created a good ecosystem for his treasure chest rewards. Blake walked around for a while. He took off all the equipment. He lay down again. He had opened all the silver treasure chests. Next, it was time to open the gold treasure chests. But it was another 10 gold treasure chests. It was 10 in a row. Or he could directly form the diamond treasure chests. He thought of the magical items from the diamond treasure chests. Blake's heart was itching. Although he also wanted to see what the upgraded gold treasure chests could bring out. But the diamond treasure chest. If he could get another piece of equipment similar to the hovering cloak, or a magic skill similar to the druid's magic skill, wouldn't that increase his strength again? Blake sighed. Gold treasure chests are common, but diamond treasure chests are not. System merge. Then open the diamond treasure chest. Ding. Opening the diamond treasure chest for the host. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the magical version of the love massage skill. Blake looked at the prompt message with a dumbfounded expression. Massage skill. Hiss. This is not a one-man world. This was a very strange skill. The basic principle was, after the enemy was hit by the massage skill, the user's force, it would massage the nerves all over the opponent's body at a subtle frequency, and it would vibrate various glands in the opponent's body. It would secrete. It would make the enemy feel so good that they couldn't stand up. They would lose the ability to move and be at the mercy of others. Ding. The magical version of the skill is triggered by magic. Therefore, whether it was a close combat or a magic attack, it could be activated. After listening to the system prompt, Blake scratched his head. Why did this skill look so strange? Then a scene appeared in Blake's mind. A group of Death Eaters fell in front of Blake. Then he shouted in a trembling voice, "It's so good!" Hiss. Blake shuddered. He couldn't stand it. But this skill was actually very powerful. As long as it hits, no matter what spell was used, it could trigger the effect. With one hit, the enemy would lose the ability to move. It was ridiculously strong. And, most importantly, the corners of Blake's mouth began to curl up slightly again. Who said this skill could only be used on enemies? Ha ha ha. Blake couldn't help but laugh softly. Of course. Blake, who was full of healthy thoughts. He didn't notice at all. Wayne was pretending to be asleep with his head covered. It's over. Boss might be possessed by a ghost. He'll get up and walk around in a while. And then he'll laugh weirdly. It's so creepy. Chapter 77. Blake moved Professor Sprout to tears. 1. Good morning, Professor Sprout. Good morning. On the way to the Hufflepuff common room, every little wizard who met Professor Sprout politely said hello to their dean. Professor Sprout also responded enthusiastically. It was like this every day. In fact, she had to come to the lounge every morning. The strange plants in the common room. She took care of them herself. These plants could emit an aura that made the little wizards feel happy. It had a very strong calming effect. Sometimes even euphoric. It could effectively relieve the little wizard's stress, but it was more difficult to take care of, because she had to do it herself. So Professor Sprout didn't notice that anything was wrong at first, but as more and more young wizards greeted her, she realized that something was wrong. It wasn't that the little wizards in Hufflepuff didn't greet her when they met before, but usually at this time, in the Hufflepuff common room, she rarely met many little wizards in Hufflepuff, because these children, they were very lazy. Unless it was the very last moment, they would never get up for class, and it was only 7 o'clock. For Hogwarts, which had classes start at 9 o'clock. Most of the little wizards and witches were still in bed at this time. What happened today? Was there a festival? Otherwise, why would it be so different? She met so many little wizards from her own house? Could it be that something happened? Professor Sprout was suspicious. She quickly sped up to the Hufflepuff common room. When she opened the door to the common room, when she entered the familiar Hufflepuff common room, Professor Sprout was stunned. What did she see? Usually at this time before, the Hufflepuff common room was basically empty. Only a few house elves were quietly cleaning the house, replenishing the food on the table. But now, the common room was full of people. The little students weren't quietly reading books. They were just gathered together to discuss their homework. The little wizard who just left must have left because there were no more seats in the common room. So they went to the library to study. Otherwise, why would they all have books and quills? Professor Sprout was stunned for a while. Then she wanted to go out and check. She wanted to see if she had gone to the wrong common room. Maybe she ran to the Ravenclaw common room. But this familiar face, this familiar environment. I must have woken up wrongly today. Or I am dreaming now. The little wizards in Hufflepuff are working hard? How could I have such a dream? Oh, if only it was real? Professor Sprout suddenly. When the little wizards in the common room found out that she was there, they all stood and greeted Professor Sprout. She looked at them affectionately. Morning, Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout was startled by the greetings of the young wizards. This is not normal. This is not normal. If this was not a dream. Children, did you do something wrong? Tell me what you did, and I will find a way to help you. A little wizard from Hufflepuff suddenly spoke. Look, it is our dean, our Professor Sprout. I thought that after we made a mistake, your first reaction would be to punish or deduct points. Instead, she wants to help us settle it. Really, Professor Sprout, you are so kind. That's right. Blake was right. Professor Sprout is so kind. Professor Sprout, we were too selfish. Yes, we didn't know you had done so much for us. That's right. People always said that we entered the house because we were stupid. But we didn't feel ashamed, and we didn't want to make progress. We are so sorry. Now you're being ridiculed as well. We can't stand it anymore. We must win this year's school tournament. That's right. Not only the school tournament. We must win the school Quidditch Cup. These were the members of Hufflepuff's Quidditch team. In the last school year, they lost to Slytherin and Gryffindor. They were even almost turned around by Ravenclaw. This year, without any reinforcement since no new students signed up, the chances of winning the championship were still very low. If we continue like this, if we don't work harder, we are going to lose to Slytherin soon. After we lose to Slytherin, we'll lose to Gryffindor soon. When we lose to Ravenclaw. You guys, it will be shameful. The captain angrily scolded the team members for not making progress. Cedric's eyes were red. He roared, Captain, take us with you and charge forward again. In the lounge, the atmosphere of the Hufflepuff wizards instantly became lively. Professor Sprout looked at the lively lounge in a daze. She still didn't understand what was going on. How did it change overnight? Why did these kids become so motivated? And they seemed very grateful to her. Although it was good to be motivated. However, she still had to figure out the reason for this. What's going on? I mean, why did you guys suddenly think of working hard? Cedric, who was holding a broom, came over. Professor. It was Blake's words that reminded us. Cedric relayed Blake's words from the night before. Professor Sprout almost burst into tears. It started when she was in school. Hufflepuff was said to be a school that only idiots would join. Until she became the dean. She was still criticized. Although she was used to being criticized. But who wanted to be looked at with prejudice all the time? When Professor Sprout heard Cedric's words. Without Professor Sprout to carry the burden for us, how could we have a peaceful life? She couldn't help it anymore. Children. You are all good children. Okay. Since we have all made up our minds. Then starting today. Let's show the people from other houses. What is the real Hufflepuff? We have to prove it to them. Hufflepuff is definitely not a house that only idiots will join. Okay. Warm applause resounded through the Hufflepuff common lounge. In Blake's dormitory. When Blake, the initiator of the whole thing, was woken up by this misunderstanding, he was glad. Chapter 78. Blake moved Professor Sprout to tears. 2. Blake looked at the pile of treasure chests that suddenly appeared in the system space and fell into deep thought. Back at the auditorium, in the faculty seats, Professor Sprout was eating breakfast. But her eyes were red. She soon attracted Professor McGonagall's attention. "Pomona, what's wrong with you?" Professor McGonagall asked in surprise. "Nothing, Minerva. I'm just very touched." Touched. That's right. The children in Hufflepuff have suddenly become sensible. What's wrong? Dumbledore also came. He didn't come to the auditorium for breakfast often. He just came once in a while. And checked on the students' condition. He didn't expect to see Professor Sprout with red eyes. When he remembered Blake's occasional naughty behavior, his heart trembled. Did that little guy get into trouble? After all, he was his child. If he got into trouble, as his parent, naturally, he had to help solve it. Is it Blake's fault? Dumbledore asked tentatively. Professor Sprout remembered about Blake. Hufflepuff had finally pulled themselves together. It was all because of Blake's words. And she didn't expect. She had been the house's dean for so many years. No one could truly understand her pain. Yet, a new student could understand her so well. Her efforts were discovered and understood. In an instant, she felt that all her silent efforts over the years were worth it. "Yes," Professor Sprout said. "It's about that child." Dumbledore's chest tightened when he got the answer. Dumbledore didn't know what Sprout was thinking. He just thought that Blake did something out of line. He actually made the professor so angry that she cried? How could this be? At this moment, he was already thinking about what to do. He had to bring this child back to the right path. Suddenly, Dumbledore saw Blake with 2 boys. They walked into the auditorium. "Blake!" Dumbledore shouted seriously. The other little wizards in the auditorium turned to look at the faculty seats. They found that it was Dumbledore who was shouting. They couldn't help but look curiously at Blake, who was walking up. Blake was different from the other students who were rolled up. He just got up. He was wearing the equipment that he just got last night. He felt the increase in his strength. He happily prepared to go to the dining table. He was ready to eat. Then he heard someone calling him. He looked up and saw Dumbledore with a serious face. Blake's heart skipped a beat. Did I do something wrong? But he had done too many bad things yesterday. Even he didn't know which one it was. That might have gotten him into trouble with Dumbledore. When Blake came to the faculty seats, Dumbledore saw the guilty and confused look on his face. He felt that he had guessed it correctly. He sighed. "Blake, do you know what you did? How could you?" "Oh, thank you, Blake. I didn't think that you, a new student at the academy and house, would actually understand me. Cedric told me everything. Now, everyone in Hufflepuff is motivated." "Well, it's all thanks to you. Professor Dumbledore, can I give him extra credit and points?" Dumbledore was stunned. He didn't finish his sentence. After hearing Professor Sprout's words, he knew that he had misunderstood this kid. It seemed that this kid had done something good, and he had moved Professor Sprout to tears. At this time, Blake still didn't know what was going on. It must have been after Cedric's self-promotion last night. It caused a chain reaction. But he didn't expect it. The 2 sentences that he said casually. But it happened to be what Professor Sprout was thinking. Professor Sprout thanked him. But why did Dumbledore ask him to come up? To accept Professor Sprout's gratitude? It can't be, right? Blake looked at Dumbledore in confusion. Then, she noticed his slightly awkward expression. Professor Dumbledore, did you think I was naughty and made the professor cry?" No, I'm just..." "Well, I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do. So, I have to go, Pomona. You can give me extra points for this matter." Dumbledore said and quickly left. "Don't blame Professor Dumbledore. Kid. He just misunderstood the situation." "I see." Professor Sprout glanced at Professor McGonagall. Then he said, "Because of you, all the children in Hufflepuff are working harder. So, I think you should get extra points. Minerva, what do you think?" Professor Sprout said after hearing the conversation. She roughly understood what was happening. Therefore, she had no objection to the bonus points. In fact, if only Gryffindor had a child who could get the students moving, she would definitely give him bonus points. Therefore, she nodded and agreed with Professor Sprout. "Blake, you've won 50 points for Hufflepuff," Professor Sprout said with a smile. Professor McGonagall's mouth twitched. If only these 50 points were added to Gryffindor. Yesterday, Gryffindor deducted 30 points from the Weasley twins. However, Professor McGonagall didn't think that Professor Sprout's reward of 50 points was excessive. This was because Blake had united all the little wizards in Hufflepuff House and made them more motivated. These 50 points were only a small number. It was only the 2nd day of school. So, because of Blake, these 50 points. In the hourglass of the academy. In the hourglass that belonged to Hufflepuff. The diamonds clattered to the ground. In just an instant, Hufflepuff's points had reached first place. This made every little wizard of Hufflepuff who had passed through the hourglass extremely excited. "Our Hufflepuff is the best." With a little effort, they would immediately reach first place. However, everyone saw Blake go to the teacher's seat. Then, Hufflepuff's diamonds rose. Therefore, everyone was guessing. These 50 points must have been earned by Blake. So, when Blake returned to the long table, when he was ready to eat, the little wizards of Hufflepuff at the table were all extremely friendly to him. This was just the second day of school, and the first class of the second day. It was Professor Quirrell, who was possessed by Voldemort, who was in charge. Defense against black magic class. Compared to the excited looks of the other students, Blake was much calmer. Others didn't know Professor Quirrell's teaching level. He knew, so he wasn't looking forward to it at all. However, if Quirrell wanted to hide so smoothly, he would be able to do so. Although Voldemort's condition was very bad. But, the level of the treasure chest that dropped must not be low. Blake thought for a moment. Then, he had an idea in his mind. He decided to have a good meeting with Quirrell. Or rather, it was Voldemort who was possessing Quirrell. Chapter 79, Parental Dispute, 1. Why don't I apologize to that child properly? Dumbledore thought as he sat behind his desk. He smiled awkwardly. After the incident with Tom Riddle, that had already caused him to be a little stressed out. That was why he habitually thought of things in a bad direction. That was why he subconsciously misunderstood Blake. He thought that he had done something bad. But he didn't expect that. Not only did that child not do what he thought, but he actually did a good deed. He inspired most of the children in his entire house to be positive and motivated. He even said something that touched the professor's heart. Such a kind and smart child. And he actually suspected that he had done something bad? Sigh, I'm really getting worse and worse. I should have apologized to him on the spot. Dumbledore shook his head. He had been carefree all his life. Why was he making a mistake for a mere face now? Then, Dumbledore began to think. How could he make it up to that child? Although that child didn't say it. But he knew. It didn't feel good to be wronged. He had to quickly get rid of this bad influence. Otherwise, what if this child refused to do good deeds in the future? Just as Dumbledore was about to get up, he went to find Blake to apologize seriously. An owl suddenly flew in from the window. It dropped a red letter. It then turned around and flew away. When Dumbledore saw the letter, his face froze slightly. A howler letter? He hadn't received a howler letter for a long time. Dumbledore thought for a moment. He realized that he hadn't done anything particularly controversial recently. Who would send him a howler letter? Dumbledore decided to listen. But, of course, he couldn't let the sound of the letter spread. Dumbledore waved his magic wand. A big bubble appeared in the air. The bubble flew over. It enveloped the howling letter that was about to explode. Then, Dumbledore waved his magic wand. He let the envelope open. Gia-la-la-la. The envelope automatically transformed into the shape of a mouth. It began to roar. However, under Dumbledore's spell, the sound of the roar letter was about the same as an ordinary person's voice. But, after hearing the sound of the roaring letter, Dumbledore's face froze. Because, Dumbledore, you old fool. That kid Blake clearly did a good deed for Hufflepuff. But you suspected him of doing bad things? If I had known, I wouldn't have given you the clue about Blake's background. You can't even take good care of Blake. Think about it. Even his basic necessities are being taken care of by my house elf. What did you do? He even cooks for you in your house. Is this what you meant by taking care of him? Also, when going to take the Hogwarts express train, he actually went to the station alone. Don't you know how to send him off personally? Yes, I know you're the principal, and you are very busy. But, do you have to be so busy that you don't even have time to send a child to the train? With your level, you can send him to the train and then use phantom translocation to return to your school. How much time would it take you? You don't know? Even. The house elves reported to me. When Blake was watching other people on the train being sent off by their parents. How he had an envious expression on his face. If he hadn't met a few good friends before entering the school. At that moment, he would have been very depressed. The roaring letter scolded Dumbledore for more than 10 minutes. However, the reason why Dumbledore's face became very bad, it wasn't because the roaring letter scolded him. It was because the person who sent the message to him. It was actually Grindelwald. The Grindelwald who was locked up in Newmungard. It was fine if it was Grindelwald. After all, Dumbledore had long known that he actually was connected on the outside. But since Grindelwald didn't come out himself, it could be considered as fulfilling his end of the bargain. Then sending a letter was within his tolerance. But this had just happened on his side. How did he find out immediately? He even sent him a howler letter that lasted for more than 10 minutes. This meant that it had just happened. Even Dumbledore hadn't returned to the office yet. He had already started recording the howler letter. This proved one point. That Grindelwald had been secretly watching this child all this time. But how? Why was he so concerned about this child? Although this was indeed his bloodline, but Dumbledore didn't believe it, given Blake's personality. He would not do this for a child he had never met. So much effort. Or could it be that this guy still hadn't given up? Could it be that he still had the evil intention of turning this child into a sharp sword in his hands? The more Dumbledore thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. Grindelwald was very good at instigating. What if Blake, that child, was led into a ditch by him in a daze? The more Dumbledore thought about it, the more serious the situation became. He suddenly stood up. Beck, come out. The headmaster's office was silent. Only the portraits of the headmasters on the wall were looking at Dumbledore in surprise. Dumbledore took a deep breath. He tried to speak as calmly as possible. Beck, I know you're at Hogwarts. Come out. I have a message for you to pass on to your old master. Pa! The house elf, Beck, appeared in front of Dumbledore timidly, because he also recognized Blake as his master. In other words, Dumbledore, who had the same bloodline as Blake, could also be considered his master, since he was at Hogwarts, facing Dumbledore's summons. He couldn't refuse. Dumbledore looked at the elf in front of him. Naturally, he knew about it now. Grindelwald knew the news so quickly. It must be this little thing who reported it. Help me relay these words to Grindelwald word for word. Stay out of Blake's matters. I can tolerate you paying attention to that child's growth through the house elf. I can also tolerate you writing to me and giving me advice. Because I admit that you were right in your howler letter. I did do something wrong. But I absolutely can't tolerate you directly interfering with that child's education. Between you and him, you can only communicate through me. You can't touch that child yourself. Dumbledore straightened his body. Beck, am I clear? Yes. Baker nodded. Then go, don't miss a word. Yes, yes. Numungered. Grindelwald angrily threw the notebook in his hand. Bastard. You, Dumbledore, are taking care of the child? Can you manage it? You can't. You don't have that ability, you know that? Chapter 80. Parental Dispute. 2. At this moment, Blake obviously didn't know. Because of him, Dumbledore and Grindelwald started fighting again. The current him was holding a textbook, together with his two roommates. They walked towards the Defense Against Black Magic classroom. DeBeo quietly poked his head out of his pocket. The pocket created by the levitating cloak also came with the traceless stretch spell. It could fit the dog completely. When Blake arrived at the classroom, many people were already seated in the classroom. Hermione was sitting in a chair on the third row. She was seriously studying the Defense Against Black Magic textbook. At this time, Wayne and Roger also discovered Hermione. Bro, said Roger suddenly. This time, do you want to continue comforting that girl? Nonsense. Blake will definitely go. Didn't you see that there's still no one sitting beside that girl? This proves that boss's consolation didn't work. That girl still hasn't made any friends. Our boss is a partner of justice. Of course I won't sit by and watch. Boss, come on. We will support you. After Wayne finished saying a bunch of nonsense, he pulled Roger and ran away. What the F*** CK? Blake wanted to cry but he had no tears. But this nonsense was made up by him last night. He could only blame himself. But, for Blake, whose skin was as thick as a city wall, it was fine to sit directly next to Hermione. Good morning, Hermione. Have you had breakfast? I didn't see you in the auditorium this morning. Hermione raised her head and glanced at Blake angrily. Excuse me, what time did you get up? 8:30. You didn't get up early to prepare the textbook, did you? Hermione said. Of course. I have to prepare first. Otherwise, what if I don't understand what the professor says later? I don't think you need to prepare, because Professor Quirrell will teach it to you again later. Quirrell's teaching style was very simple. As a defense against black magic professor, he would not demonstrate if he could. He would just stutter and read the textbook. He would also only talk about the vampire story he made up, and always try his best to clear his suspicion. Then he would persist until the class was over. He would have then completed his mission. He could even not bring his wand to his class. How do you know? You haven't taken Professor Quirrell's class before. Because someone took it yesterday and I heard it from them. Huh. Hermione suddenly saw DeBeo in Blake's pocket. What's this? DeBeo's cute appearance was very cute and touching. Sure enough, Hermione immediately took it. Oh, this is my pet, DeBeo. Blake said. He took DeBeo out of his pocket. So cute. Can I touch it? Of course. DeBeo sat up. He pointed at Hermione and gestured. Squeak, squeak, squeak. What kind of person are you? You want to touch me too? Blake raised his hand. He pressed it on DeBeo's body. Massage skill. The real skill is called in love horse chicken kill. It is an internet slang term in Chinese that phonetically sounds like the English word massage. In this context, the term horse kill chicken is used to represent the word massage in a humorous or playful way. Squeak, OWO. DeBeo cried over Blake's action. He was so happy that his small eyes rolled back. He fell on the table and couldn't resist anymore. Wow, it's so cute. I touched it. It seems very comfortable with me. As for Blake's movements, Hermione hadn't noticed it. At this moment, DeBeo was so happy that he felt weak all over. DeBeo allowed Hermione to do whatever he wanted. Naturally, he couldn't object anymore. At this moment, the cute DeBeo attracted all the attention of the girls in the classroom. After all, this thing was indeed very cute. When he saw the girls surrounding him, a tear slowly flowed down from the corner of DeBeo's eye. Squeak, boss, you're not human. You're not human. This is how I should be treated. Blake patted DeBeo's head. Thank you for your hard work. Then, he quietly stuffed a gold coin into its paw. DeBeo touched the gold coin. He sat up in a flash. With an excited face, he stuffed the gold coin into his small pocket. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Can't you just give me money next time? DeBeo, who had received the money, changed from its dead fish-like state. It began to act cute crazily on the table. Wow, it's so smart. Ah, it's so furry. It's so soft. Wayne looked at the girls surrounding him with envy and jealousy. Roger, you said I should buy a dog now. Is it too late? What? Do you still want your pants to be buttonless? And quiet. We're going to start class. Professor Quirrell said timidly. It came from outside the door. He looked at everyone and forced a smile. He looked timid. When they saw the professor coming, the girls quickly returned to their seats. However, Hannah moved her textbook over, sitting on the right side of Hermione. This. Sir, please keep your pet away. Quirrell stuttered as he looked at Blake. I'm sorry, Professor. Blake grabbed DeBeo. He stuffed it into the drawer. Kriak, kriak, kriak. Massage skill. Squeak, it feels so good. Then, DeBeo couldn't take it anymore, lying quietly in the drawer. However, Hermione and Hannah would secretly pet it from time to time. DeBeo, who was doing business for money, didn't resist at all. Ahem. Let's start. Today's Black. Defense against Black Magic class. Let's take attendance first. Blake secretly gave Quirrell a thumbs up. Brilliant. Based on the speed at which he stuttered and spoke. If they were to call the names of all the little wizards in the classroom, then 1/3 of the class would be cut off. After taking attendance with great difficulty, Quirrell finally began his lecture. Hermione was very serious at first. Holding a quill, she was ready to take notes at any time. She was also ready to raise her hand to answer questions. But, after a while, she was disappointed. It was the same as what Blake said. Quirrell really began to stutter as he read the textbook. The disappointed Hermione could only put down the quill. She reached into the drawer. She continued to pet DeBeo. She would rather play with DeBeo than listen to him read the textbook. Reading the textbook without any explanation. Plus, Professor Quirrell's strong garlic smell. Everyone in the classroom was in a state of dizziness. After a long time, Quirrell finally finished reading today's textbook. There was still 1/3 of the time left. Blake couldn't help but want to applaud him. This time control. Amazing. Next. In order to explain Black Magic, the danger of living things, let me tell everyone a story that I personally experienced. At that time I went to Africa. A prince there was deeply troubled by zombies. Based on his narration speed, after the class, he might not even be able to finish the whole story, as expected of you. But how could Blake let him do as he wished? Blake suddenly raised her hand. This student, do you have any questions? Blake asked with a look of admiration on her face. Professor Quirrell, you can actually defeat zombies? That's amazing. Can you tell me, how did you defeat the zombies?